Hey everyone. Welcome back for part 2 of What If Naruto Was the Yellow Fang. As always, huge thanks to all of my Patreons. I really wouldn't be able to make any of these videos without your immense support. As always, the rest of the story is already out over on Patreon for you guys along with a couple other stories as well. Anyways, enjoy the video. Chapter 6, The Test Part 2. I can't. Sasuke growled at his response, the red of his Sharingan glowing with rage. Bullshit. Naruto sighed tiredly. You have 1 minute and 30 seconds. Konohamaru glared. So that's it? You're just going to let us leap into the unknown? He snarled when Naruto didn't reply. Answer me, sensei. Slowly shaking his head he replied. The village wants dash. Fuck the village. Who cares about them right now? It's about us. Naruto was about to respond before his eye momentarily widened. The image of a young boy filtered across his mind. He was angry. He didn't care about nothing. After losing all he cared about, living in this world had no meaning. No purpose. Fuck the village. Fuck the elders. Fuck the old man. Fuck them all. All around him trash littered the floor. The empty apartment he was in was a mess. Empty bottles surrounded him, mixed with vomit. The result of an 8-year-old drinking. He held a kunai to his throat in his shaking hands. His cold blue eyes looked up at the man watching him with an indifferent gaze. Aren't you going to try and stop me? He snapped. The man shrugged. Nope. You're nothing but a coward. So go ahead and do it. I'll tell the police that you slipped. Naruto growled at him. You don't understand, Kakashi. I lost everything. The man shrugged again. Your point? Big whoop, you lost your parents, and blah, blah. Shit happens. Wipe your ass and grow up. Snarling like an animal he charged the man. Fuck the village. His kunai struck. Sensei. The shout brought him back to reality. Each face stared up at him, a range of emotions crossing their faces. Kakashi sensei, I can't do it. Try as he may, he couldn't stop the flow of tears coming from his eyes. Through his tears he stared down at the weeping man gagged with ropes, eyes pleading for mercy. The sword in his hand rattled from his shaking hands. You don't have a choice, Naruto. The sound of a sword being drawn made his eyes snap to the man. Raw killing intent rolled off of him in waves. It's either he dies. Or you do. His Sharingan glowed in the darkness. Choose. Choose. He made his choice. Naruto ran a hand through his hair. Glancing up to the trees he shook his head. Fuck it, I might get court-martialed for this, but as you said, Konohamaru, fuck the village. He stooped down to their eye level, meeting each of their gazes. Before he could speak, an Anbu appeared. Naruto Namikaze, you are in direct violatio. He stopped dead as he was hit with a massive killing intent. Before he could utter another sentence, the hard handle of a sword knocked him on his face. The shadow clone waved at the shocked trio before picking up the unconscious man and disappearing into the forest. Turning back to his surprised team he spoke. Listen closely guys, I only have a minute to speak. Meeting each pair of eyes he spoke. You're being asked to kill civilians, maybe innocents, in the name of Konoha. I know how you guys are feeling right now, believe me. But you have to do this if you want to stay on this team. He paused. You do want to stay on this team, right? They nodded slowly. Good. The higher-ups believe your generation is not ready for the life of a shinobi. This is a test to see whether or not you have what it takes to obey and go against everything you have been taught. But sensei, Sakura began, we were taught dash. Do you think they give a fuck what you were taught? Naruto snapped. Seeing her flinch he breathed deeply, lowering his voice. Listen. Just do it, okay? Please. His voice was practically begging. I will be watching but I can't interfere. If you see other teams you are not to interact them. Neither your teammates. Wait, there are others? Sasuke questioned, his eyes wide. Naruto nodded. Yes, mainly the rookie 9. No go. Pushing each of them forward they gave him one last look before venturing inside the village. Running a hand through his hair he breathed deeply, trying to calm his racing heart. Giving a look to their disappearing backs he disappeared with a burst of wind. In the center of the village sat a mid-sized administration village that housed the office of the village leader. Inside a small office filled with many antiques and collections of paintings sat Furito Tsuyoshi, smiling as he stood by the window watching the many inhabitants of Black River. He absently stroked his long white hair as he smirked to himself. Everything was going as expected. Despite Konohagakure's best efforts, word got out about the village killing off citizens of the One King protesters. A protest he himself had started. Just as he had foretold, Konoha would send its dogs running to the source. He had explained to a select few that Konoha would be looking to kill, and they had planned accordingly. 3 figures stood behind him, their faces patiently awaiting their master's orders. Fudo, a large man, crossed his arms over his chest and scratched his wild hair. The other member of the trio absently ran a hand through her glossy black hair. Fuin let a smirk cross her beautiful features, already relishing in the chance to fight some Konoha nin. The last member of the team licked her lips, sensually rubbing her hands along the sides of her body. She couldn't wait to offer her enemies a kiss that they would die for. Their attention focused on the man as he cleared his throat. "It's time. Go and move into position," he ordered. Fudo frowned at his back and awkwardly cleared his throat. Sir?" With his eyes on him, he continued. "Not to seem disrespectful, but what will you be doing?" Kazuma laughed long and hard, his voice causing the trio to step back in fear. "My friend, I will be readying our ace in the hole." He turned back to the window. "These Konoha ninja will never know what hit them," he finished with a dark chuckle. Fuin scoffed. "How is that boy going to fight the?" She stopped dead at his fierce glare, ducking her head in shame. "Do not doubt the power of the QB," he whispered fiercely. "I will break Sora's seal and let him wreak havoc on these fools." He turned his gaze to the window. "Then, he will lead a path of destruction straight to Konoha." He cast a gaze to bodies of the dead Onbu littering his office. "This will be the dawn of new era," he whispered darkly. The 3 teammates all stared hesitantly at each other, eyes moving from one face to another as they awkwardly shuffled their feet. Konohamaru, showing bravery, spoke up first. "Well, I guess we better get going." Sasuke hesitantly nodded. Yeah." Sakura was staring from one face to another before she shivered, gaining their attention. Throwing caution to the wind, she threw her arms around both of them, mashing their faces so close that their cheeks brushed against each other. "Promise me." Her voice was shaken. "And no matter what happens, we'll still be friends." Konohamaru fully wrapped his arms around her. "Of course, Sakura-chan. That's a promise." Sasuke did the same, his face tight with emotion. "I promise." In the few months they had known each other, they had formed an inseparable bond, despite their rough beginnings. Gently bumping heads, she gave both of them a teary smile. "All right. Good luck." They nodded to each other before walking away in separate directions. Sasuke glanced up to house he had stopped at. Scanning through the paper his target held, read, Aiko Noriko. Age 15. Height 5 feet 5 inches. Staring at her picture, he could see she was a beautiful girl. Light brown eyes and dark black hair. She had pretty face with high cheekbones and a small nose. But her file said she wasn't involved. Innocent. Her father was a fierce supporter to the One King protest that she never participated in. Her file read that she didn't even know about the protest. She was usually home alone for most of the day as her single father worked at the Fire Country's capital city. Easing the paper into his pouch, he sighed deeply before he walked up to the front door and knocked. It wasn't long before he heard footsteps and the same face on the picture open the door. "Oh, hello." Her voice was sweet and calm. Glancing at her, he could see she had on a form-fitting kimono that hid a nice figure. Her lush dark hair was held up into long ponytail. She was a few inches taller than him, so he had to tilt his head to meet her gaze. Despite his rising emotions, he managed to smile. "Good evening. My name is Sasuke Uchiha and I'm from Konohagakure under a routine village checkup," his remember the lie the paper had instructed them to use, before he gestured to his headband. "May I come in?" She smiled brilliantly at him. "Oh, you're from Konoha? I always wanted to go there. Please come in." She opened the door, allowing him access. He palmed a kunai and stepped in. She locked the door behind him and directed him to a modest living room. Carefully hiding the blade, he seated himself gracefully. "Thank you for inviting me into your home. I know this visit must be unexpected." Sitting from across from beside him, she smiled. "Oh, I don't mind. We rarely see ninja around these parts." There was silence before she tilted her head at him. "So what brings you to this part of Fire Country, Uchiha-san?" "As I mentioned before, routine inspection, and please just call me Sasuke. No need for formalities." Sasuke gestured a hand. "I'm just here for checkups on the little things. For example, has your village been subject to crimes lately?" She shook her head. "No, most people are friendly out here. Rarely are there any crimes." Sasuke nodded to himself before his grip tightened on his hidden kunai. "What about shinobi presence?" Her eyes drifted in thought before she gave a small shrug. "I see the occasional Konoha shinobi once or twice, but that's it." Again Sasuke just nodded. He flexed his arm, preparing to just slit her throat. "But enough of that, I rarely get a chance to talk to a shinobi, and such a cute one for that matter, she stated, suddenly causing his grip to slacken and his mouth to open in shock. She scooted closer to him, and clasped her hands together, looking all the more innocent. What's it like to be a shinobi? Is life like the ones we see in the movies? Is it all fame and fortune? She fired off her questions excitedly. Sasuke closed his mouth before he fixed her with a blank glance. Like the movies? He questioned. She nodded excitedly. Listen. She shook her head. Oh goodness me. How rude of me not to introduce myself. She held out a hand to him. I'm Aiko Noriko. Shaking his hand, she smiled cutely at him. Nice to meet you, Sasuke-kun. Sasuke nodded. Greetings to you as well. But I'm sorry to say to you that the movies you see highlight absolutely nothing of the life of a shinobi. He trailed off, seeing she hadn't let go of his hand. Blushing, she muttered her apologies, releasing her hold quickly. As I was saying, the life of a shinobi has nothing to do with glamour and fame. We're soldiers, essentially extensions to the whim of our Hokage. Nothing more, nothing less. He recounted Naruto's words. It was rare, but Naruto would sit them down and speak to them about life. Specifically the life they chose to inherit and the weight of it all. And he had to admit he loved their talks, because the blonde jounin was incredibly insightful. Each day was almost like learning a new lesson in philosophy. Straight to the point and blunt, Naruto held nothing back. He absorbed every word. Aiko looked shocked. Oh my, I never knew that. I always thought. She trailed off, looking abashed. Forgive me, Sasuke-kun. That must have been incredibly insulting. Sasuke waved off her apology, wondering why he suddenly felt relaxed in her presence. The kunai in his grip suddenly felt heavy. His mouth moved on its own accord. So what about you? Aiko blushed. Me? What about me? She echoed. He looked at her, not realizing he had pocketed his kunai. I want to know more about you. The words left his mouth before his brain realized it. What the fuck? He raged inside his mind. Why am I acting like this? Aiko blushed again, absently twirling her beautiful dark hair. Her mouth opened, but Sasuke didn't hear any of it. His eyes were utterly entranced by the way her mouth moved, the way her tongue licked her pink lips as she spoke. He swallowed heavily, letting his gaze travel lower to run over her black kimono that highlighted her curves perfectly. His eyes found her generous chest that rose and fell with each breath she took. Finding her face again, he locked gazes with her pretty brown eyes, and he couldn't stop himself as he felt his body begin to gravitate towards her. Focus. He snapped out of his trance as the sound of Naruto's voice reverberated through his mind. Focus is always key. He remembered his sensei's words and growled inside of his mind. Get it the fuck together. Focus, Sasuke. He repeated the line like a mantra inside of his head before he breathed deeply, and his dark gaze found Aiko's blushing face. She could have sworn he was just about to kiss her. Trying to ease the awkwardness, she blurted the first thing that came to mind. Would you like something to drink, Sasuke-kun? How can she be so trusting? So innocent? Did she not suspect a thing? Sasuke nodded stiffly. Yes, please. She smiled before she made her way into the kitchen. Sasuke meanwhile was inwardly cursed before he ran a hand through his hair. Just do it, Sasuke. Do it and walk away. Nodding to himself, he rose from the couch and silently walked into the kitchen, appearing behind her. Palming his kunai, he paused, taking a moment to prepare himself. Aim for the back. Straight for the brain. Quick and painless. His arm lifted to strike before a sound made him freeze. She began to hum to herself. Warming the tea on the stove and mixing ingredients, she began to hum a soft tune. So beautiful, angelic. His mother would always hum when she was in the kitchen. He always loved the sound, the soft melody soothing his aching bones after a long day of training. Suddenly it wasn't Aiko standing before him, but his mother. Clad in her usual black dress and long beautiful dark hair. His arm dropped limply to his side. Focus. The word reverberated in his mind, but the lull of his mother's voice was strong, overbearing the whispers to regain control. Caught in a trance, his other arm stretched out and grasped the silky hair in his fingers like he would always do. The phantom image spun and his mother looked at him with her loving gaze. Sasuke, stop playing with my hair. The image distorted and there was a blushing Aiko looking at him. Ah, Sasuke-kun, why are you touching my hair? Broken out of his trance, he blinked, stepping back from her. Aiko-san, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to dash. She held up her hand, stopping him. No, it's okay, it's alright if you want to touch at my hair, She trailed off, her face redder than a tomato. Sasuke-kun, I think you're really cute. She bit her lip. That's why I kinda invited you in. You like a nice person. He didn't say reply. How could he? She smiled again before she returned to making tea. A warm mug was soon put into his hand. Being bold, she slipped her hand into his and directed him back to the couch. Seated, she sipped her tea before glancing at him. After a while of staring, she pouted. Well, aren't you going to try it? Robotically, he put the mug to his lips and took a sip. It tasted like honey. Sweet. She frowned. Do you like it? Sasuke slowly nodded. She smiled again before she quietly began to hum to herself. Meanwhile, Sasuke stared at her in wonder. How could she be so kind? How could she just be so at ease? He was sent to kill her. And yet she smiled. That damn smile. How he could just sit and stare at that smile. How could he kill her? Just how? Kill. His eye widened at the whisper in his head. What had he been training his whole life for? To kill that man, and now he had the audacity to not even kill a single girl. Rage filled him. Bolting from the chair, he threw the mug against the wall, the sound of it shattering causing Aiko to jump in fright. He began to pace around the room, his breathing harsh, as he wondered why he couldn't just kill her. Brown eyes watched him move back and forth. Calmly resting her half-finished tea on a small coffee table, Aiko rose to her feet. Sasuke-kun. She softly whispered his name. When burning red eyes snapped to her, she flinched. Sasuke tore his eyes from before he continued his pacing, his hands pulling at his hair. He stopped his angry pacing when he came before a large mirror. Staring at his reflection, he saw her image take a hesitant step towards him in the background. Weak. His eyes snapped back to his reflection, only now it wasn't his own image staring back at him. Itachi's face bore an indifferent gaze on him. Pitiful. You don't have the hate. The image scoffed, its gaze turning to one of pity. I wasted my time leaving you alive. With a snarl, he punched the glass, shattering the image. He slapped his bloody hand against the wall, placing his head against the broken mirror. This should have been easy. He thought he could just kill her and be done with it. Simple enough. Kill her and walk away, a true Genin of Konoha. It should have dash. A warm hand settled on his shoulder, halting his thoughts. Sasuke-kun. There was that warm voice of hers. Sasuke felt his heart ache in betrayal. Aiko-san. He began. I'm not who you think I am. Her hand tightened on his shoulder and he allowed himself to be slowly turned around to face her. She was giving him a small smile. You're Sasuke Uchiha, aren't you? The last surviving member of the Uchiha clan. A hand settled on his face. I don't think you could be anyone else. Try as he may, the shaking started and his eyes became bright with unshed tears. His Sharingan twirled on instinct, halting the threatening flow from ever leaving his eyes. His gaze lowered to the ground, the sound of his knuckles cracking, from his tightened fist. She hesitated at first, but then slowly leaned forward and gave him a warm hug. Shh, it's all right, she whispered consolingly, rubbing circles on his back. Sasuke didn't return the embrace. Taking his shaking as a different emotion, she tightened her arms around him, the scent of her body filling his nostrils. Vanilla. So much like his mother. His arms betrayed him as they slowly wrapped around her. How could she dash? Pitiful. His eyes snapped open. How do you expect to kill me, if you can't even take a life? Raw burning rage filled his shaking body. Yes, hate, let hate fuel your strength. His arms tightly wrapped around her, pinning her against his chest. When you possess the same eyes as I do, come before me. His arms pressed against her neck, suffocating her face into chest. Her eyes wide open in shock, Aiko pushed against his chest out of reflex in a futile struggle. Her muffled whimpers filled the empty kitchen as her hands tried with all their strength to force herself out of Sasuke's iron grip. Her eyes burned with tears as she felt her heaving breaths denied the oxygen her lungs demanded. Sharp nails tried to scratch his face, and Sasuke, unflinching, let them cut into his flesh and rip his shirt from her desperate struggles. Her natural instinct of survival was automatically activated and she was doing whatever she could to live. To continue to exist. A hopeless struggle. Her arms were growing weaker by the second. Her whimpers were dying down. His shirt was now wet with tears as her hands grabbed his arms almost pleadingly. She was begging. My foolish little brother. Hatred fueled his veins, the primal urge of the Uchiha passed down through the centuries flooded his system. With a snarl his arms twisted her neck. Snap. The sound was loud as it echoed through the empty kitchen. Her body limply fell from his hands, dropping to its knees, her head having turned a complete 180 with a bone protruding from her neck. The signals from her brain were still being sent to her arms, as they continued to flail wildly. From her throat came a screeching, scratching sound that chilled his bones, before her body dropped lifelessly to the ground. From the position of her head she literally hit the ground face first. Sasuke let out a shuddering breath, his form trembling as he stared down at her lifeless body. Unknowingly, his Sharingan twirled, forming a third Tomoe. Sharper clarity encompassed his vision, granting him the sight to see the final flicker of chakra evaporate from her dead body. He dropped to his knees in front of her, his breathing becoming harsh. "I didn't mean to," he had been angry, filled with rage at his brother's whispers. He never meant to kill her so harshly, so violent. A wet substance hit his hand and he glanced down to find a speck of water slowly trailing down his fingers. His hand slowly came to his face, wiping away the tears he didn't even feel, starting to fall. It had been so long since he had cried. Going so long without this emotion almost seemed alien to him. A hand settled on his shoulder. Glancing to the gloved hand, and then upwards towards Naruto's understanding face, the floodgates opened as tears finally began to fall. He didn't even realize when his face found his sensei's green vest. He didn't even feel the hug that encompassed him. "It's okay, Sasuke," Naruto whispered. "It's okay." He shuddered, before a betraying sound escaped his mouth. Before long his final restraints were broken as his cries filled the silent kitchen. His shaking arms tightened around his sensei as he let out the bottling emotions that he had hidden for so long. Naruto only wrapped his arms around tighter around the boy. Glancing over Sasuke's dark locks at the girl's body, he grimaced. "That was brutal." He inwardly shuddered at the thought that this was only the first kill. His other Genin still had their targets. He glanced down at Sasuke, his whimpers echoing through the empty house. If things were already this bad, he grimaced to think what his other Genin would go through. Sakura sneezed as a chill passed through her body. She wrapped her arms around herself, rubbing at her exposed arms in a vain attempt to warm herself from the chilling breeze that suddenly started to blow. It had already been more than an hour of her walking aimless, searching for her target. Glancing at her picture, she frowned. Takashi Sato. He was a dark-haired boy with big green eyes. His mother worked in the salmon industry of the village. She was one of the workers that had been poisoning the fish and shipping it to Konoha. His file read that his father also worked in the industry but usually worked late hours. Takashi was only 8 years old. The Sato family residence was a supposed water house on the river, so her feet carried her to the large docks of the village. Walking across the shaky piers, she saw water homes all around her, floating steady in the water. All of them had boats beside them docked in the river. Searching for the specific home, she was momentarily distracted by the sound of children. Running past the pink-haired girl, a group of boys raced across the piers before hopping in a nearby boat, their cries of joy and laughter echoing throughout the quiet docks. Following curiously, her feet led her to the boat they had jumped in. It was a large canoe painted ivy leaf symbols. 5 curious eyes met hers when she walked up to canoe. Smiling nervously, she waved a hand. Hi. Do any of you know Takashi Sato?" A blonde-haired boy nodded his head. "Oh, you lookin' for Taka baby? He hangs by Dadock Edge mockin' his toys." His voice was mocking and all the boys shared a laugh. "What a loser." Frowning, she nodded silently and continued her trek across the piers. It was obvious that those kids were bullies. This made the situation already worse. The kid was bullied and not even all that well liked. Great. A seated figure caught her attention and her feet brought her close enough to see a young boy sitting with his feet dangling over the piers and working on something in his hands. Making sure her footsteps were heard, the young boy glanced over his shoulder and frowned at her. He was a red-headed boy, his face round and littered with freckles. Stopping directly beside him, she offered a small smile. "Hi there." Takashi frowned before turning back to the objects in his hand. Walking closer to peer over his shoulder at the object, she paused. It was a wooden boat magnificently designed with patterns of a leaf and even had a small metal mass attached. "Did you make that yourself?" she asked. Pausing his chipping with a small knife, he glanced up to her. "Yeah." He looked away shyly. "Are you here to make fun of me like the others?" Sitting beside the boy, she smiled at him. "No, I'm not here to make fun of you. I'm just here to kill you. That's a really nice boat." He smiled hesitantly her. "You really think so?" he said timidly. "All the other kids call me weird and stuff for making these." Sakura huffed, crossing her arms. "Well, those kids are stupid. You have an amazing talent." The young boy smiled at that, showing her a row of missing teeth. "Thanks, Sakura," she greeted. Her eyebrows rose as the young boy offered a chubby hand. Smiling, she shook it. "I'm Takashi, soon to be super awesome boat builder, and it's nice to meet you, Sakura-chan." She smiled, the carefully practiced expression she had been working on ever since the start of this test. This young boy in front of her was filled with hopes and dreams for the future. He hadn't even begun life yet, he was already destined to die. "Do you want to be my friend, Sakura-chan?" The question surprised the girl before her eyes began to burn with unshed tears. Putting a brave smile on her face, she nodded, earning a shout of joy from the young boy. He abruptly stood, exposing his torn green overalls and worn-out boots. "Come on, Sakura-chan, I have to invite you to my house." Sakura panicked at that, shaking her head. "And no, I'm sorry, Takashi, but I'm going to have to refuse. She should just kill him right here and now." They were on the docks and no one was around. She could just use the running river to hide the body. It would be an easy kill. But at his broken face her resolve weakened. Ignoring the warnings in her head, she gave him a small smile before nodding. "Fine, I'll come with you." Takashi's mood did a 180 as he let out another shout of joy. Ushering her to her feet, he grabbed her hand and took off, running down the pliers. Sakura nearly tripped on her feet, trying to match the young boy's speed. How could such a small boy run so fast? Slowing down, they came across a small water home, which looked like it had seen better days. The young boy pulled out a key and opened the door before inviting her inside. "Pops, I'm home," he announced. Sakura's eyes widened. His father? He was supposed to be working late. Only his mother was to be at home. Funny how she never heard Takashi call out her name, like he did his father. The young boy's answer was in the form of grunt, before footsteps were heard coming from a small living room. A gruff-looking man appeared, idly scratching at his thick goatee. Sakura had to stifle a gag as the smell of alcohol oozed from the man. The drunk took a shot of the bottle in his hand before he pointed a finger at the kunoichi. "Who's the girl?" He glanced at her exotic pink hair. "Are you a whore?" Takashi scowled, his face red with embarrassment. "Dad. This is my new friend Sakura-chan." He turned to the frowning girl, smiling sheepishly. "Sorry about that. This my dad, Akashi." Sakura only nodded in greeting, glancing at the man who had the same features as his son, only he didn't have freckles. Akashi oddly scratched a stain on the black overalls he adorned, downing another gulp of alcohol. He rudely let out a loud burp before turning on his heel and entering the living room. "PFF, whatever." With a sigh, he sat himself back into an armchair in front of an old-looking TV. Takashi tugged on her hand. "Come on, Sakura-chan, I'll show you my room." Their house was hopelessly small. Passing the living room, Sakura could see there was a fridge at the other end and small table, signifying that their living room was also their kitchen. It only took a few steps for them to come up to Takashi's room. He led her inside and Sakura's mouth promptly fell open. His room was filled with countless designs of wooden boats ranging from all sizes. Some were a step above from the one she had seen, adorned with sails and ropes. Some even had miniature metal cannons on them. Her green eyes stared around the room in wonder before they found his smiling face. "Pretty neat, eh? This here is my sanctuary." His smile turned humorless. "Those stupid bullies can't reach me here." Sakura nodded before she felt the stinging sensation of tears. How could she kill this young boy? He was full of such promise, so young and filled with life. Gazing at his innocent dark eyes, her resolve crumbled and a sob escaped her mouth. She tried and failed to muffle the sound by clamping a hand over her mouth. Takashi, seeing her expression, panicked. "Sakura-chan, are you okay? What's wrong?" The young boy tugged on the edge of her red dress before he wrapped his small frame around her. "Don't cry, Sakura-chan. My mommy always used to say a hug could cure tears." Despite her bubbling emotions, she managed a tearful smile. "Your mommy sounds like a good person." Taking a few moments to compose herself, she offered the young boy a thankful smile before she frowned. "Where is your mother, by the way, Takashi?" The young boy untangled himself from her, before he walked towards one of his magnificent designs. "She died, a few weeks ago," he whispered. Reaching into the pockets of his overalls, he pulled out a picture of beautiful dark-haired woman. She was poisoned. His back was to her. It was now or never. Sakura stared at his back, as she silently pulled out kunai in her shaking hands. If she wanted to stay with Team 7, she had to pass this test. She had to, listen. "Just do it, okay? Please." Naruto's voice echoed through her head. Her face turned to one of determination and she silently moved forward till she was behind the boy. She held her kunai forward, pointed at his neck. "You'll murder, you'll steal, rape, bribe, intimidate, seduce, torture and do many, many more." She drew her hand back, kunai poised and ready to strike. All in the name of Konoha." The boy turned around, his gaze tearful before he froze, seeing her the knife in her hand. "Sakura-chan, what are you doing?" Her gaze tearful, Sakura bit back a sob. "Forgive me, Takashi." Before her kunai could strike, the room door flew open and an enraged Takashi barged into the room. Sakura froze wide-eyed at the red-eyed man who snarled at her. "Konoha slut." Before Sakura could react, the bottle the man held in his hand smashed over her head, knocking her to the floor. Using the broken bottle as a makeshift knife, he straddled her waist, pinning her with his weight. He rose the bottle, prepared to stab it in her throat. "No. Stop, Dad." Takashi used the small boat he kept in his pocket and smashed it over his father's head, stunning the man. He continued his blows till the man was forced to drop the broken bottle and used his hands to protect his head. Recovering, he rose his elbow and smashed into Takashi's face, knocking the young boy out. Gaze momentarily softening, he grit his teeth, before his expression became one of rage as he glared down at the stunned Sakura. Feeling vindictive, he wrapped his arms around her throat. Sakura desperately tried to free herself using her arms as an attempt to push the man off of her, but he used his knees and pinned her arms down. Furito-sama was right. He spit in her face, his gaze turning to one of madness. "Konoha would send the dogs. Lucky me I got a bitch." Sakura increased her struggles with all her strength, but the large man kept her pinned with his body weight. One hand was kept around her throat as the other slowly began to run down her body. "Konoha slut. By the time I'm finished with you, you'll be begging for death." His insane smile turned predatory as lowered his face to hers, his alcoholic breath fanning her teary face. "I'm going to handle you right." Sakura let out a scream, trying with all might to get this man off of her. Akashi let out a mocking laugh. "I love it when they scream." He let out a shout of pain as the broken bottle he dropped was stabbed into his shoulder. Takashi jumped on his own father, using his small arms to usher blows to the man's head. "Get off her. Sakura-chan is my friend." Akashi struck wildly, his elbow striking the young boy's nose so hard a sickening crack was heard before the boy limply dropped to ground, his head impacting the ground with a dull thump. His breathing harsh, Akashi reached up and roughly pulled out the broken bottle embedded in his shoulder, wincing at the broken glass. Shuddering in pain, he glanced to his son, seeing a trail of blood flowing from the young boy's nose, quickly forming a pool of blood around him. He shook his head in regret. He never even loved the boy anyways. His gaze turned back to Sakura and he sneered at her horrified gaze, her eyes focused on the unmoving Takashi. "See what you made me do, bitch. I fucking killed my own son. You fucking Konoha Horak." Sakura let out a snarl that chilled the man as he found himself flipped over and pinned under the furious kunoichi. She had used Takashi's timely intervention as a moment to free her arms and gather chakra to her muscles. The kunai she held, her hand struck down on the screaming Akashi. "Wait. Please wait." The knife pierced his throat before being pulled back and slammed into his neck again and again. Flaring arms that had tried to get the young girl off of him dropped limply to the ground. Sakura didn't stop her stabs even as the man stopped moving. The force of her movements caused his blood to splash up on her face, covering her hair and coating her face with the red liquid. She continued her motions, her gaze literally seeing red from her rage. Slick. 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 Her next strike was halted by a gloved hand. Instinctively she struck out with her other hand and the blow was halted just as swiftly as her previous strike. Her green eyes focused on the blank face of Naruto, who stared at her before slowly removing the bloodied kunai from her hands. Her breathing harsh, Sakura cast a confused look to Naruto before her eyes went wide and her gaze turned to body she was straddling. Naruto had to quickly pull her hair out of the way as she puked all over the floor. He held her hair back with one hand, the other patting her back, easing the retching motions of her violent coughs. His single eye focused on the body before the girl and it took every ounce of his training not to wince at the scene. Akashi's face was beyond recognition. His face was split open down the middle, exposing chunks and pieces of his mashed brain, and few pieces of his badly mangled jaw. Said jaw was hanging off the side of his mouth in such a way that Sakura's retching made it move with phantom motions. Pieces of white caught his eye and Naruto could only guess that was what remained of the man's eyes that littered around the room. A piece of his nose was mashed on the wall. Sensing Sakura finally finished her puking, he ushered the girl to her feet, before he winced as the girl threw herself into his arms. Her body racked with sobs as her cries filled the silent room and Naruto consoled the girl with a warm hug. "Sensei." She sniffed. He tried to. She trailed off as another sob escaped her throat. Naruto didn't need her to explain. He had been watching, shivering with rage at the man. Despite being told not to intervene under any circumstances, Akashi would have been decapitated a few seconds later if Sakura had not reversed the situation. Naruto only wrapped his arms tighter around the girl, not minding the blood that stained his mask, as he pushed his face into her hair. "Shh, Sakura," he whispered. He rubbed comforting circles into her back, settling himself to allow the girl to get it out of her system. Her cries soon quieted before the girl passed out in his arms from the emotional strain. Naruto adjusted the girl in his arms, securing one hand under her thigh, and the other under her back, hoisting her against his chest. He gazed blankly at the dead Akashi before his gaze moved to the young boy on the other side of the room. He stared at the scene before his voice rang out in the quiet room. "Come out." It wasn't a request. An Anbu melted out of a dark corner in the room before the Black Ops member walked silently to stand in front of Naruto. "The girl still has to kill her target." Naruto narrowed his eye, but his expression changed as the Anbu member reached up and removed his mask. "But for you, Naruto-senpai, she passed nonetheless." "Tenzu." Naruto greeted. "I'm surprised to see your face here." Tenzu bowed in greeting before his face took on a smirk. "It's been a while, Naruto-senpai. I must say you scared some Anbu by the show you made at the village entrance." Naruto smirked. "But I must also inform you that I go by the name Yamato these days." Naruto scoffed. "Whatever name you go by, you'll still be my underling." He finished with an eye smile. Yamato frowned at that. "Yes, senpai, I haven't forgot the days you bullied me." His eyes narrowed. "You still do?" Naruto let out a laugh. "Hush, you were always too fun to pick on." Yamato tiredly rubbed his temples, remembering the days he had first been introduced to Naruto. Kakashi had been bad enough, but Naruto had spent every second of the day making his life miserable when he had been under his squad. Every day. "Anyways, Yamato, is that boy still alive?" Naruto's voice brought him back to the present. He silently walked to the boy and put his fingers against his pulse. He nodded. "He's still alive, senpai, but it seems he'll soon choke to death from the blood." Indeed, the amount of blood leaking out his nose was slowly dripping into his mouth and forming a small puddle around him. Naruto sighed and was about to speak before Yamato interrupted him. "Don't worry, senpai." He drew his sword. "I'll make it quick and painless." Naruto thanked the man with a nod and disappeared with Sakura and body flicker, leaving Yamato with the young boy. He smirked before his face became blank and turned his attention to the young Takashi. The boy had tried to protect her. Such a shame. His sword flashed and a squelch was heard. Konohamaru walked through the village, scratching his head at the direction he was giving. Never one for directions, he let out a sigh of frustration, looking around the village as the sky darkened. Yep. He was lost. He held up the picture of his target, a boy about his age with short dark blue hair and intense dark eyes. Sora, said to be an orphan that worked for the village leader as a messenger. It read here that those two were awfully close. His reading was interrupted as he felt the ground begin to shake and his eyes went wide as four giant gates emerged from the surrounding the village. Staring in wonder at the large structures, he blinked as a purple barrier formed around the village before solidifying with an ethereal glow. Before he could mouth his surprise at the sight, he was knocked over and sent tumbling to the ground by a sprinting boy. Groaning, he pushed himself up, trying to stop his spinning head. A hand was thrust into his face, before he gratefully accepted it. "I'm sorry." The stranger quickly apologized, helping him to his feet. Konohamaru stood up, dusting himself off before he froze at the boy who had crashed into him. Sora picked up the paper Konohamaru had dropped before he held it in his direction, smiling politely. "My apologies, I was in a rush," and he trailed off, seeing Konohamaru's headband, and then glanced at the paper in his hands. Konohamaru tried to grab the boy, but he threw the paper in his face and took off running down the street. Konohamaru gave chase, cursing on his indecisiveness. The street was empty save for the two boys as they raced down the street. Palming a kunai, Konohamaru threw the blade, but was blocked by the Sora with a triple-bladed claw. Sora followed up with another attack, pushing chakra to his hand, and swiping his palm through the air. Beast-tearing palm. A wave of sharp wind sailed through the air straight to Konohamaru. Cursing, he flashed through hand seals and slapped his palms to the earth. Earth release, mud wall. A wall of earth rose up, blocking the sharp wind attack save for the thin line that stretched across it. Sora smirked at his opponent's move and used the momentary earth wall to power his next move. Focusing his chakra, he let out a shout as demonic claw-like hands stretched out and smashed through the earth wall. Beast-tearing gale palm. Konohamaru, who was behind the wall, fell to the ground before he disappeared in poof of smoke. Eyes wide, Sora turned just in time to receive a blow to the face that launched him through the air before he hit the ground and used his momentum to roll to his feet, wincing. "Damn, that guy hits hard," he thought to himself. He spit out some blood before growling at the young Sarutobi. "Piece of shit, Konoha nin." You screwed yourself the moment you stepped into this village. Focusing his chakra, he shot forward at incredible speed, his claw poised to strike. Flipping out another kunai, Konohamaru engaged the enraged boy, blocking his wild slashes with lethal precision. Sora snarled as the boy danced around him, his movement swift as for every strike he blocked he returned with a slash of his kunai. Sora grit his teeth as a slash nicked his arm, and he roared as struck out with a wide arc of his claw. But before his slash could connect, his arm was caught by his wrist, his claws stopping inches from Konohamaru's shoulder. The Genin struck with his kunai, aimed at his stomach, but his arm was caught, held fast, by the enraged boy. A battle of power ensued between the two as they tried to overpower one another. Konohamaru's face was blank, save for the narrowing of his eye as pushed chakra to his limbs and his kunai began to edge closer to boy's stomach. At the cold feel of metal penetrating his stomach, Sora snarled as chakra exploded off his form. Konohamaru had to bite back a wince as he backpedaled from the boy, saving himself from being cut from the wind chakra that radiated his form. Sora smirked as he focused the chakra to his triple blade claw, extending its reach. With a shout he charged Konohamaru, who flashed through hand seals again and spit out a cloud of smoke that obscured Sora's vision. But before the boy could blow away the smoke, he heard the click of teeth and screamed as the cloud of smoke exploded, setting him on fire. Konohamaru watched dispassionately as the young boy screamed at being burned alive. Seeing death was nothing new to him. Glancing around, he checked to see if anyone would come running from the sound of Sora's scream, but the street was still eerily deserted. Frowning, he turned his attention back to boy. Hearing his scream had quieted as the fire finally burned out. He walked slowly towards the unmoving boy, a kunai held in his hand, and stopped when he came close to him. The black attire the boy wore was completely burned off his form save for his pants. His skin was black and charred, and the smell of burnt flesh made his nose tingle. Nudging him with his foot, Sora's body remained unresponsive. Twirling his kunai, he held it downwards, poised to strike before he froze at the red eyes that snapped open. Not wanting to repeat his same mistake, he struck down as hard as he could, but was blown back the eruption of red chakra that exploded from the burnt boy. Skin rapidly healing, Sora let out a scream of pain as his burns healed right before Konohamaru's astonished eyes. The chakra around Sora bubbled till it formed a chakra cloak, condensing in the shape of a tail with fox ears. What, this chakra, how? Konohamaru whispered. How did this boy have the Kyuubi's chakra? Was he another Jinchuriki as well? His thoughts halted as a familiar dark voice echoed in his head. Kill him. Konohamaru grabbed his head in pain as red chakra began to form around him. Destroy him. No. Fuck off, he shouted as his body was racked with pain. Devour this pretender. He let out a shout of pain as a chakra shroud surrounded him, and like Sora, the red chakra bubbled and condensed into the shape of a tail with fox ears. Kill him. No. Konohamaru let out a feral roar as he was overcome by the power of the Kyuubi's chakra. His form went to all fours, snarling at Sora, who did the same before charging the Jinchuriki. His blow struck Konohamaru but did little to stun the Jinchuriki, who returned the blow tenfold. His blow struck with such force that a ripple raced through the air from impact, and Sora's red form was launched through buildings, leaving a trail of destruction. Konohamaru let out another roar as another tail formed before he took off after the fake container. Outside of the village, a large tent was set up for teams that took SD, serving as recovery for teams that had either passed or failed. Counselors were busy at work talking those select few whose mind had broken under the mental strain of the test. Asuma looked over at screaming Genin with pity before he focused his attention on his own team. Thank Kami that none of you broke, he whispered with a sigh. His team had thankfully passed finding and eliminating their targets before their time ran out. The trio didn't answer him. They were in no mood to. Is this what it truly means to be a shinobi, Asuma-sensei? His gaze found Shikamaru's as the boy silently stared him, awaiting his reply. Puffing on his cigarette, Asuma sighed before scratching his beard. A shinobi is one who endures. He answered the young genius. Self-sacrifice is the way of the shinobi. Shikamaru nodded before casting a glance at the crying Ino, who was using Kuji's shirt as a tissue. The young Amishiki looked like he went through hell. He gritted his teeth, halting the stinging tears. After today, nothing would be the same. Asuma lightly shook his head, before giving a glance to those teams who had suffered. He fixed Kurenai a look of pity as she stood with tears running down her face, flanked by her two Genin, as a screaming Hinata madly chanted as she was sedated by the medics. She had been one of the poor Genin to snap. Kurenai was devastated. Her other Genin had passed killing their targets. Hinata technically did pass, as she managed to kill her target. He knew that Kurenai had lent a hand, But her mind somehow broke and the young girl became a wreck. He glanced around at the other teams, catching the few teams that had passed. Guy was with his team consoling his crying female student. He couldn't remember her name while her other teammates sat stone-faced. His attention was turned to a smiling Albo who looked like he had won the lottery. His team had somehow passed with flying colors. Asuma found it funny that Albo's team couldn't pass the Chunin exams. It was going to be their 7th year try, but they could pass Konoha's SD? That Kabuto kid of his was a strange one. Blonde caught his eye and he turned to see Naruto watching the two members of his team console one another. He heard they both killed their targets brutally. Walking over to Naruto, he stood silently beside him before nodding his head at the two. "Where's Konohamaru?" Naruto didn't answer for a few moments. He just stared at the hugging teammates who silently cried. "He's still out there. The real me is trying to locate him." Asuma nodded at the clone before he puffed on his cigarette. "Do you think he'll pass?" Naruto let a smile come to his face before he lightly shook his head. "It's Konohamaru we're talking about here, that boy." He trailed off and tensed. Asuma frowned at him, looking alert for any signs of danger. "What is it? What's wrong?" He too stopped as he felt it. Soon everyone in the tent tensed up as they felt a wave of terrifying chakra wash over them. "The Kyuubi's chakra." Naruto immediately responded, barking out orders. "Counselors and Genin remain here. Anbu guards remain at your post. All Jounin sensei who can follow, come with me." No one questioned his order, they only nodded as the Jounin took off after the blonde struggling to keep up with his speed. They raced out of the tent, through the dense forest at a heart-pounding pace. After a few moments the familiar sound of running water was heard and they exited a clearing coming before the village. But before they could enter the village they were forced to halt as the ground started to shake and giant gate emerged from the ground in front of the amassed shinobi. "What the hell is that?" Before anyone could respond they felt tremors vibrating through the ground and in the distance they could see 3 more giant gates like the one in front of them, emerge from the ground. Naruto widened his seeing their position. Each of them was at the north, south, east and west sectors of the village. "This is a barrier gate 5 seals technique." His shout caused the amassed ninja to let out mumbles of confusion. Asuma frowned at him. "What's that?" "It's a barrier technique to prevent no wait." His shout wasn't heard by one of the Jounin that moved forward to the village. Before the man could even enter, a purple dome barrier formed over the village and the man couldn't stop himself in time. As soon as he came in contact with the barrier he was set aflame, his screams chilling to the bone, as he was burned alive. Someone acted quickly using a water jutsu and doused the flames. A dark-haired woman rushed to him quickly before she ran green glowing hands along his charred form. Sighing and stopping her jutsu she looked up sadly at the group, shaking her head. Naruto sighed as the amassed group began to curse. "What the fuck? So now no one can either enter or leave? Some Genin are still in there." Naruto lifted his headband exposing his Sharingan eye. He walked towards the barrier before his fist became encased with lightning and the sound of chirping birds filled the air. "Reikiri." His attack struck but the barrier only gave a pulse. He had to hiss, drawing his arm back as it was covered in burns. The medic immediately rushed to help him but he stopped her with a hand. "Don't bother, I'm just a shadow clone." His eyes turned the group. "Everyone, let's try and hit this barrier at a single point with some jutsu." He got nods of agreement before joined the group and flashed through hand seals. Fire release, fireball jutsu. Fire release, dragon flame bomb. Water release, rushing wave. Water release, jet pistol. Wind release, vacuum wave. Wind release, vacuum sphere. Lightning release, electric judgment. Lightning release, shock bolt. Earth release, rock wave. Jutsu rained down on the barrier, each shinobi overloading their jutsu with chakra. After a few moments they cut off the flow of chakra to their attacks, panting at expenditure of energy. When the smoke cleared the barrier remained unscathed from their attacks. Their expressions immediately turned to frustration at the wasted effort. Just how strong was the barrier? Asuma took a minute to collect his breath before he wiped away a trail of sweat. "Well, that was a waste," he drawled. Naruto meanwhile ran a hand through his hair before he tensed again as his chakra began to fluctuate wildly. Both his eyes went wide in alarm. He was sure he just felt 2 sources of Kyuubi chakra. Feeling the gravity of the situation he breathed deeply, catching the attention of those around him before he clasped his hands together and went still. Jounin stared confusedly at his still form. Walking to stand beside Asuma, Albo whispered into his ear. Asuma-san. What's he doing?" Asuma only shrugged in response. "I have no clue." Naruto concentration broke as he felt three powerful signatures closing in on them. Everyone get back. He jumped just in time to avoid the ground that suddenly opened up from his previous position. Out of the barrier, three figures emerged not affected by the barrier's touch and smirked at the amassed group of shinobi. A large male with purple's tattoos on his face flexed his arm, grinning all the while. Oh man, there sure is a lot of them. An arrogant-looking dark-haired woman smirked. I hope they're worthy of a challenge. A beautiful redhead licked her lips sensually in agreement. I can't wait to give them a kiss to die for. Catching Naruto's eye, her blue eyes widened before they narrowed hungrily on his form. Blowing him a kiss, she smirked as he waved back, before letting out a hiss at the elbow he received from Kurenai. Damn, she's hot, and look at that body. He shook his head, clearing his perverted thoughts. This wasn't the time to flirt with the enemy. But seeing her rub her hands sensually along her body made it all the more harder to suppress the inner pervert. Drawing his sword, he pulsed chakra through the blade, making it extend to its normal long length before a hand clasped him on his shoulder. Looking into the steel eyes of Asuma, he rose an eyebrow. We got this, Naruto. He turned his attention to the group. Guy and Kurenai, you stay with me. The rest of you go and find a way to get through this barrier. The group nodded before they branched off, leaving Kurenai and Guy behind. Naruto frowned. You sure? He turned his attention to the enemy shinobi. From the feel of their chakra, they're powerful. Guy gave him a thumbs up. Fear not, Naruto-kun, our flames of youth shall burn these enemies blocking our path. Kurenai shook her head at Guy's antics before her red eyes found his. You're just a clone. One hit and you'd be gone anyway. Hearing the dismissal in her voice, Naruto frowned, marching up into her face. Now look here, Kurenai. If you weren't so hot, I would act. He dispelled, holding his groin as Kurenai slowly lowered her foot. Fuka pouted at the disappearance. Ah, the yellow Fang disappeared. She shook her head. He was such a hottie. Her comrades rolled their eyes at her shameless flirting. The redhead had no shame when it came to guys she found interesting. Focus. Fuin frowned at her. These three are not like the rest that ran with their tail between their legs. Fuka stuck her tongue out at her in response. Fudo just let out a snarl of frustration. Whatever, bitches, I just want to kill some tree huggers. Guy frowned at the large man. I'll take the brute. I'll take the redhead. Asuma immediately responded, watching the way she licked her lips. He let out a shout as Kurenai smacked him in the head before she frowned at the final female. I'll have the last member. Sora's form was smashed into the ground hard. His chakra cloak struggled to protect him from the blows he was receiving, but was slowly being overcome by the power of the real Jinchuriki. He tried to call upon more of the red chakra, to power his form, but as quickly as it came it was absorbed by Konohamaru, whose blows became stronger and stronger. A third tail had already formed and the Jinchuriki was slowly overcoming the fake. They were in the village center, a large crater surrounding them from the force of their battle. It had been brutally one-sided. Sora coughed out blood as he felt the last of his chakra leave him. Who would have thought that he would run into the real Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi? His answer was in the form of fist pounding his head into the dirt so hard he felt his jaw break from the force. Not letting up on his attacks, Konohamaru viciously continued his tremendous blows, causing the crater that formed under Sora's body to grow wider with each hit. He intertwined his hands together and raised them above his head to deliver a finishing blow, but was halted when a golden chain of chakra wrapped around his arms. Konohamaru's feral eyes followed the source of the chain to see it seemingly coming out the arm of his sensei. Naruto, with his Sharingan exposed, narrowed his eye at the chakra cloak enshrouding Konohamaru before his mix matched found the blazing red of the Kyuubis. Konohamaru. Naruto began slowly. Are you in control? He slowly began to walk towards the enraged Jinchuriki, mindful to not make any sudden movements. Konohamaru's red eyes blinked before they momentarily lost their feral look. Sensei, Naruto continued his slow pace, nodding at his recognition. Yes. Using this as a sign, his chain gave a brilliant glow before it slowly began to suppress the Kyuubi's chakra. He momentarily glanced to unconscious boy underneath him, before he focused back on Konohamaru. He would need to use more chains if he wanted to truly suppress the chakra, but for now he was more worried on calming the Jinchuriki down. Konohamaru held his head in pain, giving off a light growl. Sensei, it hurts. It hurts so much. Naruto extended his other arm, letting another golden chain emerge from his wrist before it slowly moved to the Jinchuriki, swaying like a snake, before it wrapped around one of the chakra tails. Okay, Konohamaru. Naruto was beginning to sweat in concentration. I'm going to make the pain go away. Two more chains emerged from his back before they moved forward and ensnared the young Jinchuriki. Acting quickly, Naruto clapped his hands together, focusing his chakra to the chains. Suppress. His other chains gave off a brilliant glow like the first and began to suppress the bubbling red chakra. Konohamaru didn't put up any resistance other than letting out moans of pain as the chakra began to slowly recede. He tensed as he received the memories of his clone and his gaze narrowed. Shaking his head, Naruto dismissed thoughts of spanking Kurenai for later. With his Sharingan twirling, Naruto observed the many veins that covered Konohamaru's body and the way he was tightly coiled. He was in so much pain. But why? The seal was in perfect order. The pinnacle of genius achieved by his father meant to allow the Kyuubi's chakra to slowly mix with Konohamaru's own. But watching as he let out a shout of pain, Naruto knew something was wrong. It looked like wind release, Shakujo twister. Naruto snapped his attention to his right in time to witness a large twister of wind rushing towards him. Cursing, he cut off the flow of chakra to his chains, as he jumped just in the nick of time to avoid the twister as it barreled behind him. The chains were broken apart, cut into pieces by the powerful wind attack. Landing, the broken chain still connected to his form slowly receded, seemingly absorbed back into his body. His glare turned to a figure walking nonchalantly towards him. Clad in battle robes, Furito smirked at him, twirling his Shakujo staff that he had used to send his attack. "I can see that speed of yours is not just a rumor." Kazumu's voice was smug. "Yellow Fang." Naruto's eyes narrowed at the man. "You're Furito Tsuyashi," he stated, earning a laugh from the man. Furito wiped a tear from his eye before he gave Naruto a mocking look. "You Konoha shinobi. The lot of you are so pathetic, I almost pity you." Naruto drew his sword. "Imagine that, the leader of the One King protest appears before me. You saved me the trouble of looking for you." Furito chuckled. "I go by the name Kazuma, my dear boy. I'll make sure to tell your Hokage his spies are pathetic as I pierce his heart." Naruto's Sharingan glowed a menacing red in realization, so you knew the entire time. He glanced up at the purple barrier. "And you set a trap, patiently waiting for us to arrive." Kazuma looked smug. "But of course. Did you think word would not get out about this, SD? And to think the daimyo himself would condone Konoha's actions," he sighed. "Guess I'll have to kill him as well." Naruto blinked at him before he flipped his sword, using it as momentary cane. "Mind telling me what this protest is all about? Sounds to me like you're butthurt over Konoha." His grin became a sneer. "You serve under a king so corrupt that you are blinded by the fact that Konohagakure has become rotten to the core. Your leaders brainwash you with notion of the will of fire that's nothing more than a false ideology used to make you sacrifice your lives for the village that treats you as nothing more than expendable. A carefully crafted lie over the notion of the greater good." He shook his head. "Konoha has become a plague, a cancer to the land of fire. The cure to such a disease is the one true king. There can only be one. The daimyo." He threw his arms wide, and a mad look coming across his face. "I will end the reign of this false king and unite the land of fire under one ruler, one absolute power. I will become king and lead this nation to glory." He pointed to Sora. "That boy is the key to absolute salvation. I will use him to tear a path of destruction straight to Konohagakure and erase it off the face of this earth. I will destroy Konoha." Naruto had listened to his whole monologue quietly, not uttering a word, his blank expression never changing. When the man apparently finished, he sighed. "Megalomaniacs." He shook his head. Easing his sword upright, he readied himself for battle before a roar drew his attention to Konohamaru. The chakra of the nine tails was beginning to act up, and chakra shroud was quickly forming again. "Shit, I need to wrap this up quickly," Naruto thought to himself. "Magnificent. That's the real Kyuubi Jinkyu Ariki, isn't it?" His reply was in the form of Naruto appearing beside him, his sword aimed to chop him in half. Using his staff, Kazuma parried the strike before jumping back to gain some distance. He frowned at his staff, seeing the chip that the blade had caused. He was enforcing it with chakra, so it should have been solid against any blade. His eyes widened as they caught sight of the sword in Naruto's hands. "That's the grasscutter sword. How did you come to possess it?" Naruto's only reply was pointing the sword at him, letting the blade rapidly extend so fast that Kazuma only had time to parry it, wincing as the friction of the sword caused a deeper chip into his staff. "Curse that blade and its sharpness." Naruto suddenly appeared in front of him again, lightning crackling around his fist as he struck forward. The attack pierced him right through his heart before the man began to turn to mud. Naruto frowned at the clone before seeing the real Kazuma make a dash for his sword that he had dropped. Naruto simply waited for the man to get close enough before he raised his hand, causing the blade to rise and levitate towards him. He caught the blade, seeing the man's astonished gaze. Blitzing him, he engaged the man with his sword, sparks flying as metal clashed against metal. All Kazuma could do was block as the powerful strike sent tremors down his arms. At this rate dash. Twop. His staff was cut in half by a powerful strike before Naruto followed up with a kick that sent the man tumbling on the ground. Before Kazuma could even come to a stop, he let out a scream as his arm was impaled to the ground. His wide eyes stared at the blade indented through his wrist before he glanced up at Naruto's emotionless eyes. Wincing through the pain, he grabbed for his three-bladed claw but found his other arm pinned by Naruto's heel. Ice cold, Naruto held out his and focused his chakra as lightning encased his arm. Wasting no time, Naruto struck his hand forward, aiming to pierce right through his. Stop! The blade of Reikiri stopped millimeters from Kazuma's face. So close was the attack that the heat emitting from the sparks began to burn his nose and mouth. Drawing his arm back, but not cutting off the flow of chakra to his arm, Naruto's gaze drifted to the desperate voice, finding the pleading eyes of Sora. His face was badly mangled and his arm was broken, as he desperately tried to crawl towards them. Behind him, Konohamaru was letting out snarls as the chakra rapidly continued to grow. Please, don't kill him. Tears ran down the boy's face, as he continued his hopeless trek despite the pain he was in. He's all I have left. Naruto's Sharingan turned from one face to the other before realization struck. Ah, you're the boy's father. Focusing on the man's face, he frowned, pointing his lighting blade at the man. Why do I sense the Kyuubi's chakra coming from that boy? Last time I checked, there was only one Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Kazuma only smirked, not caring he was centimeters from death. Their many was to harness the power of a tailed beast. His gaze turned defiant. Your father turned the Genin into a Jinchuriki. Funny how he wasn't man enough to use his own son. Before the man could blink, a lightning-covered fist pierced his head. The force of the attack caused an explosion from impact, sent dust and debris flying through the air. The man could have lived for a few more minutes, but he just had to mention his father. Sora screamed as he witnessed Naruto withdraw his bloody hand from whatever remained of Kazuma's head before his eyes focused on him. Stepping out of the crater he had made, Naruto fired up another Reikiri as he slowly began to walk towards Sora. He had to kill this boy. If word got back to Konoha that there was someone else that contained the Kyuubi's power, Konoha would start a war. Reaching the crying boy, Naruto stared down at him with a momentary gaze of pity. Sora didn't even register his presence, his wide eyes locked onto the dead body of his father. Why you killed him? Naruto momentarily glanced at Kazuma's body before his eyes flickered back to Sora. Yes, I did. His voice was as emotionless as his gaze as the lightning encasing his arm began to spark wildly. Eyes not showing a shred of remorse, Naruto drew his hand back, preparing his Reikiri. It would be quick, clean and painless. I'll kill you. Sora kept his attention to his dead father as the lightning attack came ever closer to his face. I'll kill you. He could feel his hair stand on end from its proximity. I'll kill you. Red chakra exploded from his form, knocking Naruto off his feet. A shockwave resounded through the village as a beam of light shot out from the enraged false Jinchuriki. Wincing, Naruto jumped to his feet in time to see six tails of chakra swirl menacingly behind the boy. Crouched down like an animal, a dark red chakra cloak took over his form, mixed with a skeleton hanging above attached by chakra ligaments. Where his eyes were supposed to be, were pools of white. His mouth opened wide, letting out a roar of pure chakra that caused Naruto to reinforce his feet with chakra to stick the ground, lest be blown away. Another roar came from behind him and he turned to see Konohamaru enter a four-tailed state similar to Sora's. Cursing as he realized he was in between the two, Naruto clasped his hands together and began to focus his chakra. The wind picked up, blowing harshly as a tremendous pressure filled the air. The two Jinchuriki shifted as Naruto's powerful chakra bared down on them before they snarled, charging at him with incredible speed. Naruto slowly undid his clasped hands, a tiny ball of chakra seemingly hovering in the center of his palms. The ball grew larger in size before it formed a perfect sphere of rapidly spinning chakra. It glowed a brilliant blue, giving a distinct hum as lighting condensed around its form. The color changed to that of a pure white and the hum began to sound a mix between birds chirping. He shifted his attention, focusing on the two Jinchuriki. He waited till they were close enough before he destabilized the chakra of the rotating orb just as they were upon his form. Rosin bolt. He slammed his hands together. Omake, Yamato's first day. And who might you be? The young 14-year-old glanced up at him with his dual gaze. How a young boy could look so intimidating he would never know. Yamato offered a stiff salute, tucking one arm behind his back, in perfect military protocol. Code name Tenzu, Ninja Registration 010992 reporting for Onbu Squad Sigma, under the leadership of Captain Namikaze, reporting for duty. Sir. Naruto rose an eye at the man, no doubt hearing about the fierce Onbu who had inherited the first Hokage's famed wood release. Tenzue? He turned to his squadmates. Yu Gao-chan, what do you think of this guy? Cat scoffed. Sounds like a douche. Reidu ran disinterested eyes over his form. Looks like he's constipated. Yamato's face didn't change, but the tightening of his jaw told them he was insulted. How far? Yamato blinked at the young captain before he raised an eyebrow. Pardon? A few inches? Naruto continued like he never heard him. 5, 10? All the way in? Yamato frowned. I have no idea what you're talking about. Naruto rose an eyebrow. I'm talking about how far did the Hokage shove his foot in your ass to make you look so stiff? I mean, you are his personal bitch, right? Yamato's mouth dropped open. What? Come now, no need to be shy. You're a sheep. Yamato sputtered. Wah. He says go, you say how fast? He says jump, you say how high? He says bend over, you say how low? He says open your mouth, you say. Thump. Sir, he fainted, Cat sighed. That's the third one this week. Chapter 7, The Test Part 3. Fuen choked on her own blood as she stared with wide eyes at the indifferent Jounin in front of her. She futilely grabbed her throat in a vain attempt to stem the rushing liquid gushing out of her throat. Wordlessly she dropped to her knees, her fine dress reduced to tatters. She still managed to sneer in her final moments and gurgled out a curse at her cold-hearted killer. Kurenai gaze bore indifference as she gripped the bloody kunai in her hand, and with a flick of her wrist, the knife sailed through the air and buried itself with a thump, sinking to the handle into the head of the dying woman. Fuen's eyes were still wide open as slowly dropped backwards, her head hitting the dirt, as her body bent at an unnatural angle from its previous position. With a sigh, Kurenai let out a tired breath and slowly nursed her wounded shoulder. Blood dripped from the injured wound, staining her dress in its crimson color. She dispassionately watched the rapidly cooling body, a frown marring her beautiful face. For someone that reveled in strategy and traps, Fuen's arrogance was what led to her downfall. She wasn't all that strong other than having some powerful earth jutsu, but with a timely genjutsu she had gotten the slip on the arrogant woman and slit her throat. Though in the process, the woman had managed to get in a lucky swipe with a kunai and nicked her shoulder. The bitch. Feeling an incoming chakra source, she tensed before relaxing her body as a familiar green leotard appeared in swirl of leaves. Mito Guy looked relatively unharmed save for just looking a little tired. Clad over his shoulder was the large unmoving form of Fudo. Guy offered a wide smile in greeting but quickly became alarmed seeing the red stain on her shoulder. He promptly dropped the large body and appeared in front of her before she could blink. Kurenai-chan. You are wounded. Did your ghastly opponent prove too much for the flames of your youth? She sighed painfully as she promptly began to ignore Guy as he began to fuss over her. Glancing over his shoulder, she noticed the unnatural angle the neck of Fudo was bent in, and deduced the man had suffered a broken neck. Looking closer she could see his face was sunken in with an indent shaped almost like a fist. Glancing at Guy she saw the man was still spouting nonsense. But fear not. This wound in battle shows that your flames of youth burn all the more brighter. She cut him off as she slapped a hand over his mouth, effectively silencing him. Satisfied that the man was quiet, she removed her hand and gestured to the body that he dropped. How did you deal with the big guy? She questioned. Guy briefly turned to the man before he fixated her one of his stupidly wide grins and poised himself in his ridiculous pose. Ah! That brute was no match for the green beast. My flames of youth burned brighter than the morning sun. His diamond hard skin proved ineffective for the flames of my morning peacock. He offered her thumbs up, finishing his explanation with a wink, smiling with teeth so white they gave a proverbial ping. Kurenai just stared silently for a few moments before she just shook her head and lightly giggled at his antics. She lightly patted his grinning cheek before she gestured to her wounded shoulder. Do you mind wrapping this for me, please? I don't have any medical equipment on me. Guy grinned and wordlessly nodded, gesturing for her to turn around. She tried to lift her hand to her hair to move it but let out a hiss as the movement riled her wound. Being the gentleman that he was, he lightly gripped her hair in a makeshift ponytail, moving the ebony locks out of the way. Using her other arm she gripped her hair and patiently waited as Guy took out some bandages. Tightly wrapping the wound and lifting her other arm a bit, to wrap it securely, Guy gave her a pat on the back when he finished. All done, Kurenai-chan. The wound will hold for now, but you should make one of our lovely medics heal that for you. She let her hair fall down her back, lightly shaking her head, tossing the long locks. Rolling her injured shoulder, she nodded before she turned to grinning Genin. "Thanks, guy," she offered sweetly. The green beast merely gave her his nice guy pose in reply, causing her to roll her eyes again. Glancing at the surrounding area, she frowned. "Have you heard from Asuma?" Guy scratched his chin before shaking his head. "No. I think he still deals with that red-haired vixen." A perfectly manicured eyebrow raised. "Vixen?" Guy grinned, oblivious to the rising ire of the red-eyed woman. "Indeed. Though an enemy, that woman Fuka, I believe, is a deadly seductress of men." He frowned. "I fear Asuma-kun might have fell prey to her deadly charms." Feeling her glare on him, he sheepishly backpedaled. "Not that I don't believe he would, when he is such a lovely woman as yourself, Kurenai-chan," he offered with a careful smile. Before she could reply, the person of her internally ire appeared in swirl of leaves. Form singed and breathing harsh, Asuma stumbled into the clearing the two Jounin inhibited. He nearly dropped to his knees as he trudged in front of them, looking worse for wear. Leaning on his knees for support, he offered them a tired smile and greeting before he promptly dropped on his rear. Feeling an angry glare on his form, he lifted his face to meet Kurenai's glowing red eyes. Giving a look of confusion, he raised an eyebrow. "What?" She wordlessly pointed to his form. Asuma blinked before he gestured to the object in his hand. "This?" He raised a clump of bright red hair. "Oh, this is just a trophy. That woman was a tough one. Can you believe that she could use all 5 elements?" He let out a whistle. "She was quite the challenge," he let out a hiss, grabbing his shin in pain. "What the hell was that for?" he bit out. Kurenai lowered her foot before gesturing to his face. "I wasn't talking about that, you idiot." Her eyes narrowed at him. "Why do you have lipstick on your lips?" She folded her arms under her impressive bust. "Oh." Asuma inwardly squirmed under her red gaze. Wiping his lips and glancing at his fingers, he could see leftover residue of the cherry-flavored lipstick Fuka had left on his lips. Shuddering at the realization he had been caught red-handed, he turned to glance to Guy for help but saw the Jounin had his back turned, his gaze focused on the particular scenery, having found the trees shifting in the wind interesting at the moment. Thinking quickly, he had to salvage the situation. Dropping the clump of hair and rising on shaky legs, he gave a sheepish grin, holding his hands out in a placating manner. "Ha ha, funny you should mention that, Kurenai-chan. You see, the woman had a particular jutsu that she used in the form of a kiss that sucks the chakra out of her victim. I had to resort dash." He stopped at the open palm that was raised. "Wait 1 second, the tone of her voice caused his spine to crawl in fear. That woman," she gestured to the red hair on the ground, "had a jutsu that sucks chakra out of her victims in the form of a kiss?" The incredulous in her tone was palpable. "And you fell for such a jutsu? A seasoned veteran, falling to the charms of a kiss?" Asuma stuttered in response. It's not like that. I was overwhelmed by her jutsu and she trapped me. I thought she was going to finish me, but all she did was kiss me, and I felt my chakra being drained." Her glare didn't let up. "And?" "I managed to substitute myself in the nick of time and surprised her. I found out her weakness was her hair, and I scalped her with my chakra blades. It was in the fit of desperation." He was low in chakra and he struck out wildly, and managed to scalp her noggin clean off. When she still continued her glare, he let out a whimper. "Believe me, it's not like I wanted to be kissed to death. Thinking about all the ways of dying, going out with a kiss wouldn't be so bad." He mistakenly grinned. "Though, that wouldn't be so bad." His eyes widened when he realized the words that left his mouth. The only warning he got was Kurenai's furious form rocketing a slap to his head that made him twirl before he fell flat on his face. "Ass," she shouted as she stomped off. "You can sleep in your own bed for the next month." She called over her shoulder as she disappeared in a body flicker. Asuma only groaned as he rolled on his back, nursing the red handprint on his face. Seeing a shadow over his form, he looked up to see Guy's understanding face. Taking the hand that was offered, he was hauled up to his feet, strong hands lightly dusting off the dust that had accumulated on his vest. There Asuma-kun. Kurenai-chan will soon come around. But I advise being a little more subtle next time." Asuma nodded miserably, nursing his face. "Shit, that hurt." Rolling his tongue, he let out a groan. "I tasted blood with that one." Guy let out a hearty laugh. "Indeed. An angry woman is a dangerous woman." Clapping a hand on his back, he gestured to space the angry woman had left. "Now come. We must return to the village at once. I fear Naruto-kun may be in a bit of dash." Both Jounin shuddered as they felt a rapid chakra spike. Seconds later, a large pulse of lighting seeming to come from the village branched out in all directions. Moving fast, The wave of lighting rapidly expanded till it phased through the two Jounin, momentarily causing their limbs to go numb before it evaporated into the air. Wondering what the hell that was, the question died on Asuma's lips as he was pushed to ground by Guy in the nick of time as even larger and far more destructive pulse of lightning thundered across the ground, leveling everything in its wake. Both Jounin shuddered as the wave swept over them and lightly shocked their forms. Waiting till the deadly wave had safely passed, Guy raised his head from the dirt. Glancing around, he could see that the surrounding landscape was charred and leveled. In the direction of the village he could see the beginnings of a large crater. Groaning as he raised himself to his feet, he lightly dusted himself off, before frowning and fingering the top of his head. His familiar bowl-cut hair was standing on end in complete disarray. Hearing a groan, he witnessed Asuma slowly raising himself up, his singed form in the same condition as his. Scratching his now spiky hair, Asuma cursed. What the fuck was that? Before Guy could reply, he felt a familiar incoming chakra source, and both Jounin had to immediately bite back their grins as Kurenai appeared. Her normally long wavy black hair was standing rigid on end, sticking straight up in the air. With a growl she stomped up to the two. What was that? She seethed. When both of them just stared at her, she snarled. What? Seeing Asuma immediately look away, hiding his grin, Guy schooled his face, biting down the laugh that threatened to spill out. That would be one of my eternal rival's more destructive jutsu. The spiraling bolt. A devastatingly destructive attack, although that was the underpowered version as he wasn't in that form. And what is this form you speak of? Kurenai curiously questioned, trying to smoothen her hair. If that so-called rosin bolt that had just leveled the land was underpowered, she shuddered to think of the full-powered version. You can ask him yourself when you see him. For now we must make haste, and head to the village or whatever is left of it. Nodding and waiting for Asuma to stand to his feet, the three took off in burst of speed. Moments before the large pulse of lighting that had branched out, Naruto slammed his hands together, purposefully destabilizing the concentrated ball of pure lightning chakra. Knowing the destructive nature of his attack, he inwardly mouthed a prayer for the nearby souls. Like time had frozen, he felt eyes on his form. He glanced up and his Sharingan found the gaze of a little girl watching him in a nearby window. He could make out her curious brown eyes watching him with awe. Forgive me, he silently conveyed. Rosin bolt. With a shout, a large pulse of lighting rapidly emitted off his form and branched out widely. The Jinchuriki, who were moments ago close enough to see the sweat on his brow, were suspended midair by the pulse. With a snarl, they both struggled in their momentary suspension, growling before they were blasted back as Naruto opened his arms wide in arc, and with a roar, a devastating pulse rocketed them back. A crater instantly formed under his feet from the sheer power of the jutsu and rapidly expanded, swallowing nearby structures in its wake. Buildings in the surrounding area were torn apart by the raw pulse of lighting and disintegrated from the volume of volts. Villagers in hiding suffered the same fate. Hiding in nearby buildings, their attentions were roused as they witnessed the fight between trio. They had no time to run as the first pulse branched out and suspended them in mid-air, causing the hairs on their bodies to rise. The little girl had been watching Naruto since he appeared, stretched her hand to her mother in vain attempt to reach her as the second pulse came with the thundering sound of cracks. She let out a scream before a terrifying rumble followed. Brown eyes witnessed her mother open her mouth in a wordless scream, before her flesh disintegrated in front of her eyes. Her skin was first, followed by the muscle of her body, till all that remained was the bones. They too vanished with the roar of thunder before all that was left was the very atoms of her cells to highlight her untimely demise. And like her mother, she was subjected to the same fate. Boom! And like a flash of lighting, the thundering bolt, true to its name, finished the attack with a sound that trembled the ground. In the middle of the large crater, Naruto fell to his knees, wheezing as he felt his chakra reserves dip. Lighting lightly danced around his form, and drips of perspiration that fell were quickly evaporated. That was more exhausting than I thought. He inwardly wheezed. With the aid of his hands, he pushed himself up and stood on heavy legs. Glancing around at the destruction he had caused, he sighed as he took in the destroyed village. His attention diverted when he heard a growl. Glancing to his left, he saw the four-tailed form of Konohamaru slowly raise itself up. His cloak, despite offering advanced protection, was dripping red chakra, almost like it was bleeding from the severe attack it had just suffered. Parts of it were completely destroyed, showcasing his burnt skin underneath. Beside him, Sora's form was unmoving, singed black by the attack. Before Naruto could react, one of Konohamaru's four tails pierced right through the boy's body. With a snap, Sora awakened, letting out a scream that chilled Naruto to his core. Like a pump draining liquid, Konohamaru's tail glowed red, and the remaining chakra sealed inside Sora was forcefully sucked out. His previous injuries were rapidly healed as the bloody red form solidified and once again fully covered his body. Sora shuddered and began to gurgle on blood as his form became extremely pale. Like a parasite, the tail continued to drain, and Naruto let out a shout as Sora's body became emaciated till his bones were visible underneath his skin. Chakra swirled in his hand as Naruto charged forward, the rapidly spinning ball solidifying and letting out a distinct hum as it reached full capacity. Rasen, his Sharingan widened as Konohamaru's tail flickered and the body of the Sora was thrown forward into his path. Already exhausted from his last jutsu and the combination of trying to suppress the Kyuubi's chakra, Naruto couldn't react in time as he collided with bone-jarring force with the small body. A sickening crack was heard as Sora's unmoving body hit his stomach head first with enough force to pause Naruto in his blitz of speed. Naruto tasted blood and was sure a few ribs had just cracked. In a move of desperation, he had moved the Rasengan out of the way that would have reduced the boy's body to mincemeat. The momentary act had cost him as the boy's neck instantly broke during collision and left him wide open. Konohamaru's form rocketed forth, leaving cracks in his wake as he tackled Naruto with such force that Sora's body in between the two bent midair at an unnatural angle and the sound of his back shattering echoed through the air. The duo crashed into the edge of the crater before bouncing out of it and landing in a heap near a leveled street of the village. Naruto let out a cough of blood staining his mask with a dark hue. Unrelenting, Konohamaru's form hovered over him, swiping down sharp claws ready to cleave his face in half. An inch from his face, Naruto's hand shot out and halted the glowing appendage. So close was the intervention, that a red finger touched his headband and burned right through the metal. The glove on his hand instantly burned off at contact. Naruto let out a hiss as his hand holding the Jinchuriki's wrist was suffering the same corroded effect. With a snarl he struck forward, with the still spinning Rasengan in his hand, aiming for his face. Returning the favor, Konohamaru's clawed hand shot out and wrapped around his wrist, halting the attack, as sharp claws embedded themselves into his flesh. This time Naruto couldn't contain the shout of pain that came from his lips. A struggle of dominance ensued and both tried to overpower one another. Ah! Fuck! The pain was unbearable. Both his hand and wrist were suffering fourth-degree burns as he felt corrosive chakra beginning to erode his bone, long since burning through the underlying muscle and fat. Giving a roar, he powered through and the Rasengan in his hand kept up its spin as it began to edge closer to Konohamaru's face. Inch by agonizing inch, Naruto slowly began to overpower the Jinchuriki. He kept of his focus, ignoring the small body nestled into his lap that was corroded to bones from their proximity. Despite the intense struggle, Naruto's Sharingan glanced down at him, seeing the Sora's face fixed into a small smile as the remaining half of his face was eroded down. If Sora's body hadn't landed on top of him, the entire front side of his body would have been eroded by now. Push, damn it. Push. He groaned to himself. His Rasengan edged ever closer. The seemingly endless white eyes narrowed, before the four tails that had been swirling stood on edge turned, poised and ready, to pierce right through him. With a desperate burst of chakra, four chains shot of his form and wrapped around the tails, binding them. In his weakened state he failed to notice the chains lacked their golden shine and reflected his form appearing rusted and chipped. They still held strong against the strain, but the chime of cracks were noticeable. When the chains didn't respond to his mental command to drain the chakra, he knew his situation just went from bad to fucked. Fuck. Come on, Konohamaru, fight it, he yelled desperately, feeling his reserves begin to plummet. The Rasengan that had been so close to his head was slowly losing ground, and he snarled as he began to get overpowered. His chakra reserves were so low that spinning ball slowed itself to a stop, slowly evaporating as his chakra no longer flowed enough to power it. The sweat on his brow was rapidly evaporating as the intense heat of Konohamaru's four-tailed state drew ever closer. His Sharingan rapidly spun in his eye, searching for anything that would provide a momentary lapse to halt the Genin. And then he heard it. The feral Jinchuriki seemed to let out a howl that sounded more like a groan of pain. His mouth opened wide, exposing his glowing white throat in a roar that rumbled the earth. He lowered his head, ears that had been standing straight, lowering till they touched the sides of his forehead. Wide-eyed, Naruto stared numbly as Konohamaru's mouth moved slowly. Sen. The clawed hands holding his wrist released their corrosive grip, and Naruto hastily let go of the corrosive appendage. Glancing at his own appendages, he had to bite back the shudder that wanted to rush out of his lips as he stared at blackened bone. It was only thanks to his last reserves of reinforcing his limbs with chakra that the corrosive burn didn't eat his limbs right off. Another growl snapped his attention to Konohamaru as the dark red, almost black chakra around his eyes slowly receded and the white pools for eyes slowly burned away to reveal familiar brown. The skin around his eyes was an angry red, rapidly healing but at the same time suffering the same corrosion that he had been subjected to. Sensei. I hear you, Konohamaru, I hear you. Not wasting any time, Naruto pushed the last of his reserves to his Sharingan and tried to force the Jinchuriki into a Genjutsu-induced sleep. Their eyes connected and then everything went dark. What the where am I? The question echoed eerily outward, sounding like his own voice was coming from all around him. Naruto pushed himself up, dazed and confused, looking around the dirty murky waters that he had found himself laying in. Raising himself to his feet, he observed the area he was in, staring wide-eyed at the numerous plants and trees that surrounded the area. Broken trees littered the area, looking dead. The plants that he had been observing were withered and dried, looking like they had never seen the sun. The water was so dirty he couldn't make out his own feet in the ankle-high water. A wetland. More importantly, a swamp. Naruto slowly trekked through the muddy waters, glancing around for any signs of life, or more importantly a brown-haired Genin. But as he made his way through the dirty waters, he saw nothing more than the trees and plants that stood silently. Swamps were supposed to be teeming with life, but the silence was as still as the dead. Not even any insects. Curiously, the swamp was filled with an eerie orange glow. More saturated with the color of red was the glow, casting the illusion eerily reminiscent to blood. But there were no sources of light in sight. The hell? The further he walked, the more the glow became brighter, almost as if was slowly beckoning him from the blanketing darkness. Glancing up at the sky for the first time, expecting to see something normal, he froze. That sky wasn't normal at all. Blanketing the entire horizon, a pitch black covered the entire sky as far as his eye could see. Slowly moving across the dark abyss were clouds the color of blood, standing out against the black with their supernatural glow. But even that didn't make him freeze. What really caught his stare was the large circle stationed like a sentry in the sky. That was no sun. The red of the moon was the same bloodied color as the clouds. Only it shined brighter and highlighted the clearing he walked into with a dark red. He didn't even realize he walked into an open clearing standing in lake. The trees surrounded the area as if trying to contain something. He slowly took steps forward, on wide alert as a feeling of dread welled up in the pit of his stomach. His hand came up to his shoulder, gripping the handle of his blade tightly. His wrist caught his eye and his mouth opened in confusion. The burning sensation of the corrosive chakra that had been plaguing his body had been vacant the moment he arrived. Glancing at his appendages, his brow furrowed when he saw perfectly unmarred flesh highlighted red by the light of the moon. His gloves were long since gone, burned to ashes by the corrosive chakra, but it seemed as if he was healed. Fingering his headband, he still felt the indent of the hole Konohamaru had made when his finger had managed to touch him. What the hell? He mouthed the question out loud in a silent whisper. But the words echoed outwards, pulsing the waters into a phantom ripple. It felt like an eternity but was really a matter of seconds. The sound of his voice echoed onward till the dead silence that paranoid him from the start returned. The ripples in the water had stopped, but the murky waters that had once been too filthy to see through slowly began to clear. At the edge of the clearing the water cleared first, slowly spreading downwards, receding the dark waters with a clear blue. The image of bars, very giant bars, became clear and eyes went wide when he realized the clearing of water he was standing in was really a cage. He had been standing on a cage? He couldn't ponder the question any longer as something beckoned him to look down, and he felt fear paralyze his body as two huge blood-red eyes opened, and instantly fixated on his form. Before he could blink he was on the other side of the clearing, clambered up into the safety of the trees. He laid a hand on his chest, trying to calm his racing heart as the organ thundered against his ribs like it was about to explode. His breathing was fast and his form was shaking. He hadn't felt so much fear in his entire life. Those eyes shone with such an intense burn of hate and malevolence. The raw killing intent that he felt paralyzed him with fear. And all that beast had done was glance at him. He breathed deeply, inhaling through his nose and exhaling through his mouth. He needed to calm his body down lest he would go into shock. He gripped his fist tightly, closing his eyes and focusing himself to be calm. Digging deep into his reserves he found that they were replenished at full capacity, and soon that comforting warmth that had boosted him when he fought the Gobi Jinchuriki settled itself into his stomach. Opening his eyes, the look of fear was replaced with one of leveled calm. If his father had taken on this beast, so could he. He inwardly told himself it was the surprise of the area, and paranoia of traveling through the unknown that had caused him to leave his shadow behind in fright as he leapt back onto the clear waters. He stopped himself before he could take another step. Shit, what if grabs me through the bars? He could kiss his ass goodbye as he would be dinner faster than those unfortunate souls in that horrible shark movie. Better be safe than sorry. he told himself as a golden chain shot out and attached itself to the tallest tree he could find. On the other side of the clearing he spotted a tree of adequate height, and another chain shot out attaching itself to the top. Shortening them he felt himself rise up slowly into the air, and his body slowly began to move to center of the waters, dangling above. He tried to ignore the blood-red eyes that watched his every move, silently watching with patience. He felt like prey, dangling above a shark, as one wrong move could cost him, and he would fall into awaiting jaws. The thought caused him a slip of control and he lost his perfectly maintained balance. He felt his world spin as he tumbled downwards. Fuck! A third chain shot out from his back, blindly latching onto the closest tree and stopped him dead, his face hovering inches from the water. In fright he had snapped his eyes shut expecting to be fox food about now, but when he felt his chain had secured him cracked his Sharingan eye open. Fuck! The shout was loud as he recoiled back causing his chains to send him bouncing in the air. The Kyuubi had opened its mouth wide, exposing endless rows of sharp teeth confident that he would have dropped in its awaiting jaws. Naruto bounced around, before he willed his chains to shorten again, leveling him comfortably. The third chain had provided him perfect balance now, and he could will himself to relax for a moment. He wiped the sweat from his brow breathing deeply at what was a close escape from death. He thought he'd dash. Ha, should have seen the look on your face. Naruto started downwards as the Kyuubi regarded him with its red eyes. It would seem the Uzumaki blood runs strong through you, Naruto. Naruto stared numbly as he regarded the beast that had come in contact with since his birth. Kyuubi. At the mention of his name, it grinned showcasing teeth the same size as the largest tree he had seen since coming here. Come closer, Naruto. No need to be shy. It grinned again gripping the iron bars with its huge hands, the claws on its fingers longer than his body. 9 tails, larger than the Hokage Tower, swayed in a hypnotizing manner behind it. A cloud blocked out the glowing red of the moon, painting a picture of 2 red dots belonging to the giant monstrosity glowing hungrily as they observed his form. Come closer? There wasn't enough distance between them. I'm fine right here. Naruto quipped. I believe we can have a suitable conversation from this distance. He heard a sound that resembled drumming with an edge of malevolence and realized the beast had just laughed. Though I want to, I couldn't harm you even if I tried. Showing proof its hand slipped past the bars, palm pressed up against the waters, like it was an invisible wall encasing it inside. In the center of the waters a symbol glowed, showcasing the kanji for seal. When the 9 tails removed its palm the seal vanished. See, now come. We have much to discuss, you and I. One giant finger beckoned him bending slowly, its long nail scraping against the water. Naruto stared for a few moments, the tomos of his Sharingan slowly twirling in his eye. Wordlessly he reached into his pouch and withdrew a kunai. With a lazy flicker of his wrist he let gravity do the work and the knife dropped to clear waters. His eye narrowed as it bounced along the waters, meeting resistance, before it settled resting on the invisible wall. Red and blue met glowing red, before he sent a mental command to his chains to slowly begin to lengthen. Heeding the command the chains expanded letting Naruto slowly begin to descend toward the bars. The fox grinned before it masked its face into indifference as Naruto's feet reached the waters. Slowly bending down to retrieve his kunai, all the while keeping his eyes on the fox, he allowed the chains to slowly recede back inside him. The sound of sliding metal penetrated the silence and when the last of the chain slipped inside of him he stared the Kyuubi down face to face, in dead silence. Now closer, he could see that the bars didn't really provide a cage, as the Kyuubi's giant form simply floated in water. There was no distinguishable ground underneath and his ocular vision could see no end to the murky depths. A horizontal, endless cage. The sight was thought-provoking. His observation was interrupted as the Kyuubi let out a small growl before lowering its face closer to his, large eyes pinned to the special orb in his left socket. How did you come to possess that eye? It came out as more of a growl than a question and Naruto could hear the underlying hate. Wouldn't you like to know? He fired back, noticing the way its eyes narrowed to slits. Eyes more sinister than my own should not be handled lightly, boy. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that. Seeing his confusion the fox grinned, its red eyes seeming to shine with an intense malice. It seemed to draw itself closer putting its large snout right under his feet. I sense it, I can feel the same chakra from that eye. Yes, that eye belongs to him. Naruto's eyes had narrowed and he found himself leaning forwards kneeling down, so he could stare the Kyuubi right in its large eyes. Whose eye does belong to? The beast grinned, eyes seeming to shine with mirth before they glowed. The same man, on that day. Naruto was going frustrated. What day? Whose eye does this belong to? Kakashi never told him how he got his eye. He had pestered the man countless times, but he would never tell him. Who? He shouted, feeling dread. Wouldn't you like to know? It stated smugly, echoing his previous words. It wouldn't be fun if I tell you all the answers, that way I at least know you'll come back. Naruto hissed, but words on the tip of his tongue froze as he saw movement out of the corner of his eye. His sword was instantly drawn, and he stood in stance, poised ready to strike. His eyes widened, and his sword nearly fell from his grip as the floating body of Konohamaru emerged from the waters. His face was upwards, but Naruto still didn't know if he drowned, and he was hovering over the Genin in the blink of an eye. Sheathing his sword, he tenderly held the unconscious Genin, scooping him out of the waters. Going down on one knee, and resting the boy's head on his thigh, he put his ear against his chest, and breathed a sigh of relief when he felt a steady heartbeat. He was breathing. But his breaths were shallow. His usually fair skin was pale, and there were heavy bags under his eyes. Konohamaru. Naruto gently shook him. Come on buddy, wake up. He gave some firm shakes, but nothing seemed to rouse him. Holding him in one arm, he used his free hand to lightly slap his face. Konohamaru. His voice echoed loudly through the silence, but Konohamaru didn't so much as stir. The boy is weak. The voice snapped his attention back to the center of the lake, and Naruto's eyes narrowed at the smug tone. Hoisting Konohamaru securely in his arms, Naruto walked forward till he stood staring down at the Kyuubi's glowing eyes. His mind is strong, but his body is weak. It reiterated. Naruto's eyes narrowed down at it. What do you mean by that? The beast grinned before it hoisted up a claw finger and pointed horizontally. Frowning, but following the direction, Naruto glanced at trees and water, seeing nothing. Turning his attention back to the beast, his eyes reflected his confusion. What? He bit out, tired of its games. It had long since rested its fingers back on gripping the bars, but its grin this time spoke volume. Its long pink tongue stretched out and slowly licked the waters right under his feet. Dread filled him, and he glanced briefly at the beast before he turned his attention back to direction the beast had pointed. Still seeing nothing, his Sharingan rapidly flickered, trying to find something, anything that had looked strange or could have labeled what the beast was pointing at. He trailed off as he finally noticed something. At the water's edge, by the bank, something caught his attention. His Sharingan spun rapidly as it tried to take in every detail, and soon enough the image of the water slowly receding became clear as day to his vision. He closed his right eye, allowing full vision for his Sharingan, making sure he hadn't imagined what he had just seen, and sure enough the clear waters receded again, draining ever so slowly, and like a spreading plague, murk was taking its place. Both eyes opened wide before he turned to the Kyuubi, who grinned at his realization. Yes, your leaders are fools. It gripped the bars tight. The greatest mistake they made was breaking the line of previous host. Naruto's mind was racing at his words. Thinking back, his mom had been the previous Jinchuriki, and before her, the wife of the first Hokage, Mito Uzumaki. All the previous hosts for the Kyuubi have been Uzumaki. Wait, are you saying that I? He trailed off, seeing its grin. Haven't you felt the connection, Naruto? Its face morphed into mock hurt. I mean, it just used to be me and you together, for 10 long months. It finished, seeing the dawning horror on his face. No matter. A long talon pointed to Konohamaru. I'll be seeing you soon, real soon. The last thing he heard was its malevolent laughter as he was thrust out of the mindscape. Naruto snapped awake, instantly grabbing the hand was inches from his face. Twisting the appendage behind its owner's back, he leapt out of the bed he inhibited, sword drawn, hovering inches from the neck of his human shield. His Sharingan burned an angry red, narrowed to slits, and his killing intent saturated the air. Wide eyes stared back at him. Blinking, he stared confusedly at the green jackets and leaf headbands before he stared down at a red-faced and very angry Kurenai. Realizing he had nearly harmed a fellow leaf soldier, he smiled. Hi there. Kurenai blinked dumbly before her face scowled. Let me go, you idiot. Gently doing so, Naruto let her arm go, and removed his sword from her neck, smoothly sheathing it. Kurenai pushed herself off of him, and rolled the arm that he held, glaring at him with her exotic red eyes. Feeling honestly regretful, Naruto tugged on her hand. Sorry, Kurenai-chan. I didn't mean to harm you. Hearing in the sincerity in his voice, her eyes softened bit before she gave his hand a warm squeeze. It's fine. Naruto gave a small grin, letting go of her hand before he looked around at the large medical tent they were in. What happened? Standing on her toes, she reached up and brushed back his slick blonde locks that had become disarrayed. You were moaning in your sleep, and sweating. I came to try and wake you, and you know. She gestured with her hands nodding when she made his hair suitable, settling back on her feet. Naruto slowly nodded, but before he could question further the duo was surrounded by familiar green vest. "Geez, remind me never to try and wake you, Naruto." Asuma drawled lazily, puffing on his cigarette. He glanced to Kurenai. "You good, Kurenai-chan?" He was promptly ignored. "Come on. Don't tell me you're still pissed?" he whined. Ignoring Asuma's trouble, Guy marched up Naruto, wrapping him in a bear hug. "Oh, my eternal rival. I rejoice now that you have awakened from your restful slumber. I was worried greatly when we found you unconscious," he cried, tears running down his eyes. Naruto just sighed, before he lightly patted the eccentric man on the back. There, Guy." The man stopped his tears but didn't release him. "Please put me down now." Guy grinned sheepishly but did as requested. Kurenai rolled her eyes at Guy's antics. Gaining his attention, she spoke. "When you performed your Rasen whatever," glaring at him for his correction of bolt, she continued. "We rushed to the village to find you. When we did, you were unconscious in the street with Konohamaru burned and slumped over you. Sandwiched between the two of you was a badly corroded small body that was unrecognizable." Naruto glanced down at her words, and his eyes widened as they looked at his hands. Skin that was once charred black, burned through the bone, was perfectly unmarred. "My hands, when you found me, weren't they burned?" Kurenai shook her head slowly. "No, when we found you were perfectly unharmed, save for your headband. Only Konohamaru was burned, even then he was slowly healing." He ran a hand against his naked head, eyes wide. "Haven't you felt the connection, Naruto?" The words echoed through his head and his mind reeled till the point his heart drummed against his chest. What the fuck was going on? It was Kurenai's gentle voice that brought him back to reality, her eyes worried. She stared up at him. "What happened out there?" Feeling all eyes on him, he glanced around, seeing the conversation had gained the entire attention of the tent. "Inquisitive bums. When I felt the Kyuubi's chakra, I rushed to the source expecting to find Konohamaru. I did find him, but what?" She prodded gently, seeing his eyes dim. There was another container of the Kyuubi's chakra." Alarmed whispers grew and moments later shouts filled the room. "What, another Jinchuriki? That's impossible. Oh shit, the higher-ups are going to lose their teeth. This could mean war." Panic filled the air after the last comment and everyone began to shout and spout obscenities. "Can you all just shut the fuck up?" Everyone stopped, mouths dropped open as Kurenai stood tall and imposing, wreaking killing intent at anyone who dared meet her gaze. When all was quiet, she huffed. "Thank you," she muttered sweetly, smiling disarmingly. "Now, Naruto-kun, as you were saying." She gestured for him to continue. Naruto's eyes were open wide, his brow past his hairline but schooled his features at her request. "All right. They were fighting and it was pretty much one-sided. Sora, the false Jinchuriki, was getting thrashed, and Konohamaru was about to beat him to death. I intervened in the nick of time to try and suppress his chakra, but was interrupted by Kazuma." "Who?" she questioned, not noticing the way Asuma's eyes widened. Furito Tsuyoshi was just a fake name. His real name was Kazuma. He was the leader of the One King protesters, and word got out of SD and he knew we were coming. He set a trap, wanting to use his son Sora. He licked his lips. The day of the Kyuubi attack, he had sealed the leftover chakra of the beast into his son. He wanted to use Sora as weapon against Konoha and try to destroy the village. "Where is he?" Asuma questioned, looking ready to murder. Naruto met his gaze. "Dead." "So then what happened?" Guy questioned. Naruto ran a hand through his hair. "Well, things went to shit and both of them sprouted four tails. I used my Rasen bolt in the village, managing to momentarily disable the duo. But Konohamaru managed to brush off the attack, and drain the Kyuubi's chakra from Sora and emaciating him, and then came after me. He shoved his hands into his pockets. And that's when you guys found me." "Is that everything?" Kurenai questioned, searching his gaze. When he didn't answer, she set a hand against his shoulder. "Naruto?" He sighed deeply, but didn't answer. Choosing to gently remove her hand and make his way to the exit. "That's everything important," he whispered, as people parted around him, giving him way to the exit. Everyone watched his back with gazes set into confusion. When Kurenai looked like she was going to go after him, Guy gently but firmly held her hand. He shook his head when her ruby eyes met his. "Let him go, Kurenai-chan." When she was about to retort, he held up a hand. "I know you have questions. We all have questions. But right now isn't the time." Asuma crossed his arms. "He can't just leave us hanging like that." Nods of improvement accompanied his statement. "We'll get our answers later. For now we must all rest, It's been a long night, he sighed. Kurenai mirrored Asuma's expression watching Naruto's green vest disappear into the Genin tent. What's wrong with him, Guy? Seeing his expression, her eyes sorrowed. He looked like he was in so much pain. Guy nodded stiffly. Indeed. Inside the Genin tent, long rows of beds were set up for any Genin that had passed the test to sleep in. Naruto inwardly scoffed as he entered. As if their young minds could sleep right after killing innocents. The tent was dark, the rows of lights on the walls turned to a dimming glow. The occasional nurse walked around beds and spoke words of comfort to any child who needed it. For those who couldn't sleep, benches were set up at the end of the tent to sit on, and there he caught Team 7, huddled beside each other. Walking quietly, and nodding to the occasional nurse who smiled at him, he trudged forward to his team, inwardly breathing a sigh of relief when Konohamaru's brown eyes were the first to recognize him and the Genin jumped out of his seat. Sensei. His voice was loud enough to wake up the entire tent, but at the moment Naruto didn't care. He opened his arms wide and caught the young boy as he sprinted at him. 2 more voices joined him and Naruto was knocked to the ground as 2 small bodies collided with him. He glanced at them, his eyes taking every detail in hungrily, looking if any hair was misplaced on their bodies. When he saw they were unharmed and breathing, he felt the dread in his stomach disappear and an unfamiliar wetness in his eyes. He didn't cry for anything. But now at this moment, when tears formed in his eyes as he wrapped his arms around their little bodies, Naruto didn't care. Gently whispering words of comfort to Sakura's cries. Rubbing soothing circles into Sasuke's back and tucking Konohamaru's head securely under his neck, he felt that this long night had been worth it. After everything that had happened today, he felt that nothing else mattered, nothing in the world mattered. As long as he had Team 7. Konohamaru raised his head, skin, thankfully back to its normal hue. We worried about you. Sasuke nodded in agreement, rubbing away the stubborn liquid in his eye. All the other Jounin sensei came for the teams except you. My bad guys. I was a little tired, you see, and had to take a nap. They all laughed at his familiar excuse before Sakura gave him a teary smile. She pressed a kiss to his masked cheek and wrapped her arms around his neck. I don't care, sensei, as long as you're here. The boy shared her sentiments and Naruto wheezed a bit as 3 pairs of arms wrapped around his form. He didn't dare complain though, as his large hands encircled their small bodies, forming a barrier from the nosy eyes watching them. I'm proud of you guys, he whispered just for their ears. You can't imagine how relieved I am to have all 3 of you. They all bumped heads so Naruto could look at each pair of eyes. You guys are the best. For once not caring about vengeful thoughts, and just glad he had his team, Sasuke held up his pinky finger. Team 7 forever. Sakura giggled but mirrored his antics. Team 7 forever. Konohamaru grinned. Hell yeah, we're the best. Naruto chuckled before he mirrored his team and held out his pinky. They all intertwined their fingers and shook on it. Team 7, forever. Arriving back into Konoha and saying his goodbyes to other teams in Jounin, Naruto decided he would personally walk each and every single one of his Genin home. First stop was Sakura. Arriving at her parents' house, gently ringing the doorbell, they all waited for a few moments before a rush of feet was heard and 2 worried-looking parents opened the door. A man with the most ridiculous hairstyle Naruto had ever seen appeared. Kazashi Haruno shook his head of dull pink hair in the form of cherry blossom frantically at the sight of his daughter. Sakura-chan. His angular mustache was wet with tears as he picked the girl up into his large hands and began cry his eyes out. His words were unintelligible, but he seemed he was offering his thanks as he shook Naruto's hands, and brought an embarrassed-looking Sakura inside who managed wave back at them. A blonde-haired woman, seeing herself the more sensible parent, thanked him profusely and shook his hand. Bowing to him and his team, she bid his team a good night and gently closed the door. Her voice soon accompanied her husband's in crying. Meeting the boys' stares, he shrugged and they continued onwards. Next up was Konohamaru, arriving at the large Sarutobi compound. The guards nodded at the team, and gestured for Konohamaru, but the young boy paused and tentatively turned to his sensei. Sensei about the queue. He trailed off seeing Naruto's wave. Don't worry about Ko, we'll talk tomorrow. As for now, go home and rest. The young boy nodded before he was led away. Walking with Sasuke in silence, they continued onwards to the Uchiha compound. Naruto caught Sasuke looking at him out of the corner of his eye but didn't comment on it. After a moment of walking in silence, Naruto turned to him. Something wrong, Sasuke? The boy looked away at being caught staring before he stopped abruptly. Mirroring him, Naruto glanced at him in confusion. What is it? Sasuke looked at him but couldn't meet his gaze. His shoulders were tense and he looked like he's having an internal struggle. Can you? He cleared his throat. You know, my mom cooks really well. And she always wanted to meet you. He trailed off, his cheeks coloring a bit. I mean, I know you have a home and all, but you can stay with us for tonight. Naruto stared at him quietly, before a gentle smile formed under his mask. I would love to, he stated honestly, but I have to report to the Hokage, plus a worried blonde is waiting for me at home. Sasuke looked downtrodden, but nodded nevertheless, choosing to walk on ahead. Naruto chuckled following him before he threw an arm around the boy's shoulders, messing up his hair. Sasuke slapped his hands away, his face red with embarrassment, but he couldn't hide the genuine smile on his face. Sasuke! The shout caused both of them to stop and they glanced to the direction of the main Uchiha house to see a form on the steps. Mikoto Uchiha, clad in her traditional black dress, stood there with tears streaming down her eyes at the sight of her boy. Overcome with emotion and fighting off her own fears, she hopped down the steps before she ran towards the two. Sasuke! Sasuke's brows were furrowed, his eyes wide in disbelief at the sight. Mom? He activated his Sharingan to make sure he wasn't seeing a genjutsu. Mom! He took off, not a moment later meeting his mother halfway and crashing into her with a hug. Naruto walked closer, but stood at a respectable distance, allowing mother and son to have their moment. Mikoto's eyes were streaming with tears, and her hand constantly ran through her son's ebony locks. Naruto had to suppress a laugh as Sasuke's face was showered with kisses and the young boy's embarrassment rang out. Mom! Please, not in front of my sensei. She stopped but not before giving him a once-over. Satisfied he was unharmed, she gave him a tight hug before finally glancing at Naruto before her eyes widened. Naruto immediately bowed in greeting. Lady Uchiha. He addressed respectively. And Naruto. Hearing recognition, her voice caused him to lift his head. A hand was over her mouth and her eyes ran over his form in astonishment. Walking a bit closer, he stopped in front of the two. Hi. He was astonished that this woman still remembered him after only meeting him a couple times since he was toddler. He was unprepared for the hug that came his way. Naruto-kun. She held him at arm's length. Look at you, so tall. Last time we met you were such a small thing. Feeling embarrassed and equally uncomfortable, he just stayed quiet. Her hands searched his form before they zeroed in on his mask. Meeting his eyes, she whispered softly. May I? This was his mom's best friend and his best friend's mom. No. She pouted a bit, let go of his mask and gently held her hands in his. Thank you, for taking care of my boy. The whole village was constantly talking about some dangerous test and I was worried sick. He shook his head. You don't need to thank me. He already decided long ago he would protect his team with his life. Well, even if you don't accept it, I'll thank you anyway. She met his eyes, and she smiled a bit. Kami, Minato and Kushina would have been so proud. The comment caused his heart to swell a bit and he pushed down the suddenly rising emotion. Please, will you join us for dinner tonight? We would love your company. He could only shake his head. Sorry, but I have a report to the Hokage with my fellow Jounin. Plus I have to return home after. She mirrored her son, looking downtrodden but nodded nonetheless. His second surprise that night came in the form of her stepping on her toes to press a soft kiss against his cheek. Lowering herself, she smiled up at him, stroking his cheek before she walked away, leading a blushing Sasuke inside. He stood there awkwardly before shook his head and began to walk away. Don't think about your student's mom that way. Don't think about your student's mom that way. Don't dash. He repeated the mantra all the way to the Hokage tower. Naruto was all business as he and the rest of the Jounin sensei stood before the third and village elders in the conference room. Anbu were quietly organizing papers and setting files before him. When finished they bowed and disappeared as quickly as they had come. The door locked and seals briefly glowed, locking them all inside the room. Thankfully, no military police were present. Just the Jounin sensei. The Hokage shifted in his seat. All eyes focused on him as he opened up a file and scanned its contents. I have here before me a file on the 8 Jounin sensei teams that I sent to Black River Village to conduct the Konoha silent dispatch test. His eyes focused on the Jounin. Well then, let's see whose Genin will remain soldiers. When you hear your team, please indicate pass or fail. Team 7. Pass. Team 8. Pass. The Hokage locked eyes with Kurenai. He smirked before he returned his attention back to the sheet. Team 10. Pass. Team 12. Pass. Aoba smiled. Maybe his team could finally pass the Chunin exam. Team Guy. Pass. Team 13. Fail. Team 14. Fail. Team 15. A helpless sigh was heard. Fail. The Hokage made an X on the last box, setting down his pen. Leaning back in his chair, he regarded the group. Not bad. 5 out 8 passed. I honestly expected worse. No one replied to that. They all sat in silence, staring with blank expressions. Dansu scoffed. That's an improvement. But I can't say it's not hard to improve on garbage. Her fiery temper roused. Kurenai gritted her teeth. Listen here, you pile of shit. We all. Naruto slapped a hand over her mouth, stopping her. She would probably say something she would later regret. She struggled against him a bit, and it took hushed whispers into her ear for her to eventually calm down. She still didn't let up her glare though. Dansu returned it with indifference. Hiruzen puffed on his pipe. Kurenai. Hearing her name, she stood at attention. Hokage-sama? You and I will have a private chat later. I have interesting news about the way you handled your Hyuga during the test. It was not a request. She nodded stiffly, bowing slightly. As for the rest of you, dismissed. The seals glowed against the walls again, and the doors unlocked. As one, the Jounin bowed before they began to shuffle for the exit. A grizzled eye raised as Naruto remained where he was. When he didn't move, the third stared at him. Problem, Naruto? Naruto nodded slowly. His Sharingan glowed a burning red as he tilted his head at the third. You could say. Hiruzen stared wordlessly at him. Homura, who had been quiet the whole time, sneered at Naruto before turning to his old teammate. Hiruzen, please just arrest this boy. His insubordination knows no limits. His request was denied as the third simply held up a hand. Leave us. When Homura sputtered, he flared his chakra a bit. Both of you, leave us. Now. The two elders did as requested, and despite their age, gracefully raised themselves out of their seats and silently walked past Naruto, heading to the door. Dansu did wordlessly, but Homura felt the need to fire a few words. I'll have you know, boy, that I dash. When dual-colored eyes landed on his face, his skin paled a bit before he recoiled. Trying to save face, he scoffed before he hastily made for the exit, slamming the door shut behind him. Silently, Naruto returned his stare back to the Hokage, who hadn't once broken his gaze. Old man, what dash? That jutsu you used in the village, what was it called? The third cut him off. Naruto glared, staying silent for a few moments. Rasen Bolt. Rasen Bolt? The third echoed. He scratched his goatee. A Rasengan embedded with lightning chakra, genius. Not even Minato in all his prowess could hope to accomplish such a feat. You should see Rasen Shuriken. Naruto inwardly mused. But speaking of his jutsu wasn't the point. Listen, I dash. You know that Rasen Bolt killed a lot of villagers. He cut him off again. Unfortunate souls, close enough, were reduced to nothing but atoms, as the reports say. 2 Kyubi Jinchuriki fighting called for desperate measures. Naruto bit out, fed up with the interruptions. The third leaned back into his chair. Indeed. His face grimaced. That Sora boy, yes? I'm glad he's dead, or I would have been forced to mobilize our military. 17,000 shinobi marching through fire country wouldn't be a pretty sight. And that one who did the sealing, the boy's father, Kazuma, is dead, correct? Naruto nodded. Good, so tell me, Naruto, what I did to suffer this spat of ire from you, please. He observed the young man critically. I know dash. Konohamaru can't contain the Kyubi, can he? It was Hiruzen's turn to be interrupted, and the pipe in his mouth almost fell out in shock. His eyes narrowed on Naruto's form and his chakra rapidly began to spike. Who informed you of that? The god of shinobi began to rise from his seat and his hand slammed down on his wooden desk, indenting the wood. Answer me, boy. Naruto only in return offered a direct challenge and spiked his own chakra levels, easily matching the third's. Answer my question first, old man. The two clashing chakra signatures caused the room to crack and the floorboards to creak. All bodies in the Hokage Tower felt the powerful chakra and nearly fell to their knees at the overbearing pressure. The battles of wills continued till Anbu burst in the room, all aiming swords at Naruto's unprotected back. When the two occupants didn't even acknowledge their presence, the captain of the squad turned towards the Hokage. My lord? He kept his eyes on Naruto, his question asking for guidance on how to act. Hiruzen kept his gaze on Naruto before his chakra levels calmed and he slowly sat back in his seat. Get out. The Anbu hesitated but nevertheless obeyed, as they sheathed their swords and bowed before exiting. The third picked up his pipe and filled it with a generous amount of tobacco and lit with a flicker of chakra. Puffing slowly, he calmed his nerves before regarding Naruto silently. He let out a few puffs of smoke before he spoke. I'll answer your question, Naruto. But please, tell me first exactly how you acquired such information? Hearing his level tone, Naruto finally lowered his chakra levels also before losing his tense form. He shoved his hands into his pockets. I spoke with the Kyuubi. The third's eyes went wide. My Sharingan allowed me to enter Konohamaru's subconscious, and there I spoke with the beast. It told me it would soon get out. The third stared wide-eyed for a moment before he sighed and took his hat off his head. He ran a hand through his dulling hair and sighed painfully, looking more like an old man than the powerful leader he had just been. You know, Naruto, at times like this I think, fuck, why did I ever accept this job? Why didn't I let some other dumb bastard get stuck in this Kami-forsaken shithole, and live out the rest of my life as a soldier who would eventually die on the battlefield? Naruto stared unblinking. You have only yourself to blame for accepting it. The third thought about it for a second, before he conceded. Indeed. When Tobaimaru-sensei bestowed the title onto me, I was too hasty. He tisked. I should have just given it to Dansu. He sighed heavily, slumping in his chair, staring up at the ceiling with a look of remorse. Naruto waited patiently, but when he didn't speak he became annoyed. Old man. He bit out tiredly. Hiruzen finally tilted his head to look at him, and Naruto had to pause at the intense emotions that swelled into his grizzled eyes. You know he was only 2 when it happened? When the attack started. Naruto listened intently. Minato needed a Jinchuriki. He was planning for your sister to be the one, but Kushina, Kami rest her soul, had a miscarriage. The Kyuubi would have destroyed Konoha. I couldn't allow that. So I gave him the next best choice. He trailed off as his gaze reflected the distant memory. Konohamaru, Naruto whispered. Hiruzen nodded. Yes, my own grandson. The boy who had just watched his mother get crushed under their collapsing house. I gave him to Minato, and before I knew it I was holding Konoha's newest Jinchuriki. Naruto shook his head. But it all doesn't make any sense. What happened that night? How did the seal break? Dad's work, his genius, was perfect. How could it break when he was with her? If it wasn't for the Sharingan, Naruto would have missed his flinch. But he saw it. I don't know, Hiruzen stated with a whisper. Before he could blink, Naruto was in front of him. Crash. The wooden table shattered under the power of his fist as he glared with all his intent at the third. You're lying, old man. Tell me. He wanted the answers. The answers to the many questions that had plagued him since that night. For too long he had been denied the truth, and tonight he wasn't going nowhere till he got answers. Become Hokage and I'll tell you everything. The whisper caused his chakra to spike out rapidly, and lightning began to crackle around Naruto's form. His teeth grounded together under his mask, and the third was grabbed by the scruff of his robe and yanked to Naruto's level. Hiruzen watched unflinchingly as the jounin in front of him breathed harshly, his right eye glowing a frosty blue and the other burning with an intense red. If you kill me, you won't get your answers. Plus, an army would be after your head. Not even you can fight off 17,000 soldiers. Naruto tightened his grip till the point he knew it hurt before he loosened his grip and let the robe slip from his grasp. The third dropped back into his seat. Unperturbed, the Hokage smoothed out the wrinkles in his robes and lightly brushed of any accumulated dust. Naruto began to pace the room like an angry tiger, the third watching his movements with a critical eye. Didn't you want to find about Konohamaru? The question caused Naruto to stop, but his glare was all that he needed to get the third to lift the carefully guarded secrets of his grandson. I wanted for him to have a childhood. A long one. By the age of 7 we began his training to become Konoha's perfect weapon. Let me guess. Root. At his nod, Naruto threw his hands up in exasperation. It was always motherfucking Root. He lived a double life, attending the academy and training in secret. I ordered him to take up a fake persona to not bring attention to himself, he sighed. The day I announced his status, the civilian and many of the ninja population rejected him. They only saw a beast. And thinking of everything I've done, the least I could do was make him be honored as a hero. So I made a law. Is that why everyone is so sketchy when they talk to him? Again, Hiruzen nodded. Wow, isn't that supposed to be an S-class secret? He shook his head. Worst fucking secret I ever heard of. The third ignored the jab. But when he turned 9, time came for his more serious training. His Jinchuriki training. But he had failed spectacular and his body would suffer a great deal of pain. Our medics and scientists were baffled by this. We thought something was wrong with the seal. But no, the seal was perfect. His own body couldn't handle the strain, he sighed miserably. So? Naruto prodded, already knowing what was about to be said. He willed his heart to calm. So we stopped his training. And sent him back to the academy full-time under 24-hour surveillance. He was to reveal nothing to no one. All we could do is prepare for the inevitable, and ready another candidate. Naruto thought he heard wrong. What? Hiruzen sighed. You must understand, Naruto. He pleaded. Billions of dollars went into his training, and when he failed it all, the money couldn't just go to waste. I was being pressured for a weapon, Konoha needed a weapon. So I offered the fucking next best thing. What did you do? Naruto stuttered.
His eyes were bright with tears.
Kushina's baby was miscarriage, but the child was still alive but dying. We cultivated her stem cells from the umbilical cord and stored them. She died after, but it secured Konoha's future. All of our futures. Now, we can gene pool perfect candidates. Restart the Uzumaki line. With surrogates we can have your clan back in less than 5 years. Naruto couldn't breathe. He was pretty sure that thump against his chest was his heart skipping a beat. The old man was joking. He must be joking. But seeing his expression and realizing the bullshit the man was sprouting was true, unrestrained rage filled his form. Please understand, Naruto, Crack. The third rocketed from his seat from the force of the blow and crashed against the stone wall behind him. Anbu burst into the room, weapons drawn, and immediately went on the attack. In a flash Naruto had his sword drawn, the blade humming through the air as it cut down his foes. The slices weren't fatal, only disabling as he aimed for legs and wrists, dropping the elite team like they were rookie Genin. It didn't last 5 seconds. The Anbu team lay on ground withering in pain, bloody and beaten. And like a sentry the yellow Fang stood over them, looking like death incarnate as he flicked his wrist, sending blood off his sword. The captain fingered his piece. Alert! Alert! Code black. I repeat, Kodak. A kick to the head knocked him out, but the message was already sent. A legend among Anbu. Naruto understood the message loud and clear. Hokage under attack. Send everyone. And before he could blink he found himself surrounded on all sides by Anbu. Swords poised and ready to cut him down if he so much as moved. The elite force stood rigid. Although vastly outnumbering, they instantly recognized who they were up against, and some shuffled tensely. Not even intimated in the least, Naruto flared his chakra, holding his blade at the ready. Lighting sparked around his form, and his powerful chakra spiked out rapidly. Hoisting his sword he gripped the handle, running his chakra through the blade. The legendary sword began to hum, glowing with chakra as he prepared to unleash a stand down. The voice came from the third, hoisting himself on his chair, nursing his broken jaw. With a crack he snapped it back into place. When he didn't see any of the Black Ops members heed his command, he barked again. Stand down. An Anbu close to him hesitated. But my lord, I said stand down. Now. His tone broke, no room for argument, and one by one the Black Ops members lowered their weapons. Naruto slowly lowered his chakra levels, causing those close enough to him to shuffle backwards, their forms finally being able to breathe as he cut off the flow of chakra to his sword, wordlessly sheathing the blade. Not even glancing at the Hokage, he began to head for the exit. Forgive me, Naruto. But I did what I must to secure Konoha's future. He was ignored as Naruto continued without pause. A body blocked his exit and Naruto's reflection stared back at him in an all-black mask. The Anbu commander had suddenly appeared, no movement or smoke to indicate the sudden appearance. Coated in all-black armor, with a maroon-red cloak, the commander made for an intimidating presence. A staring contest ensued before the commander silently moved to the side, allowing him to pass. Naruto moved past the dangerous leader only to feel a glove hand on his shoulder. I'll be watching you. The disembodied voice gave nothing away as to which gender led the entire Black Ops force, but the voice-altering software did make a spine-crawling sound. Naruto was unimpressed, patiently waiting for the commander to remove the appendage, and wordlessly walked out when the hand left his shoulder. Fuck this village. The population in Konoha parted like the Red Sea, as Naruto walked forward, radiating so much killing intent that villagers who got too close passed out or lost their dinners. He continued forward, not pausing to stare at the many eyes that tracked his form. Walking through the more wealthy sectors of the village, he arrived before a sky-high condo. Entering through the glass doors, he briefly glanced at the security guards usually on night patrol as they tried to merge against the walls as his murderous gaze swept over them. Entering the elevator and pushing the button that led to the penthouse, he waited in silent anger for the elevator ride to finish. Never gonna give you up. Never gonna let you down. Never gonna run around and desert you. His already foul mood skyrocketed as the elevator song played and he literally saw red. His fist lashed out and he dented the thick iron beside him. Thankfully the doors finally opened and he walked forward to a familiar door. Putting his hand against the door, running his chakra through it, a seal glowed before the door unlocked itself. Entering to his home he saw that all the lights were off and the house was covered in darkness. The only source of light was the large television playing some ridiculous movie about cats fighting dogs. The door closed itself behind him and he took off his sandals, walking silently forward. Stopping before a large leather L-shaped couch, his anger was momentarily forgotten as he watched his blonde beauty snore lightly in her sleep. Surrounding her was his entire ninja hound team. He glanced closer and could see Pakun was the lucky one that cuddled, and was tucked into her arms. Finding the remote he turned off the screen, before he walked to the master bedroom. Opening the door, a large king-size bed greeted him. Imported from Moon Country, the coated ebony bed was a rarity. Its handles and headboards were painted ebony, carved to perfection in patterns symbolizing the Uzumaki clan insignia. The stylish design finished with a rosy red outline. Matching its outline, the sheet stood out beautifully amongst the dark color, almost reminding him of Konohamaru's subconscious. He moved across the snowy white carpeted floors and sat down on his bed with a sigh. He oddly glanced around his room, silently thanking the Prince of Moon Country Michiru for his wealth. Oh yes, he was loaded. On either side of the bed was small ebony dressers finished with sapphire handles. On the other side of the room was a large dresser, the same colors as its smaller counterparts. Like the others, its sapphire handles twinkled, but was flawlessly finished with a large square mirror. He didn't even want to start with the master bathroom. All this wealth for so little work. He had protected the man's son on one of his missions years ago and was paid handsomely. Added bonus, he slept with his hot ex-wife. But that was in the past, and he had put those types of mannerism long behind him. But still, he could be the richest man in the world, and he would still be unhappy. All this material stuff, it didn't matter to him at all. Sure, it was nice to have luxury and enjoy it. But he had come from humble beginnings and valued the bonds of his family more than any coin. What's the point of having it, if he didn't have anyone to share it with? It was gentle fingers running through his hair that wordlessly answered his question. A lace blue chemise filled his vision. Naruto couldn't help but stare as he realized the silky material was see-through and black garments were visible underneath. He stared up into twinkling blue eyes, and her beautiful face lost its grin seeing his expression. She gently tugged on his blonde locks as her eyes filled with worry. What's wrong? Hearing her voice just eased the tension out of his stiff limbs, and Naruto all but slumped against her, pressing his forehead up against her stomach. This night had been too much even for him. The conversation with the Hokage just threw him over the delicate edge that he had been balancing on. Going rogue had honestly crossed his mind. Murdering the Hokage right then and there, and slicing down any Anbu unlucky enough to get in his way. It would take about 60 seconds for the village to declare lockdown. More than enough time for him to slip in his apartment, retrieve all his supplies, say his goodbyes, and be well into the deep forest of Fire Country before those massive gates closed. But he banished the thoughts the moment he thought of her. How could he ever leave her? The question echoed in his mind as her gentle hands unzipped his bulky vest. It cluttered to the floor, his sword attached to it, chattering on the ground. He wordlessly lifted his arms above his head, allowing her to pull his black long-sleeve shirt off. Left in his skin-tight sleeveless face mask shirt, the necklace that he won long ago from the Slug Queen herself became exposed, twinkling lightly. She sat herself across his lap, gliding her hands through his in that perfectly soothing manner. Talk to me, Naruto-kun. What's wrong? He didn't respond for a few moments, choosing to just stare at her. His previous question still radiated in his mind, and he came to an epiphany as he pulled down his face mask and kissed her. And like the angel she was, she wordlessly accepted his show of affection, laying down on the bed, his form ravishing hers with kisses. Clothes became discarded, and soon the familiar sensation of two bodies joining in unison blissfully led them through the night. And as her moans filled the night, her hand gently running through his hair, he inwardly answered his own peril. He couldn't leave her. Not even if he tried. Omake, the Anbu commander. Before he could blink, he found himself surrounded on all sides by Anbu. Swords poised and ready to cut him down if he so much as moved. The elite force stood rigid. Although vastly outnumbering him, they instantly recognized who they were up against, and some shuffled tensely. Is that Naruto-senpai? The Yellow Fang is our enemy. Well, it's been nice knowing y'all. Quiet. The Anbu commander stood tall and imposing as he or she appeared in the room. Clad in all black with a red coat, the commander made an intimidating sight in appearance. There was no flicker of movement, no sound or smoke. The leader of the Black Ops group had just appeared. Naruto Namikaze. Rank Jounin, Ninja Registration, 012607. You are hereby under arrest for the assault of the 3rd Hokage of Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi and Anbu Black Ops soldiers. The voice-altering software was indistinguishable in nature, making he or she's voice androgynous. Arrest him. When no one made a move, the commander sighed, before he or she walked forwards. When he or she stood before Naruto, he or she gestured to his sword. Please hand me your weapon and utility pouch. When Naruto made no move to do so, the commander shook his slasher head. Listen, you have 3 options. 1. We disarm you and you come quietly. 2. You try and I fight, we overpower you. We win, you lose. 3. We all rush you and hope to see if you're as fast as they say you are. Hands on his slasher hips, she waited. Well? Naruto eyes over the commander's form. There was nothing to indicate male or female, and the commander was quite tall as they almost stood face to face. Are you a man or a woman? The commander tilted his slasher head. My gender doesn't concern you. What should be of concern is that you have less than 10 seconds to choose before I choose for you. And I'm going for 3. He nodded slowly and his hand flashed out. The commander squeaked, feeling where his hand had landed, and every mouth in the room dropped open. Naruto slowly retracted his hand, looking content. You're a woman. I knew it. Whispers were heard and masked faces turned to one another. No fucking way he's a chick. Motherfucker, I told you. You owe me 500. Ah, shit, fuck. Who knew she was a he? Oh man. Wait till the boys on the border hear about this one. That's a relief. I thought I was gay. Masked faces turned to the lone individual. What? Quiet. The commander stood shaking with fury and Naruto could picture the face under the helmet burning with embarrassment. Jerk. Naruto couldn't react in time to the knee to the groin and fell down in heap, withering in pain. Option 3, she shouted, dogpiling him. Everyone else joined and the entire contingent of Anbu dogpiled him. Chapter 8, The Root of All Fears. The steady taps echoed through the dark hallway, penetrating the piercing silence as its owner limped onwards, never breaking stride. His robes fluttered softly with each movement, the white and dark colors blending perfectly with the darkness around him. Single eye closed, face void of any emotion, Dansu limped through the dark hallways of his underground root base. Beside him a young boy of an unhealthy pale complexion followed his master's shadow, face as blank as his pale skin. Garbed in traditional root attire, the young boy wordlessly moved forward as Dansu stopped before a large iron door, and opened it, allowing his master passage. He bowed as Dansu passed him, silently closing the door and taking sentry outside. Entering through without a word, Dansu continued forward, arriving before a pair of whispering soldiers who quickly kneeled, bowing before his presence. His lone eye glanced over their forms critically, gaze locked on the heads of each masked face. They waited patiently, postures still as statues, as Dansu conducted his silent observation. Remove your mask. They instantly obeyed, removing their white masks, lifting their heads in sync to reveal their features to his lone eye. Fu report. The male among the duo tilted his head in acknowledgement before beginning to transpire the events that he had witnessed not long ago. It is you suspected, my lord. He knows. Dansu narrowed his eye, his mouth turning downwards into a frown. How did Hiruzen react? Fu kept his features blank. His voice emotionless. He let him go. Dansu's frown deepened. Hiruzen let the boy go? His mind raced to think of the reasons why Hiruzen just didn't try and kill him right there. Surely in his old age he couldn't match him, but with the aid of the Anbu plus the presence of the commander he could have easily overwhelmed him. What game was he playing? To let such knowledge be freely exposed, and by him no less, it would be too dangerous to let him run free. Hatred would shape his heart and he would seek vengeance. Justice. Revenge. Dansu was all too aware of those dangerous roads. What else did he find out? He questioned. He knows of the Kyuubi's vessel's weakness. Fu blinked. He entered the boy's subconscious and spoke with the beast. Dansu's lone eye went wide at that news. So, he was finally learning that the Sharingan could do more than just copy jutsu. Dansu shook his head. Hiruzen was surely a fool for letting him go. But still, to be able to penetrate Konohamaru's subconscious mind and speak with the beast was an extraordinary feat. He didn't have a speck of Uchiha blood in him and was able to forcefully suppress the beast's chakra with his Sharingan alone. Naruto was a dangerous one. Still, for Hiruzen to let him be the one to teach the Jinchuriki and the last Uchiha. What on earth had that monkey been thinking? And to think that he would have access to the Naka shrine by proxy of his student. He fought the urge to sigh, thinking of the consequences if he ever learned the secrets of the Sharingan. If he ever unlocked the Manikyo, then Dansu would arm his entire root force and attack, consequences be damned. He was already ridiculously powerful, and that I would just make him unstoppable. The two root soldiers remained motionless as their master cursed. Dansu gripped the wood of his cane tight enough to almost snap it in half. If only Konohamaru didn't turn out as failure, he could have had the Hokage seat by now. Naruto's strength would be no match against Konoha under his command. He was the one to instigate young Konohamaru's training when he reached of age. He wanted to start earlier on, but no, Hiruzen wanted his grandson to have a childhood. Even when his Jinkyuriki training failed, Dansu could have shaped the boy into a raw weapon. His hidden potential and Sarutobi talent would have made him a force of nature. For however long his body would last, that is. But still, it was a wasted opportunity. He could have been salvaged and sent on missions too dangerous for the most elite of shinobi. But Hiruzen's weak ideology proved too strong, his heart too soft to make the hard decisions. Devastated by the failure and blaming himself for subjecting his godson through years of torture, Hiruzen thought it had all been for nothing. The god of shinobi's one weakness was his own godson. Pitiful. Soon enough, Dansu's blank check was cut and his hidden ace was stripped from his clutches and put back into the academy, where his skills and mind were left to rust. Forced to live out the remainder of his days till his body broke down. Oh, what could have been? If he had Konohamaru for a little longer, he could have placed a special seal on the boy, binding him to his every whim. And with the first Hokage's cells, Shisui's right eye, and a Jinkyuriki under his command, he would have started a coup d'état and overthrown Hiruzen. He knew for certain that his old teammate would never harm his own grandson. Of course, the resulting chaos would have thrown the Konoha into a civil war. Many lives would be lost and the village would ultimately be weakened. All necessary sacrifices for the greater good. He would rise up as new leader for the village. Rule with a heart of stone and will of fire, and lead Konoha to glory. It would be the dawn of the new age. The age of the leaf. Namikaze would have been dealt with swiftly. But alas, those were mere dreams, and the harsh reality eventually set in. Konoha had lost its weapon. This time, Dansu did sigh, shaking his head in regret. Although he would never admit out loud, that old monkey was a crafty one. To have harnessed those cells. Not even he had ever thought of that. What was even more interesting was that he knew Hiruzen's old student was the one to help him do it. Not literally, of course. Orochimaru would rather die than help any Konoha shinobi, much less his old teacher. No, Hiruzen had been crafty like the monkey he was. Salvaging the lab his old student had in Konoha, the one that should have been destroyed, he had used Orochimaru's notes on cloning and extensive knowledge on human biology to salvage what he could of the supposed dying offspring and managed to save healthy, living, Uzumaki cells and store them. But to do all that right after Minato had finished his battle with the Kyuubi, it had taken some spine. He smirked, thinking of the day when he had caught him in the sealing room. Never in all his years had he known his old teammate. Would he ever think he would do that? So overcome with shock, he had revealed Shisui's Sharingan just to make sure what he was seeing was true. At times Hiruzen was an enigma to him. Seemingly gentle and grandfatherly one moment, then brutal and cold the next. What he witnessed that night, doomed to remember it till his deathbed, he would never underestimate his rival ever again. Hiruzen couldn't hide his sins forever. But then again, neither could he. He already has Naruto's wrath. But to lie directly into his face was a gamble. A very deadly gamble. He hoped Hiruzen was keeping his cards close to his chest. For if Naruto ever found out the truth, then he would come after the both of them. He would kill, no, not just kill, massacre every single one that knew what really happened that night. Even if it were both him and Hiruzen fighting, the results would be no different. That Dansu could regrettably admit. Hence why he kept his root agents close and ever-present eyes monitoring the Fourth's legacy. Even years later, human cloning was still beyond Hiruzen's seemingly endless knowledge, and Orochimaru hadn't left enough notes on it to be effective. The first few ones that were grown in a year quickly died shortly after. Their bodies tearing themselves apart, too weak to do anything other than breathe. Much less contain the Kyuubi. He had to resort to surrogates to get the most effective use of the Uzumaki cells. But out of all the females' population in Konoha, only a few could match the strict gene pool candidate. Those Uzumakis, they were tough ones. Even their cells boasted superior attributes. No wonder their men never flocked to women of different clans. Their women were strong, very strong indeed. So Dansu had to be adaptable. Why should Hiruzen be the only one to have his own Uzumaki private army? If he wanted those genes, he had to take a different approach. Turning his attention to the only female member of the duo, He let his mouth momentarily curve upwards into a small smirk, before it vanished, seeming to never have formed in the first place. Staring into her eyes, he was all business as he gave her his full attention. "Has any progress been made?" She bowed her head, closing her eyes before addressing him. "No, Dansu-sama." A graying eyebrow raised. "Elaborate." He uses a contraception seal whenever we're intimate." Dansu tisked. The boy was worthy of his seal master title. But he needed results. And he needed them now. He had sent her in for a few months already and still no results. Failure was something he didn't stand for. "I want results." His single eye bore down on her. "Failure is not an option." She bowed. "Forgive me, Dansu-sama, but if I may, I wish to speak freely with your permission." He frowned. Where was this coming from? After tense moments of silence, he nodded stiffly. It takes time, my lord. A large step such as this will take a substantive amount of consideration. And despite everything, he's very untrusting. I beg you to allow me more time, Dansu-sama." She lowered her head, her blonde locks spilling downwards. Dansu stared at his rude seductress critically, weighing her words carefully. His brow creased in thought. After agonizing moments of silence, he thumped his cane on the ground in resolution, the sound piercing the unbearable silence. "Make sure by the next time we meet, you're pregnant." His words were cold as steel as he glanced at both brother and sister. "Or the next pair of soldiers to fight to the death will be you too." They bowed deeply, their heads touching the floor, as Dansu turned on his heel and slowly limped away. Without pause, the door opened for him and he silently glanced at his young protege as the boy closed the large door behind him. Wordlessly walking forward, his cane tapped the steel floors harshly. "Come, Sai." His order roused the young man and he silently followed his master. "I must start your training. I fear you might be my final contingency plan if everything fails." Despite being at such a young age, the boy was a master assassin. His skills were highly effective, having never failed to kill a target. "Yes, Dansu-sama." Sai's whisper was quiet. Dansu didn't pay any attention to it, used to the boy's emotionless attributes. He had personally been the one to drill them into his young mind. If he listened closing enough, he would have the underlying uncertainty in the tone. Blissfully unaware behind his back, Sai glanced at his hand, finding the appendage shaking. "What is this?" Flipping a page in his book, Naruto walked through Konoha's busy streets, curious eyes tracing his form in astonishment, as he dodged traffic in his way with his vision completely obscured by the book's orange covers. One hand tucked into his pocket, the other gently holding his book, Naruto slowly walked onwards, making his way to the Sarutobi compound. He did promise Konohamaru that he and the young Genin would talk. He could guess the boy felt guilty over losing control and almost killing him during their dangerous encounter in Black River. After that, they would head to the training grounds for a team meeting. Under the cover of his book, his face was set in a fierce scowl as his thoughts drifted over the previous night. He was pissed. But for now, he put a lid on his temper. He had Genin to focus on and couldn't allow himself to be plagued by vengeful thoughts. He didn't even get any sleep the previous night. How could he? Finding out the man you had grown to respect was handing around the cells of your dead sibling like candy. Never in his life had he felt such a raw need to kill. His mind had wondered about everything. What would happen? He could settle this legally, bringing his case to the Land of Fire Supreme Court and claim a violation of human rights, with a direct inhumane treatment to the long history between what was once Konoha's greatest ally, the Uzumaki clan. His mother's clan. Riha had even suggested he had a strong case. Plus he was also held in high favor with the Fire Daimyo and held considerable influence both in and out of Konoha. Underneath his headband his Sharingan burned. He didn't want to settle things legally. He was a warrior. An expert in the application of violence. Trained in the art of combat and warfare. The army slayer wanted to burst out. The yellow fang that had solidified him as S-rank monster of the battlefield. Law was for the politics and nobles. Fuck all of that civilized bullshit. He wanted to kill. Level this Kami for Sakan village to the ground. Find those abominations and vaporize them with the roar of thunder. Slaughter the third and the higher-ups till there were nothing but flesh and bone, and then he would cut open their dead corpses and see if their cells could be salvaged. He blinked, realizing he had been leaking killing intent. He relaxed his stiff posture and he felt his rapidly beating heart rate slow down. With a sigh he expelled those thoughts from his mind. Rationality had to eventually set in and the deep consequences of taking such acts. Even if he did manage to kill the third, Konoha wouldn't just give him a slap on the wrist and say all is forgiven. Fuck no. He would be declared a missing nin faster than the Raikage's body flicker and have every village on the continent after his head. Could he even leave his friends behind? His loved ones? Asuma, one of his closest friends, was the third's last living son. Even though the man disliked his father, he wouldn't take his death lightly. And his team, could he just leave them after everything they've been through? He slouched thinking of it all. It was Ria's logic that had reverberated through his mind that night. The soft-spoken whispers had coaxed his boiling anger and had eventually stopped him from starting what would be an eventual civil war. Naruto allowed a small smile to form underneath his mask. She was his little ball of sunshine. She was almost like a beacon of hope, giving light to this dark time he was going through. He told her everything that had transpired that night. She listened to every word, paying rapt attention to everything, eyes even comically going wide when he had told her about slicing through the Anbu like butter with his sword. He even lightly bragged he had sent the Hokage flying with a mean right hook. Which she then reacted in the form of throttling him. "You fucking idiot. You hit the Hokage?" she shouted as she squeezed life from his throat. "You piece of shit baka chinko aho hakuchi kono." If it weren't for the small hand squeezing his windpipe and his face turning blue from suffocation, he would have been laughing till his face turned red as his tender-mouthed sweetheart called him every word in the book. Damn, was she hot whenever she got upset. He absently traced the spot on his neck where her fingers had been, lightly chuckling to himself. She was hot when she became angry, but was also terribly strong. It almost reminded him of the days when his mother got really upset. He shuddered at the thought. Not even his father wanted to be around that. He stiffened momentarily, his smile instantly left his face and he immediately put his book away, sliding into his utility pouch. The crowds around Konoha kept going about their day. The occasional shinobi would be seen carrying out his or her business, with the bright afternoon sun providing humid weather. Nothing was out of the ordinary. If there was one thing Naruto trusted absolutely throughout his career, it would be his senses. From his acute hearing, or his sensitive nose, Naruto wholeheartedly trusted his intuition. There was no such thing as a paranoid shinobi, and for a damn good reason. And right now his senses told him he was being followed. Naruto kept walking onwards, but slowly tilted his head, using his long bangs to cover glancing out the corner of his eye. Behind him he saw normal people going about their business, not a single person stood out as suspect to him. His gaze traveled upwards and his eye narrowed as it zeroed in on the rooftops. Of course, the height advantage would provide significant cover and surveillance. He turned his attention forward, keeping his pace steady and his form relaxed not to draw attention to himself. His single eye darted around, looking for anything that might provide as a distraction. Like an active kami, some construction workers were walking slowly down the street carrying heavy sacks of dirt. Naruto grinned underneath his mask and focused chakra discreetly to his index finger. A small spinning ball of chakra formed. With a flick of his finger, the ball sailed through the air unnoticed, and hit the bag of dirt, exploding it in the middle of the street, startling civilians and shinobi alike in the vicinity. A thick cloud of smoke caused those nearby to start coughing, and people quickly moved away from the dirt cloud. Naruto shoved his hands in his pockets, walking forward through the cloud without a care in the world. His form became covered briefly before he emerged, lightly dusting off any accumulated dust. He continued forward, pulling out his book and adapting his customary lazy slouch. The military police were quickly on the scene, clearing onlookers out the way. Covered in dirt, the worker looked utterly miserable as he got a tongue lashing from one of the officers trying to explain how the bag suddenly exploded in his hands. No one saw the distortion that quickly leapt to the rooftops. Under the camouflage of the transparency jutsu, Naruto's shadow clone watched the original slowly make his way down the street. His lone eye darted around the rooftops, trying to catch the presence he felt when he was on ground level. He glanced at the rooftops, seeing nothing but normal buildings and the occasional shinobi. Whoever it was, he was good. As adept as he was at sensing chakra, nothing was out of the ordinary on the rooftops. No flicker, or movements. Just the blowing wind that dash. There. He would have missed if it wasn't for the layer of dust that floated upwards from the dust cloud. It spilled over on a roof, settling on the concrete like a blanket of sand. He smiled thinly as footprints became visible before a light breeze came and blew the dust away, letting it flicker into the wind. Bingo! Naruto thought to himself. Whoever was using that camouflage jutsu didn't take into account their surroundings. Always mind your surroundings. His hand lifted to rest on his headband, and the world soon focused into sharp clarity. His eye narrowed as he saw the distinct chakra flow of the figure. From the way his chakra flowed, Naruto could tell the figure's form was crouched, fixated on his original, making his way through the streets. His Sharingan spun rapidly in his eye, focusing sharper and sharper till the figure's form became distinctly visible. Soon enough Naruto could see the workings of the figure's outline. His mouth formed a line under his mask. He began to suppress his chakra, disappearing in a body flicker. In a flicker of movement he was behind the figure, seemingly unaware of his presence. He cut off the flow of chakra to the transparency jutsu and his form became visible again to the naked eye. Blissfully ignorant to the danger, the figure stayed crouched, watching as the real Naruto continued his lazy stroll. His form paused in the distance and he held up his hands just in time to catch a familiar blonde blur crashing into him. "Lucky bastard, isn't he?" Naruto said lightly. He glanced at the woman in his arms. "Look at that ass." The figure instantly leapt to his side, gaining distance between the two of them and at the same time drawing his tanto. Now up close could see his outline more clearly and deduced he was a man. The male spread his legs a bit, keeping his knees bent and his body poised. Naruto noticed it was a perfect act of balance, giving the unidentified man movement to suddenly attack or flee if necessary. "You might as well drop the jutsu," Naruto stated calmly. "I can see you perfectly." The figure did not do as requested, only choosing to stay poised, his masked face never straying from Naruto's relaxed form. The figure turned his head slightly, as if weighing his options. Naruto's hand came to rest on the hilt of his sword, slowly drawing the blade with the sound of sliding metal. "Why are you following me?" The figure didn't react, but Naruto could see his fingers tighten on his small tanto. Every distinct shift of his muscles, every twitch of tension in his body, the image of his next movement was visible clear to his eye. The figure stayed coiled, but his hand discreetly went to his pouch. The tomo spun rapidly before slowing in his eye and he blitzed forward, sword poised for a strike before the figure could throw down the smoke bomb in his hand. His sword strike was blocked, but his free arm lashed out to halt the arm that held the bomb. If any passerby took time to look, they would see the strange sight of Naruto seemingly grabbing nothing but air. Naruto ran lighting chakra through his arm and the figure let out a hiss as his chakra flow became disturbed and the camouflage jutsu around his form dropped. Momentarily stunned, he wasn't prepared for the hand that latched around his neck. Naruto's eyes narrowed and with an impressive display of raw strength flipped the now identified root agent and smashed him into the ground. The smoke bomb in his hand exploded from impact and the thick cloud enveloped the entire rooftop. Naruto could feel the rapidly closing chakra signatures coming to investigate as the smoke spread out into the air. He glanced at the stunned root agent and waited for the seal he had planted on his neck to solidify. Stomping on the man's neck harshly, he held up a hand in the ram sign and focused his chakra, ignoring the way the agent struggled against the foot crushing his throat. He had to close his eyes in concentration as he felt his chakra finally grasp out to seal he had placed, and in his mind the picture of a room appeared, the seal placed on the wall pulsing as his chakra connected with it. An Onbu patrol quickly appeared on the scene as the smoke evaporated, staring in confusion at an empty rooftop. "What was that?" Riha questioned, glancing at the rooftop that had suddenly exploded into smoke. Seconds later a team of Onbu appeared as the smoke evaporated. Naruto glanced at the roof in question with a lazy eye. "Ma, just some kids playing a prank." Riha didn't respond, only staring at the roof curiously before she turned her attention back on the streets, idly watching people walk by. "So how was your mission?" Naruto asked, wrapping an arm around her. Riha lightly hummed to herself in thought, absently stroking the arm around her shoulders. "Just a plain old B rank," she sighed. "It was so boring. Had to lead a squad of Chunin on a military base patrol, you know, the one near the capital?" Naruto nodded, stroking his chin. "That does sound boring." She clicked her tongue. "I don't know what was worse, the mission itself, or the whole squad of Chunin that were constantly trying to flirt." She shook her head, lightly resting it on Naruto's arm. Naruto just chuckled lightly. "Flirting, eh? Can't blame them, I mean, have you seen your ass?" Riha giggled. "They can look but no touching is allowed." Her baby blues glanced up at him. "Only one person gets that privilege." Naruto grinned. "Lucky me." He leaned down and pressed a kiss against her lips, uncaring that his mask was still on. Not that Riha minded anyways. They continued on in silence before Riha perked up. "Where are we heading?" she questioned. Naruto glanced down at her. "Well, I'm heading to the Sarutobi clan compound. I don't know where you're going." She pouted at him. "Can't I come, Naru-kun?" Rolling his eye, he slowly shook his head before nodding in acceptance, causing her to grin. Soon enough the large gates of the Sarutobi clan entrance came into view, bearing their distinct clan symbol. The kanji for monkey was bared proudly as the two blondes stood before the impressive gates. Respectfully greeting the gate guards, Naruto bowed politely. The two guards saluted his greeting before they gestured him passage. Naruto continued forward, but Riha was stopped by one of the dark-haired guards. "Sorry ma'am, but I cannot allow you in trance." She frowned and her eyes met Naruto's as he sheepishly scratched his cheek. My bad Riha-chan. They don't allow strangers and I'm short of an honored guest," he chuckled at her narrowed eyes. "Just chill out here for a bit, I won't be long." She pouted but nodded in acceptance nonetheless. Crossing her arms under her chest, she watched Naruto continue forward into compound. Walking with his hands shoved his pockets, Naruto took in the scenery of the beautiful clan grounds. Spanning nearly 3 kilometers, the Sarutobi clan was one of the largest in Konoha, second in size only to the Hyuga. Trees layered the grounds and in the distance Naruto could see a large jungle forest, seemingly home to some of the monkeys that the clan bred. His sightseeing was halted as he came before the main house. A large mansion ingrained with the clan's symbol, the main house stood proud and imposing, its deep history rooting all the way to the times when Konoha was first built. Its beauty was truly magnificent as the red oak glistened in the afternoon sun. The wood was personally made from the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju himself, as a gift to clan. What had caused him to halt were the shouting voices that were audible from all the way outside. "I don't give a fuck. You hear me? I don't give a fuck." That sounded a lot like Konomaru. But Naruto had rarely heard the young Sarutobi so angry. "Watch your mouth, boy. I am the leader of this clan. If you don't like that, then leave." Now that was the grizzled voice of the third shouting back in equal ferocity. His voice even louder than Konohamaru's. The front doors of the mansion was kicked open and a furious Konohamaru stormed out. "Fine old man." The third trailed behind him, clad in his Hokage robes but missing his distinct hat. "This conversation isn't over, boy." "Konohamaru." Hiruzen made to grab his arm, but was pushed back and nearly sent to the ground from a furious shove. Red eyes glared back at him as Konohamaru bared his teeth. "Don't fucking touch me, old man." Their loud voices were causing quite a scene and soon clansmen were surrounding their form. Guards tried to help compose the third but he waved them off. He pointed a finger at the angry Jinchuriki. "Listen here, and listen well. I will not be made a fool of in front of my clan." He pointed to the house. "You can either go back inside, and we can finish this conversation civilly, or you can throw a tantrum like a child and be forcefully restrained." Konohamaru stared numbly at him before his red eyes seemed to glow and his form began to shake. "Listen to yourself, old man. You make it sound like the bullshit you're sprouting is the actual truth." Hiruzen sighed. "Listen, Konohamaru, I do what I must for this dash." "No, you listen, old man." Konohamaru marched right up into his face, causing those around the third to back up in fright. "Fuck you. Fuck Dansu. And fuck this piece of shit village." He emphasized each word with a finger poking against his chest and finally exploded with another shove that the third was prepared for as he only stepped back. Hiruzen narrowed his eyes. "Take care, my young grandson. I won't hesitate to charge you with heresy." Konohamaru smiled humorlessly. "Yeah, of course you would treat family like that." His voice broke. "And no wonder Dad left." He turned on his heel, stomping away from the third, missing the way the old man flinched. Sarutobi members hissed at the display of disrespect and looked ready to intervene, but the third simply held up his hand, stopping them. Konohamaru caught Naruto's form and he slowly walked to stand before him. His eyes were no longer red but teary-eyed and his body was shaking. Naruto wordlessly wrapped an arm around him and the young boy rested his head against his vest crying. Naruto glanced at the third, seeing the old man watching the duo before their gazes locked. They stared at each other for a few seconds before the third broke eye contact and made his way back into the main house. Naruto wordlessly directed Konohamaru forward to the gates before glancing at the crying boy. "You want to talk about it, Ko?" Konohamaru wordlessly shook his head in response, using his long scarf to dry his tears. They walked in silence, eventually arriving before the clan gates. The guards quickly became alarmed seeing the clan heir in such a state, but their concerns were waved off by Konohamaru. Riha was patiently waiting, leaning on the clan walls for support, but quickly perked up at seeing the two. "Hey Konohamaru-kun, how's it going?" She walked up to the two but quickly lost her smile as she saw his teary eyes. "What's wrong, Ko-kun?" The young Genin didn't answer, only vainly trying to wipe away his seemingly endless tears with his scarf. Riha glanced at Naruto, but he could only shrug. "What happened?" she questioned telepathically. "He and the old man were having a serious argument." Naruto answered back. "It was quite nasty." Riha only nodded before she enveloped the young boy in a warm hug, lightly stroking his brown hair as he began shake with silent cries. Tenderly his arms came to rest around her waist and his form seemed to tremble in her arms. She soothingly hushed his cries, softly running her fingers through his hair, holding him tight against her. She bent her head, whispering low enough for only his ears. Let it out, Ko. Her hand rubbed small circles in his back. Soon enough his cries settled down and his shaking stopped. Over the top of his head Riha caught Naruto's raised brow and she silently giggled at his confusion. A woman's touch, she conveyed. She felt Konohamaru stir slightly and he loosened his grip around her waist, withdrawing himself from her warm embrace. She gently smiled at him before stroking his cheek. You feel better now, Ko-kun? The Genin blushed despite his embarrassment but nodded nonetheless. You want to talk about it, Konohamaru? Naruto repeated his last question, watching the young Genin silently enjoy Riha's soft ministrations. The old man. He started with a whisper. He wants me to start my duties as the heir for the clan. Naruto frowned underneath his mask. The young Sarutobi was in fact the clan heir. His young age and his status could only mean one thing. He wants you to marry. Naruto finished. Konohamaru nodded. He wants to set up an arranged marriage for me when I turn 16. Even more, he wants when I become a Chunin to quit shinobi life and become a full-time clan heir. He gritted his teeth. That's when I told him to go fuck himself. Naruto sighed painfully, resisting the urge to march back into the Sarutobi compound. And then he thought about it. Konohamaru's body couldn't contain the Kyuubi. Something that couldn't be contained would eventually break out. His mind is strong but his body is weak. He remembered the Kyuubi's words from inside his mindscape. The third knew that the inevitable would happen and was probably trying to make his life worth it. Naruto could understand that. He had to watch his grandson slowly die and he wanted him to experience life before his demise. The suffering he was soon going to be subjected to would be torture. His mind remembered vividly the amount of pain the young Genin was in just from accessing the chakra shroud. But from his expression it would seem that Konohamaru didn't even know about his condition. Kono, Naruto stopped himself. He didn't have the heart to tell him. At least not right now and so openly exposed. Gazing at those wide brown eyes his resolve hardened. He wouldn't allow it. Glancing down at his stomach he could picture the seal his father had sacrificed his life to place on him. All he would need too is the key from Jiraiya. Naruto made a silent promise that very moment, Konohamaru would live. He would make sure of that. Rubbing the top of the boy's spiky hair affectionately I smiled. Cheer up, Ko. Don't worry about that stuff, I'll take care of everything, okay? Konohamaru tenderly nodded before a small smile began to form on his face. Naruto grinned. Now, let's head to the training ground. We're already late for a team meeting. Konohamaru nodded before he turned to Riha, who had been respectfully quiet the whole time. You coming, Riha-chan? She smiled before she gestured to Naruto. I don't know, Ko-kun, you'll have to ask your sensei. When big brown eyes turned to him, Naruto sighed. Fine. He acquiesced. The Genin grinned up at Riha, who returned his smile and to Naruto's amusement bent down to press a soft kiss against his cheeks, giggling when his face turned red. They all began to walk together, Naruto reading his book, and Konohamaru holding hands with Riha, who giggled as he told her some jokes. Naruto stared at them out of the corner of his eye, smiling fondly at the pair. It would seem Konohamaru did indeed need a woman's touch. The young boy had lost his mother during the Kyuubi attack, his file indicating he had watched her get crushed under their collapsing house. His father had been missing for years after venturing off to the lands of his summons. He had questioned the third previously over the subject, but the old man wasn't ready to talk about losing another one of his sons, counting the fact that his last one had little respect for him. And for what he had overheard, the man had left because of his father. Even though he had his clan, Konohamaru's status no doubt provided him with hidden scorn and rejection. He had seen the way some of his own clan members were looking at him. That look of fear was strong in their eyes. Sensei. Naruto focused on the young Genin. Weren't we supposed to talk about the... He trailed off, glancing at Riha, who smiled softly at him. Don't worry, I know, Ko. The young Genin jumped at the voice in his head but returned her smile. You want to talk about it? Naruto questioned. He had almost forgotten, but if the young boy wanted to he wouldn't deny him. With his nod, Naruto walked closer to Riha and intertwined her free hand with his, allowing her to link their minds. Okay, let's talk. The image of all three of them walking hand in hand painted the picture of a small family, but nobody seemed to notice. So do you remember what happened? Naruto started. Konohamaru slowly shook his head, his form slumped as he remembered the events. I remember some parts but not everything. I was fighting that boy. Wait, how did he have the Kyuubi's chakra? Naruto narrowed his eye. His father sealed some of the Kyuubi's chakra into him the day it attacked. Konohamaru's mouth was open in shock before his eyes seemed to grow distant in memory. Naruto gently nudged him, seeing his look. Konohamaru? Oh right, where was I? Angry. I was getting angry. Really angry. I could feel so much hatred, so much malevolence. I was going to kill him. He glanced at Naruto with wide eyes. And then you came and you used those chains. You can suppress the Kyuubi's chakra? Naruto nodded. Yep, it's a special ability of mine. Konohamaru looked starstruck. Wow, that's so cool, sensei. A frown marred his face. Everything after that went black. I can't remember anything. What happened? Naruto sighed. You went to a four-tailed state. You lost all sense of rationality and control and attacked me. Konohamaru flinched. Did I hurt you? Naruto stared directly in his eyes before he decided to be truthful. No. You didn't hurt me, the Kyuubi did. Hands nearly got corroded off. Konohamaru smiled nervously at his words before he lost his expression and his eyes swelled with dread. What about Sora? You killed him. The young boy, being emaciated, was forever burned into his mind. Konohamaru slumped against Riha and she wrapped an arm around him in support. Don't forget, Konohamaru, you had to kill him anyway. Naruto stated. He would have died that night either way. Konohamaru looked miserable. I know. But I know the destruction I'm capable of in my four-tailed state. I mean, I almost killed you, didn't I? Naruto stroked his chin and thought. It's nothing worse than what Riha-chan can do. He said smugly, meeting her narrowed eyes. Talk about vicious, I'll take on a tailed beast any day, rather than having to come home and deal with that. He pointed at Riha for emphasis. Konohamaru laughed and Riha's eyes narrowed to slits as Naruto continued. I mean, you should see her in the morning. That's a sight I wouldn't wish on my most hated enemy. The telepathic conversation was broken as her anger began to rise. Konohamaru slowly began to edge away from the furious-looking blonde. I always thought rumors of women looking terrible in mornings was untrue, but the first time I saw it for myself I thought, hot damn, did a severe case of fugly take a shit on your face while I was asleep? I smiled at her. Had to scramble for some toilet paper to get that stuff off, right, Riha-chan? Twack. Two figures instantly appeared from a dimensional void, one hitting the ground harshly, another stumbling on his feet. Naruto's shadow clone took a few seconds to steady himself before he lightly shook his head. Geez, I'm still sloppy on the landing. The agent he had transported used his momentum to roll to his feet. His hand reached for his tanto, but he realized he had dropped it when Naruto had slammed him to ground on the rooftop. Naruto sheathed his sword, ominously cracking his knuckles as his Sharingan glowed in the darkness that enshrouded the room they were in. Well, now it's just me and you. He bared his canines under his mask. No interruptions. The agent took time to survey his surroundings, seeing they were in a large room that resembled something of an apartment. The gray walls were bare and there were no visible windows or anything to identify their location. In the center of the room were sets of plain couches and a small coffee table. Behind Naruto he could see a small kitchen. Where have you transported me? The agent finally spoke, his voice unidentifiable by the voice-altering software in his mask. He knew that whatever jutsu the Jounin had used had been space-time, as they entered a dark void of some sort and were transported here faster than the blink of an eye. Naruto slowly walked forward. Wouldn't you like to know? The agent slowly stepped back with each step Naruto took and was suddenly stopped as his back hit a door. Naruto chose to stop walking, and that was all the agent needed to open the door and leap out. Only for his eyes to widen and his mouth to open in a silent scream as he fell into a void of endless black. He glanced backward and saw the rapidly fading visage of the blonde poking his head out of the door for what seemed like an apartment unit seemingly floating in the endless darkness. He saw a brilliant golden flash and a chain of pure gold wrapped around his ankle. The agent palmed a kunai and ran his chakra through it, trying to cut the metal, but it seemed virtually unbreakable. His attempts were in vain as the chain began to shorten and the floating apartment came closer and closer. Soon enough he was hauled up to doorway, left hanging by his ankle, watching a smug Naruto glance down at him. Well, to answer your question, we're in a pocket dimension. I must say you're the only bastard who ever jumped. Most poor bastards were just thrown out the door. He tilted his head. The void is infinite, so sometimes I hear them scream for a long time. The agent threw his kunai, but Naruto simply tilted his head, allowing the blade to fly by harmlessly. His Sharingan narrowed as he saw the burst of chakra, and he turned in time to block the strike to his head, as the agent finished utilizing a replacement with the kunai he had just thrown. You're good. The agent replied in form of gripping his arm and returning the favor, flipping Naruto and using the momentum to throw him out the door. Naruto threw his hands forward, two chains flashing out and attaching to the ends of the door. Underneath his mask, the agent's eyes widened as Naruto propelled himself forward with his chains, and didn't have time to react as he was speared, knocking the breath out of him. They both tumbled into the apartment, Naruto rolling the agent with his momentum and sliding to his feet, tossing the man against the wall. The agent hit the wall feet first, reinforcing his legs with chakra before he rocketed off, engaging Naruto in a fierce battle of taijutsu. The agent jabbed forward, Naruto ducking under the blow, rocketing upwards with an uppercut that sent the man flying. Using the force of the blow, the agent flipped himself, landing on his feet. He didn't have time to react as Naruto was suddenly in front of him, lashing out with a kick that sent him crashing against the stone walls. Beneath his mask, the agent's eyes widened and he ducked in time to miss the fist that smashed straight through the wall where his head had been. He palmed a kunai and struck forward, but a hand halted the appendage. Naruto's knee lifted to knock the knife out of the man's hand into the air, and he smashed a fist against the pale mask and finished with a spinning kick that sent the man crashing into the couches. Without a pause, he held up his hand, catching the knife as it fell into his open palm, and twirled it lazily, watching the man as he struggled to his feet. "As I mentioned, you're good. Really good. But I'm better." The agent couldn't disagree as fingered the long crack that had formed in his mask. With a flick of his wrist, Naruto sent the knife flying, and the agent ducked in time to miss having his head pierced. Naruto watched the man slowly rise to his feet, his form panting from the exertion. "Why don't you just give up? You can take off your mask and let me torture you, or you can continue this fight resulting in me kicking your ass sideways. Then I'd torture you." The agent knew he was fighting a loosened battle and quickly reached for his utility pouch. When he felt nothing, he saw Naruto hold up a small brown pack, shaking it innocently back and forth. "Missing something?" The agent blitzed forward and Naruto readied himself, but his eyes narrowed as the man turned at the last second and made a mad dash for the door. The bastard wanted to suicide. Naruto's speed was simply too great, and a chain shot out of his hand, ensnaring the man before the man could reach it. Using his own momentum against him, Naruto pulled on the chain with all his strength, rocketing the man towards him. The man didn't have time to gasp as a fist smashed against his mask, shattering it from the force, and he was sent sailing through the air before he hit the concrete walls with a crack. Naruto lowered his arm, retracting his chain, lightly dusting himself off, and slowly began to walk forward. He stood before the unconscious-looking man, lying face first on the ground. Another chain slowly snaked out of his arm and wrapped around the man's neck, hauling him into the air. Auburn locks spilled downwards as his head hung downwards. His face was bruised and his lips busted, dropping blood from his previous blow. Naruto's eye narrowed to slits and he had to rein control of his chain lest the man's neck snap. Dansu's #1 lackey. He wordlessly turned on his heel and began to head for his torture room, uncaring of the mess that had tarnished the living room. The chain kept up its grip, bringing Fu with him as he came before a large door and pressed his hand against it, letting his chakra flow. A seal materialized on the door and it opened, revealing a dark room filled with only small chair highlighted by a single swaying light bulb. Naruto walked forward and willed his chain to set the unconscious man in his custom-made torture chair. Using the chakra-reinforced metal arm and leg straps, he bonded the man to the chair, securing him in place. He glanced at him momentarily before his hand flashed out, slapping the man harshly into consciousness. Fu stirred slightly before his eyes snapped awake and instantly focused on Naruto. "Hope you had a nice nap, sunshine." "Naruto," I smiled. "'Cause I'm about to fuck you up." Fu's amber eyes were blank, his face void of any emotion as he stared his soon-to-be torturer down. Naruto lost his smile and he fixated the man with an equally blank glance. His Sharingan glowed in the dark, all the more menacing by the swaying bulb that highlighted his features momentarily before allowing the dark to shadow his face. "You know, when people torture, they always tend to get physical." He started slowly, beginning to circle around the chair. "They usually start with the little parts, fingers, toes, eyes, mouth, roughly all the small stuff. That's usually to soften them up. I can personally say it's always the weak-minded that have the loose tongues." His stride was slow, ominously circling around the helpless man like a stalking shark. "Then there's the strong-willed type. Those who you would classify that don't break under conventional means." He smirked, seeing the man's eyes flicker. "Those types can go through days of physical torture and they still won't talk." He stopped, standing in front of the man. "It's quite simple, really. It's a testament to their power of will to endure and turn suffering to their own advantage. That's why most prisoners are simply killed, because they simply can't be broken. The worst mistake a torturer can ever commit is starting with the body. You're at your most dangerous when you can subject people to great suffering without ever using physical torture. Complete and total knowledge of human psychology, Naruto. By attacking a person's mind, you gain control over their spirit. Iviki's words ran through his mind as he remembered his brief time under the man's tutelage. A finger tapped Fu's head. I, on the other hand, do not rely on such crude physical measures. I start with the mind. The body can't exist without the mind. His smirked. The mind breaks, the body will follow. You Root are said to be strong-willed, having the mindset of perfect tools. His Sharingan glowed. Well, let's find out how much you can endure. Fu didn't react, but Naruto could see the sweat that was beginning to form on his brow. His Sharingan glanced down at his wrist, seeing the elevated pulse. He smirked at the man before he gestured to walls around him. These walls are layered with seals that heighten genjutsu. His Sharingan slowly twirled. With my Sharingan you could almost say that in here I have my very own, Tsukiyomi. Fu snapped his eyes shut at the mention of the word, but Naruto just slowly smirked. A little too late. They had already made eye contact. Fu's eyes snapped open and his body went still as both men stared at each other. Naruto's brow furrowed as Fu's body gave a jerk. He was a Yamanaka, eh? This would be a little challenging. Their staring contest ensued for a few minutes, Naruto's eyes occasionally twitching and Fu's body giving a slight jerk. The more time passed, the more Naruto's eyes twitched and soon sweat was beginning to form on his brow. Not to say Fu was in any better condition. Despite his blank features, his body was soaked with sweat and his eyes were dangerously twitching. An hour passed and the mind penetration battle was still going strong. Fu's mind was resilient, trained to block out all intrusions. Naruto had tried to do things the way of a certain Uchiha, copying his style, trying to be fluid, carefully picking apart his mind. But Itachi had always been a master of genjutsu and Naruto knew there was no comparison. So he did it his way. Fu didn't make a sound, but his mouth opened in a silent scream as his mind was viciously attacked. His mental fortitude couldn't withstand the raw brute strength of Naruto's attacks and he began to shake as his mental foundations began to crumble. Naruto's Sharingan glowed and his eyes tightened as he continued his vicious assault. Almost. He could feel the man breaking. Being subjected to his will. A little longer was all it would need. The agent gritted his teeth, his features were no longer able to keep up the blank state. A stubborn one he was. Admirable but foolish. Tired of keeping this up for so long, Naruto nearly overloaded himself with his chakra as he sent a final attack at the man's mind. Fu's eyes widened and his nose began to bleed as he let out a scream of pain as his mental blocks were broken, causing a blood vessel in his brain to burst. Naruto grinned as the man slumped into unconsciousness. Fu slowly opened his eyes before closing them in pain as he remembered the vicious mental assaults he had just been subjected to. His form was panting and his body felt like it had just gone through a marathon. He slowly lifted his head, glancing around at his surroundings. He was still in the chair, but he was in a completely different environment. Glancing around in confusion, he stared at the empty room he was in before loud voices caught his attention. No. I won't allow it. The voice sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. Be reasonable. This is for the greater good. This voice was quieter but had a deadly tone to it. Fu instantly recognized his master's voice. They're just children, Dansu. How could you want to do this to innocent lives? He heard what sounded like a scoff before he heard a sigh. I understand your concern, Inoiki. But these two are very promising. Their talents would be wasted in the academy. Root will allow them to flourish and become perfect soldiers for Konoha. Inoiki sighed. Kami, Dansu, listen to yourself for 1 second. Does the Hokage even know about your child soldiers? It was quiet for a few moments. Namikaze will soon be dead in a few years. He won't be a threat. What? What the hell are you talking about? Is Minato's life in danger? Answer me. You have no need to worry. His voice was smug. Namikaze is a thorn in both of our sides and I gave him some information that he needed. Wah, what have you done, Dansu? I did what I had to do, survive. It was either my life or his. What the fuck are you talking about, Dansu? Fu felt a build of chakra and realized that the Yamanaka clan leader was preparing to fight. Are you threatening me with lethal intent, Inoiki? Dansu's voice was quiet. Answer me. There was a shuffling of movement and he felt a brief chakra spike. This time from Dansu. His limited sensing abilities felt Inoiki's chakra become disturbed. Almost if he was. Forget about this conversation. If we're lucky, things will go smoothly and the master will have the Kyuubi under his control. There was another rustle of movement. Good. Now call the children. Inoiki sighed before his voice rang out. Fu, come here please. And bring your sister too. Small feet were heard running and the sounds came closer before they stopped. Inoiki-sama. Fu flinched at the sound of his voice. Who's this? There was an intense silence again. Just follow him, children. Inoiki sounded broken. Their footsteps came closer to the room he was in and Fu flinched as the door was opened and man followed by two small bodies entered. Amber eyes stared in shock at his 7-year-old self as the young boy seemingly walked in his direction. His younger sister hesitantly traveled behind him. Fu's eyes widened as the both siblings phased through him like he was intangible, making their way to lean against the wall behind him. A younger-looking Dansu closed the door behind him, retying the bandages around his head. His younger form didn't suffer the limp that plagues his older years. Standing beside him were two unidentifiable figures, the trio all cloaked in black. "Hello, children. My name is Dansu," he greeted. Fu nodded before he returned the greeting. "I'm Fu." He gestured to the blue-eyed blonde beside him. "This is my sister. Say hi." The young girl seemed to curl herself onto her brother's shirt. Hi. Dansu resisted the urge to frown. Such behavior would have to be quickly disciplined. Nevertheless, he smiled. "It's a pleasure to meet the both of you." He tilted his head, his lone eye roaming over their faces. "I have come before you two today, to recruit the both of you to my private Onbu faction." Fu glanced at his sister before his eyes narrowed at Dansu. "Why would you want us?" "We're just starting the academy," his brow creased. "I mean, we're only kids." Dansu smiled thinly. "Yes, you are just children. But in time you will grow. I will train you till you stand as adults, perfect soldiers unmatched in all areas of the shinobi arts. True soldiers of Konoha. You would be doing your village a great service." Fu had his eyes wide and seemed to be starstruck. "Wow, that sounds so cool." He turned to his sister. "What do you think, sis?" The young girl only nodded, hesitantly staring at Dansu as he smirked. "Splendid." He gestured for them to follow, his two guards traveling behind him. They exited the room to see the red eyes of the clan head staring at them with emotion they couldn't identify. "They have agreed, Inoiki. I'll be taking them." He wordlessly walked past the silent man but was stopped when he felt a hand on his shoulder. "Take care of them, they're my sister's only children." Dansu wordlessly nodded and moved forward when the hand dropped from his shoulder. The imposing agents followed their master out the house, but Inoiki's soft whisper caught the attention of the two children. "Fu, watch out for your sister." The young boy nodded. The young girl seemed conflicted before she ran up to him and gave him a hug. "Bye, uncle. I'll miss you." Inoiki bent down to hug the girl, softly stroking her hair as tears spilled down his eyes. "Riha-chan." The world suddenly shifted and Fu gasped as he found himself back inside of Naruto's torture room. Before he could take time to gasp for air, a hand crushed his throat. Naruto's form was shaking with fury as lighting sparked around him. His Sharingan burned brightly and his normal eye took on an icy hue. Riha is your fucking sister?" Fu didn't answer. Rather, he couldn't, as his face was turning purple from the lack of oxygen. He wasn't sure if his neck was going to break or lose consciousness before Naruto released his grip. He heaved, sucking in the much-needed oxygen greedily as his form slumped into the chair. Naruto paced around the room muttering under his breath. He couldn't believe what he had just seen. Riha. The blonde that he had thought was a gift from Kami was the sister to a fucking root agent. He pulled at his hair, wondering why he never saw the signs. His form leaned against a wall for support. They had been together for as long as he had his team. Doing the math, he deduced they'd been together for something close to 6 months. So how the fuck could he have not seen any signs? Not even his ninja hounds had sensed any bad vibes from her. She was a gift in his life, the woman he had always wanted. She was loved by his team, his friends, his hounds. She was loved by everybody. She was perf. Look underneath the underneath. Naruto's eyes widened before he began to shake so hard Fu thought the blonde was having a seizure. With a roar, Naruto punched the wall so hard his fist went right through the concrete. His head thumped against the wall and his form seemed to slump, drained of all energy. She was perfect. Fucking perfect. Look underneath the underneath. He didn't want to. Even if he saw it, all was ignored in favor of finally being rid of the loneliness that had plagued him for so long. He smashed his head against the wall. Not hard enough to cause him to dispel, but enough to make his head hurt. And not only that. Dansu knew of the Kyuubi attack. And planned for his father's death? With the Kyuubi under someone's control? His form shook so violently with rage he nearly caused himself to dispel. Fu gasped when dual-colored eyes pinned him with killing intent so palpable he nearly choked. "Alright, forget taking my time." Naruto walked up to stand in front of the man. "I need you to start talking. Now." Naruto flexed his fingers before he held up his thumb and index finger. A blue flume appeared on each digit, causing the dark room to illuminate in its light. Knowing what he planned, Fu immediately tried to bite off his own tongue, but a hand pressed against his forehead and a seal appeared. His body failed to obey his commands and he found himself paralyzed. Naruto forced his mouth open and tilted his head back. He grabbed the man's tongue, holding the muscle out, focusing on the small seal that materialized. Fu could do nothing but scream as the two flaming fingers pressed against his tongue and began to burn away the curse seal that Dansu had placed. Despite having no emotion, his eyes burned with an unfamiliar wetness as the excruciating pain reached a new heights as Naruto focused more chakra to his fingers and the flames grew in size, lighting up the darkness in a blinding light. Fu screamed from the back of his throat. After what felt like an eternity, the pain subsided as Naruto cut off the flow of chakra to his fingers and removed his digits. He removed the hand holding the man's head, allowing it to drop lifelessly to his side. The root agent was left heaving, his mouth hanging open, tears flowing down his eyes as his mouth steamed. Naruto flexed his fingers, allowing the steaming digits to cool before he dusted his hands off. "Right. I need you to focus on me, Fu." The man was too busy heaving in pain to focus on Naruto's words. "Slick." Fu lurched harshly and his back arched as far as the chair could allow him as his scream penetrated the walls around him. His heaving form focused on the kunai buried to the hilt in his knee. So deep was the knife that it had went straight through the bone and cartilage jutting out on the other side of his knee pit. Naruto tightened the grip on the handle, letting the blade slide deeper, ignoring the way the man screamed. He roughly slapped the man, seeing him thrash around. "Focus. Hey! I need you focus right here." He pointed to his face, jamming the knife down, and Fu's teary eyes finally turned to him. "Good." He raised himself to his full height, leaving the knife embedded into the man as he glared at him. "I only have enough chakra to sustain me for a few hours. Roughly 9 to be exact." He pointed to the walls. "But like I mentioned, because of those seals, in here is my very own Tsukiyomi." Fu's broken eyes turned to the walls and he saw the ethereal glow of elaborate seal designs on the surrounding walls. Each one of those 8 seals alter the perception of time, by about, give or take, 7 or 8 hours. He trailed off. "You can do the math?" The question was rhetorical as he gathered chakra to his eye, the seals glowing at the excessive amounts of chakra. "Now let's see how long it takes before your mind breaks." Fu screamed as Naruto invaded the deepest corners of his mind. Chapter 9, The Root of All Fears 2. Fu Yamanaka was considered to be the best that Root had to offer. His mission record was that of utter perfection, never having failed a task and accepting even the most difficult of orders with unwavering loyalty and obedience. He was considered Dansu's most powerful tool. The very instrument of his will, more skilled in nature than his insect-wielding Aburame partner. There wasn't a single shinobi in Root that could match his prowess. Dansu had even openly stated to him that if he should die, the leadership of the Foundation would rest on his shoulders, having already been hand-picked as his one true successor. And Dansu made his choice wisely. Fu was a natural leader. His right-hand man that was armed with the responsibility of his very own protection. Fu could almost be considered the perfect son that he would never have. Fu took all of this in with humble respect and only responded with serving his master all the more fiercely. That's why he felt confident when he accepted his dangerous task of tailing one Namikaze Naruto, the Yellow Fang of Konoha. Listed as an S-class in every bingo book on the continent. Skills so dangerous Iwagakure had given him an avoid-at-all-cost warning. There was only one other shinobi that had struck such fear in Iwa. As the saying goes, like father, like son. Fu ignored all that, favoring to classify Naruto as just another mission. His mission was his life. He never failed. So that's why he favored to follow him in broad daylight where his presence would be least expected. His sister had informed him that the man tended to lower his guard whenever he was in the village. He would be easy prey, like a mouse ignorant to the hawk that circled high above. But his sister had made a grave miscalculation. After years of service and experience, one didn't reach the level Naruto was at by relaxing whenever they reached the safety of a village. Many would call it paranoia, but those having achieved the rank of S-class would call it instinct. Always remain vigilant. Fu would never have guessed that he would be utterly reduced to nothing, knocked around like a play toy. The man toyed with him, seeing his worth, before knocking him so hard he felt his spine rattle. Never in his life had he felt so outclassed. He knew he was fighting a losing battle and just tried to end it all by falling into that infinite void, but even then, the man was just too fast. He was finished. Plain and simple. He knew his fate was sealed as his mind was ripped open and had his thoughts dissected like in science experiment. His skills that he had trained years to develop and master, a body worked tirelessly till it was numb to pain and a mind so deeply guarded that not even his consciousness had a voice, was all worthless. Utterly and despicably worthless. Fu had already lost his sense of speech by the second day and his fine motor skills all but dulled, leaving him with nothing to do other than groan as Naruto continued his mental dissection, ruthlessly cutting through his mind like a scalpel. He felt his body going numb, indicating soon that he would lose all feeling. Naruto blinked, cutting off the mental torture, and Fu's head dropped lifelessly to the side. His mouth was wide open, a river of drool endlessly pouring out, and his bloodshot eyes were wide open. They hadn't blinked since he had started his genjutsu. That was 72 hours ago. Naruto nearly collapsed as he felt the last of his reserves dip. He was breathing hard and his eye was twitching badly. Genjutsu was seriously not his forte. Despite his tired form, inside his mind was racing a mile a minute. A raw, burning anger fueled him to just kill the mentally scared man right where he was. But he relented. He would piece his mind back together, then force the man to watch as that horse suffered the same fate. Only he would take his time with her. She was root right? He wanted to see if she was more resilient to pain than her brother. He sighed deeply and tried to calm his racing heart. His limbs felt like they weighed a ton and he was forcing himself to try and not dispel. What had felt like 3 days in this room was in reality really a second in the real world. It had taken its toll on him, but it was worth it in the end. He had learned all he needed to know. Oh, he had learned all about what Dansu was planning and how Riho was the key he needed, or should he say surrogate he needed to get his hands on his genes. Fu was Dansu's right hand, his so-called best of the best. His status had entitled him to some of the man's darkest secrets. Secrets that were all revealed to his eyes and played like a projector in a cinema. The stunning realization of it all had made his body go numb at first. He was heartbroken. Confused. Hurt. Betrayed. But most of all he felt stupid. Stupid enough to allow for something like this to happen to him of all people. He had to hand it to the man for using a woman, a seductress, to get him to lower the carefully guarded barriers he had maintained for years and play him like a violin while slowly, ever so slowly cutting the strings. She had been playing him from the start, tying him to a leash and leading him along like a dog going for a walk. Everything that he had shared with her was reported to her brother, who then reported straight to Dansu. Everything from their intimate moments, his lifestyle, his jutsu, his friends, his deceased family, his Genin, even his conversations. Everything was reported. Both Fu and Riho would communicate telepathically from the seals connected to their tongues, one that was painstakingly hidden on her so not even his Sharingan would detect it. The man had taken to remove her first seal, which by Fu's memories was torturous enough, and then painfully extended her tongue to its unnatural full length and place another seal on her where he would never see it. It had only showed him the great lengths Dansu took to make sure his personally horror was secured tight. He deduced her new title fit her nicely as he wasn't the first of her many targets. Fu's mind had showed him that she had been all over the place. Kumo, Kiri, Suna, even Iwa fell slave to her charms. The thought of it all left him empty inside. Then he felt a burn. Like a flickering flame slowly growing in strength. The burning sensation was coming from the back of his head. More specifically, it felt like the left side of his brain was on fire. His Sharingan burned to the point it became uncomfortable and he was forced to cover it as the marginal drain that he usually didn't even notice, even when he was exhausted, now began to drain at an alarming rate. He lowered his shaky arm from his headband and gazed on quietly in stony silence. He was about to disperse. But he wanted the original to be present. His skill in spacetime ninjutsu was subpar at the moment, but he had been studying whenever he had time and his efforts had been rewarded as he gotten the Thunder God Jutsu just shy the level of its original creator. Using it like his father was out of the question. Holding up the ram sign, he focused his chakra to the Thunder God marker on his back, the same one that his father had placed on him as a child, and sent the last of his chakra through it, sending a signal through space and time to contact his original. Naruto couldn't be prouder of Team 7. Each one of them had come a long way from the first day they had all met in that classroom. As he dodged Sakura's lethal strikes, redirected Sasuke's fire with some wind, and parried Konohamaru's blows, he internally smiled despite them trying to kill him in another one of their training sessions. He had thought that the SD test would tarnish their young minds and make them reject the true harshness of shinobi life. He would never have expected them to bounce back so quickly, taking the reality of it all like true solders. It was relieving. Even seasoned Chunin took weeks to recover, but their young minds only took a night's rest. Maybe he had underestimated their minds, but he would never again take them for granted and say there wasn't anything they couldn't handle. Mostly. Kick his ass, guys. He ignored Riha's shout of encouragement as he blocked off their furious Taiyastu combination. They were getting better. He could no longer just easily walk over them like he used to. Now he had to actually put in a bit of effort to knock them into unconsciousness. But only a little. Sasuke had his Sharingan blazing as he palmed two kunai and tried to cut him to pieces. Ever since he had completed his dojutsu, his strikes had become more precise and movements more fluid. His eyes could predict movements, not allowing for Naruto to dance around him like the old days. Konohamaru was a different story. The boy was fierce. He knew of the Sarutobi talent, but this little monkey was trying to bash his face in. And Sakura. His sweet, innocent little Pinky-chan that used to hate even getting sweat on her form, now had the most vicious scowl he had ever seen on the girl as she kept up with both boys, trying to land a glowing fist on his form. He carefully kept out of her reach. He would say that she had improved the most out of the entire team. She was no longer the weak link that seemed to weigh down her two teammates. She now stood shoulder to shoulder, a proud kunoichi that earned her place as soldier. She had long since taken her shinobi life seriously ever since their conversation during the bell test. After one of their training sessions in the past, she had come to him personally for one-on-one training to try and get her up to her teammates' levels. At first he was hesitant, knowing that personal training for her would be extremely demanding if she wanted to keep up with her two teammates. But that look of determination and will manifested itself, something the boys had teasingly dubbed to her our inner Sakura, showing him she was ready for whatever he threw her way. Was he ever in for a surprise? During what Sakura would dub torture, he would mercilessly knock her around till the point she passed out or his knuckles hurt from impacting against her forehead. As many times he would knock her down, she would just get straight back up. He had to hand to the girl, she sure knew how to take a punch. Sometimes he wouldn't touch her and just playfully keep out of her to the point she would get frustrated that she could never even touch him. And then that inner persona would manifest itself and she would become angry. Really angry. So angry to the point she would give a cry of righteous female fury and charge him like a reckless bull. Of course he would thrash her into the ground at being so reckless and lecture her over losing her composure. A shinobi should never lose composure. But one day, when the inner persona blazed, he teased her about how he took a shit the same color as her hair. She managed to land a glancing blow. Now, normally he could swat away her punches like harmless flies, but decided to give her a free shot. He didn't expect to double over and be sent flying. Her punch hurt. A lot. He had to reveal his Sharingan to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. Yes, sweet little Pinky-chan had sent him flying with a nasty right hook to the stomach. Naruto couldn't believe it at first. Heck, he was sure if he told the boys they would either laugh at him for telling a good joke or try and get him to sign in to the nearest mental institution. But his Sharingan entitled him to see what others could not. Every time her fist would impact against his body, she would unconsciously build up and release her chakra with every strike she landed. In all his life he had only seen such a form of chakra control in one other woman. And at the time, she was trying to punch his head off as he ran for dear life with her prized necklace. His disbelief was confirmed as he instructed her to punch a large boulder the exact same way she had struck him. The boulder had shattered under her blow. He had almost started hyperventilating at the realization of it all and nearly crushed the girl to death from hugging her. Just to brag, he had halted training that day and transported her to Team Guy's training ground, where the Green Beast was training his young clone for a private lesson. How he loved that boy like a son. Sakura was confused. One second Naruto was hugging her, next he was talking to a man dressed in a green leotard with the largest eyebrows she had ever seen. And to make things even more awkward was the smaller clone of the man that had introduced himself as Rock Lee and pestered her to be his girlfriend. She had refused, trying to catch the whispered words of their senseis. She saw Naruto throw his hands wide in the air gesturing to her before he smashed a fist into his open palm, and green-wearing man's mouth dropped open. Naruto nodded fervently, mimicking the boulder that she had broken apart with a shudder, and the man's thick eyebrows reached his hairline before he started shouting words about youth. Before she could blink he was standing before her introducing himself. He had only managed to say his name before Naruto blocked his view, mouthing words of "she's mine." And Guy-sensei started crying, saying it wasn't fair. Naruto remained unmoved, only responding with words that confused her to no end. "I'm sorry, Guy. But I will be the only one to light her flames of youth." What a strange day that had been. But she never regretted a moment of it, since Naruto had increased her training, focusing on taijutsu that became her strong feat. He had explained to her that she was unknowingly using the beginning stages of a certain Sanin's monstrous strength. To complement her style, he taught her a modified version of the rough fist style that focused on key elements to the technique while retaining grace. Naruto grinned as he remembered it all, glancing at Sakura as she tried to land one of her punches. "Gah! Just stay still, sensei. I promise I won't hurt you too bad." Naruto smiled as danced around her. "Aw, look boys, Pinky-chan is upset," he mocked. The boys didn't react to his words, only continuing their relentless assault, their scowls matching Sakura's as they had yet to even touch him. Curse him and his speed. Besides Sakura, a red-eyed Kanamaru blitzed forward trying to surprise him in burst of speed but was always knocked back. He had taken to use the Kyuubi chakra around them after their team meeting. Yo! Sasuke rolled his eyes as he leaned against the stump behind him. Despite his expression, he couldn't hide his grin. You're both late. Beside him, Sakura hopped off the tree stump she was resting on, grinning at the sight of the duo. Hello Naruto-sensei, Konohamaru-kun. Her eyes lit shined at the sight of the female behind the pair. Riha-san. The female smiled at the young girl. Hello my dear. When blue eyes turned to him, Sasuke blushed. Hi Sasuke-kun. He nodded at her, holding up a hand in a wordless greeting. Naruto smiled as Konohamaru ran up to the two and bumped knuckles with Sasuke and accepted a hug from Sakura. Konohamaru tilted his head at the girl before gesturing to her hair. You cut your hair? Indeed, the once long hair that had reached her back was now mid-length, only scraping past her neck. She had accentuated it by putting it into a ponytail. Even adjustments were made to her clothes. She was still wearing her familiar pink dress, only no, it was shorter, resembling a skirt held together at the sides with some straps. Sakura rubbed her hair nervously. It looks okay, right? It was getting in the way when she trained and was becoming too much of a hassle. She had long since taken her shinobi life more seriously ever since Naruto's words during the test and decided it was time for some changes. And it showed. She was faster, stronger and more overall meeting the standards of an acceptable kunoichi. Konohamaru grinned. Hell yeah, it looks really good. She smiled sweetly at him before she turned to Sasuke. Feeling two pair of eyes on him, Sasuke grunted before a small smile formed on his face. It's nice. Konohamaru just grinned stupidly and Sasuke narrowed his eyes. What? He demanded. Nothing. Konohamaru replied teasingly. It's just that Mr. Big Bad Uchiha has lost his touch. Sasuke's eyes narrowed to slits. You calling me soft? He whispered dangerously. Konohamaru's grin became so wide his eyes closed. As a marshmallow. The Uchiha snarled and speared Konohamaru to the ground. Both boys began to roll across the training field, hailing insults, all the while biting and scratching. Sakura growled at their forms. Why do the both of you always have to act like idiots? Don't you see you're embarrassing Sensei? Both boys topped, glancing at each other, then at Sakura and back again before they nodded. Before Sakura could react, she was tackled and a three-way battle ensued as they all began to fight. Naruto sighed painfully, glancing up at the sky. Beside him, Riha giggled watching as Sakura smashed both boys' head together. Oh my, what a rowdy bunch they are. He didn't reply, only extending his hand and letting a golden chain slither out and save the boys from their losing battle. Sakura could actually hurt the two if he didn't intervene. When they were all restrained, he slowly walked closer to stand in front of them. Can we save the fighting for later? He trailed off, seeing both boys tremble as Sakura ran her thumb slowly across her neck and pointed at the two of them. Sakura. She removed her glare and smiled sweetly up at him. Naruto shook his head. Right. As I was saying, can you all save the fighting for later? I want to talk to everyone about the test. He knew that they all probably talked to the grief counselors that were present, but he wanted to hear from each of them personally. Seeing their nods, he retracted his chain before sitting down in front of them, Riha taking her time to sit beside him. He turned his eyes to Sasuke. How are you feeling? Sasuke shrugged, avoiding his gaze. Okay, I guess. I didn't really get much sleep that night. Naruto nodded, expecting that type of answer. Did you feel regretful? Or maybe sad that you had to take an innocent life? Sasuke met his gaze.
I couldn't fail.
Failure would mean I'd never be able to see you guys again. I did what I had to do, right? Naruto stared at him before he nodded. Yeah, you did. He turned his eyes to Sakura, smiling inwardly when she didn't shy away from his gaze. What about you, Sakura? She fisted her hands into her dress. I couldn't really eat anything last night without trying not to puke. She bit her lip. I didn't get much sleep either. Not that it mattered anyway. It felt strange at first, but then after a while it settles. It's like my body and mind are used to it. She finished with a whisper. Naruto nodded at her before he turned to Konohamaru. We already talked, but do you want to tell them what we discussed before we got here? The Genin nodded slowly before he faced his two teammates. I have something to tell you guys. Seeing their curious gazes, he took a deep breath. It was now or never.
I am the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi.
Silence. Naruto stared at the two and took in their reactions. Sasuke curiously just seemed content, smirking as if he already knew such a secret. Sakura meanwhile had her brow scrunched up in confusion before her eyes widened. Jerk. She thumped Sasuke on the head. That's what you meant when you said Jinchuriki. Naruto raised a brow and Konohamaru gawked. Riha tried not to giggle as Sasuke rubbed his head glaring at her. It's not my fault you were an oblivious moron. For the so-called smartest kunoichi you're pretty slow. I mean come on, how obvious was it when, damn it, stop hitting me Sakura. Sasuke tried to block her hands but she managed to pin him and wrap her fingers around his throat. Ack. Her attempt at strangling was halted by a throat clear. So both of you already know? Konohamaru's confusion was evident in his voice as he stared at the two of them dumbly. Sakura nodded, ignoring the way Sasuke was prying at her hands. Well, I didn't know, but I guess Sasuke-kun already did. Remember the day of our test? He nodded. Well, right after you stormed off, Duck Butt here asked me if I knew you were a Jinchuriki. I kind of slowly figured it out after that. She smiled at Sweet Him before she frowned. Is that why you acted so arrogant? Were you in the academy? To hide your status? Konohamaru slowly nodded. Yeah, I was ordered to take up a fake persona. He trailed off, pointing to Sasuke. Ah, Sakura-chan? Seeing his finger, she glanced down at Sasuke and hastily let go of his neck, seeing his face turning blue. Sasuke immediately began to heave, greedily sucking in the much-needed oxygen. Sakura got off of him, allowing him to sit up, as he placed a hand over his chest trying to calm his racing heart. His murderous gaze turned to her. Bitch. Were you trying to kill me? Sakura smiled sweetly before she roughly grabbed his hair, ignoring his cry of pain. What was that, Sasuke-kun? You love your Sakura-chan? Ah fuck, why? She pinched his cheek till he cried out. Now Duck Butt-kun, don't be rude. She shoved him hard enough to make his back hit the ground. When green eyes turned to him, Konohamaru failed to hide his flinch. You were saying Konohamaru-kun. Alright. I was ordered to take up a fake persona, so that's the reason why I acted like that. The idiot you knew through the academy isn't the real me. Sasuke sat up, brushing himself off, briefly glaring at Sakura before he focused his attention on the Genin. So what's the real you? Konohamaru sighed painfully before his eyes grew distant. A weapon. He elaborated, seeing their confusion. After the Kyuubi attack, Konoha was weakened. Other countries were monitoring the leaf and there was almost a cold war between Kumagakure. So they decided that I was to become that weapon. The ace that Konoha needed. He fisted his hands on his pants tightly. When I turned 7, I was taken from my home and put into a training facility. From there I was subjected to 2 years of intense physical and mental training to condition my body. When I turned 9, my real test began. Sasuke narrowed his eyes. To control the beast inside of you? Beside him, Sakura gasped in shock. Konohamaru nodded grimly before he continued. Yeah, they wanted for me to gain control of the Kyuubi's chakra. But for some reason my body couldn't handle the corrosive chakra and I suffered a great deal of pain when I used it. For the first time in my life, I failed. He slowly lifted his shirt, revealing his navel. He focused his chakra and seal appeared before their eyes. This is the 8 trigram seal. Both Sakura and Sasuke leaned forward to get a better look, and even Naruto looked on in interest. Consisting of 2 4-symbol seals joined together circling around a spiral, the 8 trigram seal stood as a pinnacle of genius. Naruto had to marvel at his utterly perfect design and briefly exposed his Sharingan to see the many lines flowing with chakra. Behind it, a veil of burning red was slowly mixing with Konohamaru's own chakra network. Wow! It looks so beautiful. She stretched her hand forward and traced the design lightly. To think this contains something like the Kyuubi. Konohamaru laughed nervously as his cheeks burned. Ah, Sakura-chan, that tickles. She retracted her hand, smiling sheepishly. He lowered his shirt before he nodded at his 2 teammates. They all stared at each other awkwardly, each trying to think of something to say. Konohamaru rubbed the back of his head nervously before he cleared his throat. So, I hope you guys don't view me differently. He froze as Sakura hugged him tightly. Idiot, she whispered into his hair. How could you ever think we would view you any differently? Konohamaru slumped against her in relief and accepted the hug. Sasuke gave him pat on the back, content to let Sakura do all the hugging. Sakura frowned, and before Sasuke could react, he was shoved into their embrace. You guys are the best. Konohamaru whispered quietly. Naruto and Riha had been watching the entire exchange quietly before they shared a small glance. Naruto raised his eyebrow, seeing her teary expression, and wordlessly reached into his pouch and handed her a tissue. Riha blew her nose. Oh. That was so beautiful. Naruto rolled his eye before he stood up, stretching, gaining their attention. That was truly heartwarming. But we're here for training, remember? They nodded, separating from their hug, and stood on their feet, immediately readying themselves. Naruto grinned before he gestured for Riha to take cover. You might want to find a comfy branch so you can enjoy the show. She nodded before she kissed his cheek and winked at the trio. Kick his butt, guys. She disappeared in a body flicker, appearing high in a tree branch, having a good view of the entire training field. Naruto, I smiled. Alright kiddies, you remember the rules. Let's see how long you last, shall we? Naruto smiled fondly at the memory before he decided that he had been on the defensive enough and it was time for some offense. He flipped forward over them, at the same time grabbing both Sasuke and Konohamaru by their shirts and using his momentum to throw them through the air. He landed gracefully but had to immediately block the strike from Sakura that was aimed for his head. Sakura knew that her strikes could now break bones, but the only sign of pain from her sensei was the tightening of his eye before he returned the blow, knocking the air out of her before he tossed her through the air like her teammates. Both boys were getting to their feet before they were knocked to the ground by a pink blur. Groaning, they all slowly sat up, wincing as they tried to make their heads stop spinning. Naruto was quietly observing them, his form completely relaxed, having not a speck of dirt anywhere. On the other hand, they were covered in dirt and sweating, looking like they had just been dragged through mud. Come on guys. I'm not even breaking a sweat here. He drawled lazily. Konohamaru grit his teeth. Well, screw you for being so strong. It was all but impossible to try beat him. All their tactics, all their combinations proved worthless against him. What was even worse was that he openly toyed with them before knocking them into the dirt. Sasuke stayed quiet on the ground. He would admit that he had improved. Heck, they all had improved by leaps and bounds over their short period of time together. He hadn't felt stronger. Naruto was an excellent teacher, providing lessons that he soaked up like a sponge in water. He was blunt, unforgiving, held nothing back in training, and for that Sasuke absolutely appreciated the man. But the gap between them seemed to grow wider each day and showed no signs of closing. He would never admit it aloud, but he knew for certain that Naruto was stronger than Itachi. He could feel it in his bones, like a voice silently whispering in the back of his head that this man would lead him to his revenge. He knew if he could at least match his sensei, then he would be ready for Itachi. Despite everything, that desire for revenge still fueled his young mind. And by Kami he needed more training. Every loss just added fuel to his fire. Naruto slowly shook his head. That's it for today, guys. You all need dash. No. All eyes turned to Sasuke as he struggled to his feet. He grit his teeth as he forced himself to stand before leveling Naruto a look of raw determination. His Sharingan blazed in his eye, the tomos rapidly beginning to spin. No. He reiterated. I'm not finished yet. His courage seemed to fuel his teammates, and Sakura grinned despite her pain and pushed herself to stand beside him. Seeing her struggle, Sasuke offered her a hand and helped her to her feet. Hell yeah. She grounded out. I won't quit. Konohamaru watched his teammates in awe before his jaw locked and his eyes flashed red. He tightened his headband around his head and stood shakily on his feet. Naruto saw the feral grin the boy gave him as he thumped a fist against his chest. Quitting is something I don't do. As much as you knock us down, we'll get back up. Naruto's eyebrow reached his hairline as he watched the three of them stand on shaken legs. He could feel that their chakra reserves were low and their bodies must have been aching from his hits. They even looked like they were about to pass out. Despite it all, their determination shined in their eyes and the desire to win outlasted their pain. Soon we'll be strong, stronger than even you. Konohamaru thrusted his fist forwards and beside him Sasuke and Sakura grinned. That's a promise. They echoed. Naruto stared at one face from another before he closed his eye and let a small smile form underneath his mask. Team 7. They were a special bunch. He remembered his comment to Dansu long ago, talking about the hidden potential that this generation had. The village leaders underestimated these kids, but Naruto saw what others could not. Who knows? Maybe he was training the second generation Sannin. He smirked at the thought before he slowly lifted his hand to his headband. Sannin or not, it was time for them to learn defeat. So you guys want to be stronger than me, eh? He allowed his Sharingan to spin slowly in his eye. The trio took a hesitant step back as heavy pressure filled the air. A chilling breeze blew through the training grounds, sending a tingling sensation through their spines, before that overbearing pressure suddenly began to increase to the point it became hard to breathe. Naruto's chakra rapidly began to spike at enormous levels. His form became outlined in a blue glow and the ground began to rumble. Ground and rocks in the nearby vicinity began to levitate in the air before disintegrating under the enormous pressure. The blue outline around him became brighter and brighter until it enveloped his form. Behind him his long ponytail danced in the wind and his Sharingan began to glow as his raw, powerful chakra saturated the air. If you want to be stronger than I am, you have to realize the differences in our power. His chakra pulsed out and they were knocked off their feet as lightning sparked around his form and the breeze blowing through the air suddenly turned into a gale force. Know now what that difference is. His already enormous chakra levels began to grow again and the landscape began to tear itself apart. The glow around Naruto became bright enough to the point it became blinding. A hurricane wind blew through the training grounds and the trio had to attach their bodies to ground with chakra lest be blown away. Trees surrounding the area were upheaved from their roots thrown into the wind. The ground heaved under the pressure, leveling large chunks of landscape before suffering the same fate. The sky seemed to darken and fill with ominous clouds as lighting suddenly shot out in all directions. The trio held onto the ground for dear life. This was unreal. They had never felt so much chakra in their lifetime. Even Konohamaru had been subjected to the old man's chakra before and saw how it had damaged the landscape. But he never had felt anything like this. This was unbelievable. He managed to lift his head up off the ground, using his enhanced strength that the Kyuubi's chakra provided him. The wind rippled the skin on his face and his eyes burned from the stinging sensation of the wind. Both his eyes opened wide at the sight that he saw. Naruto's form was completely shrouded by the blue glow, only giving his form a black outline. Lighting continued to spark around him and the wind danced alongside of him. Beneath his feet the ground was sunken, a mini crater forming under the enormous pressure. But all of that didn't cause his heart to stop. His Sharingan glowed red, seeming to highlight against his dark outline. With the shroud covering his form, the only thing he could see was the burning red orb that stared right back at him. Raw killing intent hit his form and he felt the beast inside of him begin to stir. He had never felt so afraid in his life. In the depth of his mindscape, hidden deep in the murky waters behind his cage, the Kyuubi opened its eyes. It swam up to the cage, willing the dark waters to clear to their crystal blue, revealing the pitch black sky overhead. The once slowly drifting clouds were rapidly moving across the sky and the red of the moon seemed to glow with the color of blood as it began to bleed the dark sky into an ominous red. The beast gripped the bars of the cage with his hands and squeezed. The seemingly unbreakable bars dented ever so slightly. Behind his cage the Kyuubi smirked. Naruto. Yes, he is the one. He had felt it the moment he had laid eyes on him. For his chakra to even affect the environment of the boy's mindscape, he was the true descendant. He had felt chakra like that in only one human in his entire existence. Tilting its large head back and opening its enormous jaws, the Kyuubi's roar echoed through the empty mindscape. In the real world, Konohamaru felt his stomach begin to burn. Whisker marks formed on his face and his features became more feral as his body started to react to Naruto's chakra. Seeing this, the powerful Jounin halted his display of power and the hurricane's wind slowly died down and the darkened sky began to clear. His enormous chakra levels lowered to their normal suppressed levels and the outline around his form vanished. Konohamaru felt the burn cease and he blinked as his features returned back to normal. The rest of Team 7 slowly lifted their heads from the ground and glanced at blank-faced Naruto, then to the surrounding landscape. Their jaws dropped open. Their training ground was ruined. The surrounding trees were bent at unnatural angles, some even occasionally crashing to the ground. The landscape was leveled, scarred to pieces from the rapid lighting strikes, and debris of wood was everywhere. 3 sets of eyes stared wide-eyed at Naruto. He shoved his hands in his pockets and gave them an eye smile. "Ma, I think I went a little overboard." Before anyone could say anything, they heard retching noises and saw Riha stumble out of the forest, dropping to her knees, looking relatively unharmed save for puking up her insides. Naruto was immediately by her side in a flash, Team 7 slowly trailing behind, as he tried to help the woman to her feet. "Riha-chan, what's wrong?" Naruto trailed off as he instantly felt incoming chakra signatures, and in the blink of an eye 2 combat-ready platoons of Onbu appeared, followed by a squad of heavily armed military police. Naruto held a hand up. "Oh, my bad guys. Just a false alarm." A familiar cat-faced Onbu marched up to him and before Naruto could react he was smacked upside the head. For the second time that day, 3 jaws dropped open. "Naruto-senpai. You put the whole village on a level 1 alert. What was that again?" "Oh right, the entire military would mobilize and the village would prepare for a skirmish. Civilians were rushed to their homes and rapid deployment teams would be sent out to find and eliminate the threat and blah, blah. The entire country probably felt your chakra." Naruto looked like a kick puppy as he rubbed his head tenderly. "Geez, Cat-chan, I was just giving a little demonstration dash." "Your Genin were present?" She cut him off. "What did you want to do, kill them?" Naruto I smiled. No, but the little buggers said they wanted to be stronger than me, so I just showed them the measuring ladder. By the looks of their faces they knew it would be a very, very long climb. Underneath her mask Yugao sighed. At times, Naruto was worse than Kakashi. She turned to the contingent of soldiers waving them off. False alarm. Many of the shinobi lost their tense forms and relaxed, but some Anbu stayed guarded around Naruto, deciding to give him a wide berth. She rolled her eyes before she fingered the radio in her ear, relaying orders directly to the Jounin commander. This is Anbu Squad Leader Cat, of Alpha Squad. Reporting that Level 1 alert can be lowered. I repeat, Level 1 alert can be lowered. False alarm. At the affirmative reply over the radio, she released the device and turned her attention back to Naruto. Naruto, I smiled. My apologies for the alarm. But I need a medic ASAP. He pointed at the seated blonde beside him. Yugao nodded and gestured to one of the female's officers. The brown-haired woman nodded in acceptance before kneeling before the panting blonde and running glowing green hands across her form. Okay, hun, what's the problem? Riha was breathing hard. My stomach. Heave. Hurts. Her skin had taken on a pale hue and perspiration coated her brow. The medic hummed. My diagnostics are telling me you're physically unharmed, but I'm getting nausea build up in your stomach and your nerves are going haywire. Intense preparation and alleviated heartbeat shows signs of extreme. She trailed off, locking gazes with Riha. All eyes turned to Naruto, who was looking at her carefully. His Sharingan spun slowly in his eye, allowing him to see her chakra fluctuating wildly and her increased heart rate. He shifted his head as he saw the medic's chakra become disturbed for a split second before it vanished as quickly. What happened just now? The medic allowed her soothing chakra to calm the woman. Breathe slowly, please. Your heart rate is beating too fast. Any faster and you'll go into shock. Riha nodded slowly and began to calm her tense form. Soon enough her breathing calmed and her heart rate lowered. Over the top of the medic's head she caught Naruto's eyes and offered him a small smile. He didn't return it. That heart rate and tense posture didn't just come out of the blue. Before his little show of force, he had felt her chakra start to go haywire. He had thought at first it had been shock, but after he had finished he still felt her chakra fluctuating alarmingly. Almost like she was afraid. Of what? Had he scared her? Made her so frightened to the point she started vomiting? Something wasn't right. Naruto-kun. Hearing the soft whisper, Naruto turned to the cat-masked Anbu before slowly following her as she led him away from the group. Finally having some privacy, Yugao addressed him personally. Geez, Naruto-kun, not only did you scare my squad but your own girlfriend too. What are you, some type of sadist? She joked. Naruto chuckled. I'm really sorry about the alarm. He offered sincerely. Yugao smiled underneath her mask. Yeah, you made the higher-ups nearly shit themselves. People thought a tailed beast was attacking from all that chakra. They both laughed quietly before Yugao frowned under her mask. Using his tall form to block any onlooker's line of sight, she took off her mask partially, leaving it hanging off the side of her face. Naruto raised an eyebrow as dark eyes stared up at him seriously. Are the rumors true about you and the Hokage? Ah. So he would guess that there was a mole in the Anbu force for such sensitive information to leak. He knew for certain the old man wouldn't let what happened that night to spread out. The only person Naruto had told was Riha, but he trusted her. Right? Rumors in any hidden village tended to spread faster than wildfires, and before he knew it the whole military was gossiping about how the Yellow Fang had taken out an entire Anbu force and attacked the Hokage. Which was untrue. Partially. Naruto sighed. What did you hear? That you cut through the Anbu guard platoon like knife through butter and broke the Hokage's jaw, which is all untrue. Right, Naruto-kun? When he didn't respond, her eyes grew wide. Tell me it isn't true, Naruto. Naruto slowly shook his head. I'm sorry, but it is. Yugao recoiled slightly before her eyes reflected anguish. What are you doing, Naruto? Why? Why do this? You can be put to death for Kami's sake. If anything ever happened to him, she would never forgive herself. She knew he was a grown man, but the bonds their Anbu team had formed was for life. Plus she made a promise long ago to watch over him. She almost took a step back from the look in his eye. The old man can do nothing. He can't even sue me even if he wanted to. Yugao looked at him in confusion. What happened? Naruto sighed. I can't tell you. At least not here. The less people knew the better. Yugao was someone he would trust with his life. She helped raise him beside Kakashi during his Anbu days. But he had to at least show her what she was dealing with. Yugao, I'll tell you everything when we meet. But I have to know right now, that I can trust you. Her eyes narrowed in anger and underlying hurt. What? You questioning my trust, Naru? She went still as her eyes connected with his Sharingan and a mental conversation took place in the span of a second. Her eyes widened at him and she would have lost her footing if it wasn't for the hands that wrapped around her waist. Can I trust you, Yugao? She saw the silent plea in his eyes and hesitated before nodding slowly. Naruto nearly sagged in relief and pressed a kiss against her forehead. Thank you, Yugao-chan. She smiled at him before she hugged him tightly. You already know I'll stand by your side, Naruto. Captain. The shout caused the two to split apart and Yugao had her mask on in a flash as she turned her attention to her subordinate. Command wants us to report back to HQ. She nodded in acceptance. Roger that. She cleared her throat before beginning to bark out orders. Okay everyone, you heard the man. Back to HQ. The contingent of shinobi began to disperse. The medical officer gave Riha a few whispered words before disappearing as well till only Yugao remained. The female Anbu watched quietly as the blonde woman was fussed over her by the Genin. So that's the girl who stole your heart? Naruto kept his gaze on Riha as Sakura tried to smooth out her hair. Yeah. What's her name? Riha. Underneath her mask, Yugao frowned. Riha. Where have I heard that name before? Naruto glanced at the cat-masked Anbu before turning his attention back to the blonde. Everyone knows her. If anyone knew him then they certainly heard of his blonde-haired girlfriend. Yugao slowly shook her head. No, I mean I heard her name somewhere before. She could have sworn one of the Iwa Jounin prisoners at the HQ a few years ago talked about meeting this blonde woman. But the man couldn't remember her face for some reason. Chakra scans to his head showed lingering chakra residue of a certain mind technique indicating that his mind had been partially erased. Whoever she was good. To seduce an A-class Jounin was the work of a professional. But this couldn't be the same girl. Yugao had Naruto's undivided attention. Where? The female Anbu thought about it before she dismissed the memory and waved him off. It's nothing. Probably just confusing her with someone else. Naruto stared at for a few moments before slowly nodding in acceptance. If you say so. Yugao smiled up at him before she nodded to him. I'll see you later, Naruto-senpai. With a flicker of chakra she disappeared before his eyes. A trio of Genin plus Jounin silently walked up to his form. Okay sensei, why in the actual fuck are you so strong? Konohamaru's question pierced the tense silence. I mean holy shit, you nearly killed us from that. Beside him Sasuke nodded, a frown marring his face. So that's your true power, huh? You've been holding back this entire time. He accused with a glare. Sakura poked his chest with a finger. Yeah, even poor Riha-san was affected by that. All eyes turned to the blonde woman. Seeing all the attention on her face flushed. I told you guys I was feeling sick previously. I had nausea from the previous day. The trio laughed at her embarrassment. Why are you lying? Naruto's quiet voice halted their laughter into dead silence. The trio of Genin became wary as he leveled a blank gaze at the woman. They had seen the occasional argument between the two but never seen Naruto look at the woman like that. Ever since I met you, you never showed no signs of nausea or sickness. You always keep your body in perfect shape and occasionally balance your nutrients. Never once had you ever been sick. Yesterday you weren't sick. This morning you weren't sick. The week before that you weren't sick. The trio took a hesitant steps back feeling like they were intruding on a private moment. What's going on, Riha? Naruto's question rang out silently and a set of eyes turned to the blonde woman. She nervously tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Her eyes looked anywhere but his. What? Naruto-kun. She lowered her gaze and mumbled something. Pardon? Naruto inquired. I said you're scaring me. Naruto wasn't the only one to show confusion. His entire team mirrored his expression. Naruto tilted his head at her. I scared you enough to make you start to puke? His sarcasm was evident. You? A seasoned Jounin? Puking under a display of power? He raised an eyebrow as he waited her response. Riha stared at him before she slowly lifted a hand to cover her stomach. I'm sorry. Naruto kept up his stare. For? For lying to you. She slowly lifted her hand giving him a tearful smile. I didn't want to say this in front of everyone so I just told the medic I was having some nausea. Seeing his gaze drift to her stomach and then back up to her face she offered him a careful smile. Team 7 stared in confusion as Naruto suddenly went rigid still. His eyebrows reached his hairline and his didn't drift from her face. Confused out of his mind Sasuke stared at one face to another. What's going on? Riha let her eyes drift from Naruto before staring at Sasuke. What he heard next caused 3 jaws to drop open for the 3rd time that day. I'm pregnant.